Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto was trained by Anko for Chuunin exam finals. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
More than his genin had ever seen him, Kakashi was aloof and unemotional. They gathered around him. Sakura and Sasuke staring at each other while Naruto spoke in a flood of words. Enough, he murmured, but Kakashi-sensei, if there is something pressing that must be brought to my attention immediately, such as the release of the upcoming Ika triage, I plan to spend the next month in Training Ground 37. Inform me there. He said with disdain. Sasuke will be there as well, but the postal service in Fire Country doesn't reach that high in the mountains. Sending love letters will be ineffectual. Sincerely concerned for Sasuke's well-being, Sakura blustered. How are you going to eat? Where will you sleep? There was a growl in the back of Sasuke's throat. Kakashi said, I'm sure we'll get along fine. With ease, Naruto and Sakura immediately translated that into, we're ninja, we can take care of ourselves. Sasuke didn't contribute to the discussion, but it was obvious that he agreed. It's amazing that they were able to read their sensei so well. Both of you are to report to Ebisu-san for training every weekday for the next 3 weeks. He's made time in his schedule to bring your taijutsu up to par, instructed Kakashi. The two of them trudged out into the streets of Konoha after he dismissed them while Naruto stopped across the street and picked up a box of pastries. Sakura took out some ryo and purchased a newspaper to read later, which she tucked into a pocket of her jacket. Naruto shoved the first of the generic deep-fried items into his mouth and asked, What plans do you have, Sakura-chan? I want to go see Ino-chan in the hospital and make sure she's okay. Sakura responded, I wonder if she'll forgive me. You're both kunoichi. This kind of stuff happens, Naruto countered. It's a shame she still made you forfeit, cuz that last thing you did with the shuriken was pretty cool. Sakura gave a shrug. Yeah, I guess not that Sasuke-kun cared, but at least I would have won if it were a real fight anyways. She'll never get past the first round. Asking, how do you figure? Naruto asked. Sakura stated matter-of-factly, well, she only barely beat me, and that was because she got me to forfeit. Neji-san will kick her ass easily. Then Sasuke-kun will kick his ass, and then, well. Although she didn't finish her sentence, it's clear that she didn't think Naruto would make it to the final round. Since he didn't hold it against her. It would be a miracle if he didn't lose within the first 5 minutes, given the opponent. He said, okay, but are you gonna train? Ninjas, like Kakashi and Guy, were distinguished from the so-called elite Chuunin, such as those who watched Ibiki's first exam, by their training. Maybe, Sakura uttered ambivalently. I used to train with Tenten, which is why Ino didn't see that last attack, but she's still in the hospital after that fight with Temari-san. The first thing Naruto did was offer to train with her. He could already see where her technique was lacking and how to fix it. Her hand seals were too sloppy, and her elbows were too low on the blocks. Naruto says, here, this is how you do it. As the Yondaime Hokage's robes cascade over his body, Sakura pays attention, straightens her stance, and changes from a passable, a little ungainly being to a feline being with deadly strength. She sighs and reaches out to trace his jawline with a finger, sweeping it over his newly grown beard. Oh Naruto-kun, she says. Sakura-chan, he says, gazing intently into her jade eyes, which are framed by ironic pink hair. She has never looked more stunning than she does right now as the sun sets over the Naka River's waters, leaning in and slap. Sakura's small handprint appeared on Naruto's face as he rubbed his cheek turning red under her angry expression. He asked sourly, what was that for? You were giggling like Kakashi-sensei. She clarified. Jiraiya's graphic descriptions of tits made Naruto laugh luridly as he bobbed and weaved around all three of them with contemptuous ease, recalling the sparring sessions with their perverted sensei all too well. Naruto shuddered. Thanks, Sakura pondered. I think I might buy a tutor. As her rage subsided, I have the money for it. And Kakashi-sensei's always saying I could have the talent for Genjutsu. Kurenai-sensei might be available, or I could look into the Kurama family. Wait, you can hire someone to teach you? Sakura had a sheepish expression. The practice is sort of frowned on for genin. The village assigns a jonin sensei to genin cells, and jonin are supposed to have skill with taijutsu, genjutsu and ninjutsu. Of course, Gai's sensei can't really teach ninjutsu, and genjutsu isn't in Asuma sensei's repertoire, so nobody follows or enforces that rule. Tenten learned fuinjutsu from a tutor. Naruto almost asked, maybe I should get a private teacher? Sakura gave an inattentive nod. She said, I need to get going. Visiting hours are over in a few minutes. Still gotta get victory rubbed in my face by Ino Pig. Sakura took the newspaper from her pocket and walked away after they both laughed amicably, having somehow mastered the art of reading and walking simultaneously. She read it as she went. Her chakra control and endurance were so great that she occasionally walked across ceilings and up walls without anyone noticing, shocking any onlookers in Naruto's opinion. It was hilarious. He took his dango home and munched on it with the ryo he had earned from Wave Country jingling in his pockets. Naruto descended to the Hokage Tower after a few hours of procrastination. The pay and mission level were raised to a rank following Gado's death and the liberation of a whole coastal economy, primarily because they participated in a battle that should have only involved Zabuza and Kakashi. The ice release wielder was out of Konoha's grasp, thanks to Kakashi, but Haku could be appropriated, whatever that meant. Because it came at the expense of the most devoted ninja Naruto had ever encountered in a desperate man attempting to free his nation. Naruto occasionally viewed the money as corrupt. When Naruto expressed these worries, Kakashi hadn't said much, but he seemed to think that shinobi made a lot of money in this way. Well, he was going to use it if he had the funds. Naruto denied that the villagers feared or hated him, and they never crossed the street when they saw him. Instead, there was always retaliation. They hardly ever chose to spend time with him, and when they did, it was never with nearby kids. The Hokage and the Academy's teachers were the only adults who had a significant impact on his life. The latter was never given much thought by Naruto, which may have contributed to his ongoing mediocrity. You couldn't get better on your own. Whether you liked it or not, you needed someone else to be your apprentice, sparring partner, or teacher. Only masters were able to acquire skill by studying themselves, but even teaching others occasionally provided insight. Naruto knew how the shinobi side of the mission system operated. The D-rank sheets were posted on a bulletin board, adjacent to a filing system for C and B ranks for Genin and Chuunin cells. Only the most large-scale, suicidal operations were permitted to use S rank, and the Hokage himself had to assign or approve A and above. Naruto knew very little about what clients did. The term client was used with varying degrees of respect in the ninja world. While slightly more relaxed ninja occasionally reprimanded them and were generally less courteous, professionals like Kakashi treated them with respect and obeyed their orders during a mission. In any case, the client had final control over the ninja because they were the ones making the payment. The classification of a mission and the amount of money paid determined what they could order. What Naruto was unaware of was that hiring from Konoha required a metric shit ton of paperwork. An elderly woman behind the desk inquired, "How old are ya, honey?" 13, replied Naruto. "Any guardians, or are you emancipated?" "Emancipate?" She let out a sigh. "Do y'all live with any grown-ups?" "Oh no." She produced 30 sheets of paper, each bound with a paperclip, from beneath the desk, particularly after she tossed a pen on top of it. Naruto gawked at it. The secretary said, "Y'all gotta fill this out, 'kay? Then just throw it in the pile and wait for someone to come get it." Naruto brought his first taste of the Hokage job to a nearby table, where he sat down and read the first page in a melancholy manner. Name, age, nationality, and birthplace were all simple. Naruto moaned at the ninja box as he descended past the comparatively short list of requirements for civilians. In addition to filling out his rank, loyalty, and ninja registration number, he also confirmed that he was from Konoha, listed his teammates, past and current teachers, and mission history. He also signed a waiver acknowledging that, as his employer, Konoha had the authority to severely restrict his freedom or have him executed for breaking the law. He signed despite the fact that it was a little repetitive. Naruto glanced up at some of the signs on the wall. After reading 3 pages, there was a warning that trying to cheat or lie to ninja was suicide. It mockingly proposed seppuku as a less painful and bloody substitute. Zuna's rambling and ultimately successful attempt to con them was something Naruto considered. Another said that choosing tutors from the Jonin and Tokubetsu Jonin range was the best option, although the cost was determined by the tutor and the client. Any such mission was automatically a B-rank private instructor, was written as the description beneath the suggested mission rank of B. The Hokage himself appeared near the top of page 28, a copy of page 6 for a different filing system. Naruto continued to fill out the application after Sarutobi Hiruzen materialized behind him in a puff of smoke. "A mission, Naruto-kun? What do you need to hire ninja for?" Murmuring, "Stupid Kakashi sensei," Naruto said. "Stupid Chuunin exams, stupid Gaara, stupid paperwork." The source of Naruto's annoyance was accurately deduced by the Hokage, who shook with silent laughter. Most of the pages needed to purchase ninja services were filled with his messy handwriting, sometimes in triplicate, in order for future generations to review the mission reports and ascertain what went wrong. Konoha liked to maintain an organized record of every mission, although it was hardly ever used. Sarutobi was reluctant to stop the practice, even though he wanted to, because the logs had been so helpful in recent years. He told Naruto, "Being the Hokage means you have to do a lot of this." "Huh? All missions above B rank need to be approved by me. although those aren't as common as C and D ranks, Sarutobi said. Naruto exclaimed, "You have to do this? Every day?" The bright road from Genin to Hokage had suddenly grown gloomy in front of him. 10 minutes of repeating every financial transaction he had with the government, 24 D ranks and an A rank, monthly stipend, had left his brain numb, but doing this repeatedly? Yes, the Sandaime replied, his tone full of boredom. Naruto complained and resumed the agonizing exercise. "Hell," he said, "when I'm Hokage, all of this bullshit will be my assistant's job." Sarutobi said, "If you say so." With knowledge, he signed his name on the pages after waiting for Naruto to complete filing the mission. The actual mission description, which was thrown straight into a basket, was the 7th page with the intention of addressing the remaining ones later. Sarutobi swept them away. "You're hiring a Jonin or Tokubetsu Jonin," he informed Naruto. "In all of Konoha, there are about 80 of those right now. I would say 20 are on missions, and a further 15 have Genin cells. You may need to wait a bit before someone picks your mission up." "Yeah," mumbled Naruto. For 20 minutes, Naruto and a dozen other civilians waited in the waiting room while shinobi came and went. Turning in their assignments and accepting new ones, he observed that the majority of the customers had a refined, affluent appearance. They possessed the appearance of wealthy and influential people who could hire Konoha. In contrast, he felt unclean. Mitarashi Anko waltzed in just as he was beginning to wonder if he would be there for hours and hours before some unknown Jonin would enter and take the mission. It seemed to Naruto that she was there for a specific reason. After her involvement in the Chuunin selection exams ended, the examiner began to flit through the B-rank missions, clearly in need of amusement and money. She read Naruto's file. After grabbing it, her mouth fell open. "All right. Where's the brat offering 800 grand for a month of training?" She led Naruto to the 16th training ground, which was made up of a series of tall wooden poles driven into the ground. They functioned as targets, many of them laced with shuriken and other thrown weapons from previous training sessions, and as tiny platforms for acrobatic practice. Anko gave the dirty boy careful thought. On the one hand, this amount of money would cover her rent for her luxurious apartment, all the alcohol she could consume, and food for months. However, even she harbored some mistrust of the nine-tailed fox's jinchuriki, perhaps hypocritical, given how the village treated her for a large portion of her life. However, Naruto and that mistrust were both well-earned. She yelled, "Where did you get this money? A genin like you has no way of getting this much cash. Did Hokage-sama give it to you?" Naruto dismissed her worry with a wave. "Nah, I got it from Kakashi Sensei. It's part of the bounty we collected on Momochi Zabuza." Recalling, Anko squinted at him. "Yeah, they did say the Demon of the Mist died a while ago," she said. "Never thought it would be a genin team. I assume you killed him? Otherwise Kakashi would never share the bounty, stingy bastard." I didn't kill him," Naruto stated. Telling the truth, he died after fighting a bunch of guys with nothing but a kunai between his teeth. Anko gave him a look. She decided he was probably telling the truth because it was so odd, but she would check with Kakashi later. "Right so, Zabuza Momochi, with a bounty of 40 million ryo on his head and a legendary weapon that requires special training to wield, and your sensei only gave you 800 feet 000 ryo? He actually gave me 3 million and a bit," stated Naruto, "but I'm saving some. I think it was half for the village, 10 million for himself, and then we split the rest." Anko flirtatiously questioned, "Don't you have any more for your brand new sensei?" Ignoring her provocative dress, Naruto shoved her out of his face. "So you'll do it? We'll see about that," blusterily said Anko. "This is a mission, but I haven't taken it yet. I won't touch your money if you aren't worthy of being my apprentice, and all of the Jonin have their own little tests to see if they've got prodigies or dunces. Question is, are you a prodigy or a dunce?" She took out a senbon packet and tossed it at the closest pole. The metal needles ripped the packaging apart without even removing it, embedding themselves in a perfect leaf symbol that matched the one on both of their forehead protectors. The rest of the needles dropped to the floor among the shredded plastic of the wrapping, making a faint tinkling sound. "This is the senbon test," say Anko. "It's a bit longer than the bell test or the ring test, but it's also different from both. Rather than testing teamwork or information gathering, the senbon test can only be passed by naturally talented shinobi. You have 2 days to be able to throw at least 20 senbon at once and make a leaf mark. One, know that the academy doesn't teach that, and neither does Kakashi, so you'll either have to learn how to do it yourself or get someone to teach you." "What?" exclaimed Naruto. "How am I supposed to get that good with senbon in just 2 days?" Anko gave a nonchalant shrug. "Get Hokage-sama to teach you. You're pretty close to him. Any of the Jonin could teach you, but they're all training their genin for the finals. Get someone. I don't care, charisma, intellect, ingenuity. You gotta have this if you're going to learn from the best." Naruto decided to defeat the senbon test like his red-headed stepchild and force Anko to teach him because, damn it, He was the best when she declared herself the best, and the best should receive training from the best. I'll be back the day after tomorrow, Anko sensei, and I'll pass this test if it's the last thing I do, he said. For a moment, Naruto considered pleading with Sarutobi for lessons, but he ultimately changed his mind. The Hokage couldn't devote much attention to him, and he needed every moment of the following 48 hours to improve his skill. Furthermore, even though it was highly probable, he was completely unaware of Sarutobi's special senbon skills. Rather, he chose a tried and true strategy to achieve his goals. Blackmail. The images of Iruka in a pink kimono following a particularly cunning prank were the first step toward a slippery slope. Even though Naruto was generally reluctant to use incriminating photographs and mementos against others as it happened, there was only one man available to learn how to throw multiple senbon with deadly accuracy in 2 days. It was around 8 o'clock at night. Sakura was most likely reading or working on her own taijutsu at home, as Kakashi and Sasuke had already departed to prepare for the tournament. Finding his home address required a trip to the records office, but Naruto knew who he was looking for. His target resided in a real house that was positioned between a suburban home and a corner store where Naruto occasionally purchased milk. He waited for the man to arrive home after entering through a back window that had been carelessly left open and disarming a few traps. A few minutes later, Shiranui Genma entered, clearly getting ready to get wasted, but not yet. He flipped his bandana onto the kitchen table, tossed his flak jacket on his stairs, and loosely tousled his brown hair. "Hello!" Naruto exclaimed with joy, possibly forgetting that it's not the best idea to startle even a laid-back Tokubetsu Jonin. Thankfully, he was able to replace himself earlier with a shadow clone, so now the 5 senbon that were thrown, 2 in each hand and 1 spat, only struck the couch's fabric. In a beautiful voice, Genma exclaimed, "What the fuck?" Naruto inquired, "Your name is Genma, right?" The old shadow clone vanished, replaced by a new one that he had made from an upstairs vantage point. Uncomfortably, but not enough to dispel him, the senbon pricked his back. When Genma recognized the boy in his home, his posture softened a little. "Get the hell out of here, kid, I got places to be." A menacing Naruto uttered, "Not anymore, you don't, remember this?" He had 3 pictures in his hands, all of them showing Genma in some form. In the first, he sat on a bench beside a woman with dark hair and put his arm around her neck. They were cleaning each other's tonsils. In the second, which was identical, the third showed the 2 of them in bed, with the girl gazing lovingly at Genma as he smoked a cigarette. The other woman was obviously Inuzuka Hana, but the camera angle was poor for all 3. Genma hissed and sprang forward, using his bare hands to tear them all to shreds. Naruto made no attempt to stop him. He said with a smile, "Come on, do you really think I'd forget to make copies?" Genma let out a groan. "Just think of what Sume muttered." "What do you want?" Genma asked. Naruto grinned triumphantly. "Teach me how to throw senbon in 2 days, or Kiba's mom gets them." Genma turned away with a sudden roll of his eyes. "Your sensei is the psycho bitch," he replied. "No wonder you're trying to blackmail me. The senbon test is almost impossible to pass. In fact," he thought, "the only team to ever pass it was Mitarashi-san's. Still, her solution was pretty clever." "Tell me," exclaimed Naruto. "Nope, you gotta figure it out yourself, like the bell test and the ring test." "Naruto assists with the incriminating photos," he sang. "I'm not giving you a choice." With a sigh, Genma mentally cancelled his 2-day plans. "You 2 bastards are perfect for each other," he declared. 2 days later, Anko was waiting in training ground 16 with a stick of her favorite food in one hand and a rolled-up scroll in the other. Naruto strode through the gate, leaving a trail of smoke in his wake. How would he fail? Anko wondered. While some tried and failed miserably, others pleaded despite the Shiranui family's propensity to teach their use. Even Genma was unable to pass the senbon test as a genin. "Bad shunshin. Those suck," she stated, "but you get used to it now. Are you ready to show me how awesome you are?" "I'm plenty awesome," exclaimed Naruto. "Put your money where your mouth is," Anko insisted as she stuffed the remaining dango into her mouth. Naruto took out 20 senbon and threw them at the closest post, where they formed the ideal Konoha emblem. In a somewhat anticlimactic manner, astonished, Anko dropped the stick from his mouth. "How?" Naruto yelled. "I told you I'd pass." Anko examined him intently. Naruto appeared at ease. His hand didn't appear nearly as raw from pinpricks as it should have, and he was almost too relaxed without getting enough sleep in between. Naruto had undoubtedly practiced his throw for 2 days in a row. She asked naively, "How did you get here this morning?" Genma teleported me here." Fiendishly, Anko asked. "So he had you smoking something, did he?" Yakama is more effective when eaten than smoked, but he wouldn't know that Genma never needed that shit. "So, can I assume that if I asked you to throw the senbon again, you could make a regular old circle? How about a square?" Hell, if you can hit a target right, I'll be impressed. Naruto was going white. Slowly he thought about the bark Genma had told him to smoke, which tasted terrible but, to some extent, improved the accuracy of his aim. The leaf's shape was essentially encoded in his muscle memory, overriding everything else he threw after drawing a few more senbon, but the end product could only be kindly described as an oval with a hump on one side close to the pole's base. Anko looked incredibly happy as she crossed her arms and leaned back. "I knew you were smart enough to figure it out," she replied. "Yeah, the guy who gives you the ring test says it's about speed, and Kakashi probably said something else along those lines, but they're really about information gathering and teamwork, respectively. So the senbon test is to figure out how well you can cheat and, well, I used drugs too when I passed it. My asshole teammate Shisui used Shunshin to plant the senbon directly in the target, and my slightly less asshole teammate Sho used Genjutsu. Of course, our sensei saw through us in an instant, but that's not the point." Choosing to keep his photos of Hana and Genma private, Naruto questioned, "So, are you gonna help me win the Chuunin exams or what?" Naruto received the scroll from Anko. It contained a contract that stated that Naruto would pay Anko the sum of 800,000 ryo at the end of the 30 days that their training sessions would begin. Other than a disclaimer stating that Naruto was not at all responsible for her possible death, there wasn't much else. "This doesn't say what you're going to teach me," grieved Naruto. "Well, if you're drugged enough you can make a cool shape with senbon." Anko chuckled. "Seriously, if I told you that at the beginning, it would take the surprise out of it. Any decent ninja could steal this from under your nose, and then they'd sell your secrets to that ginger runt you're gonna fight." This was a valid point, Naruto thought to himself, and he signed his name under his new sensei's. The contract was retracted by Anko, who made it disappear into a pocket of her overcoat. She then turned around and struck Naruto in the chest with her heel. The blonde genin was thrown backwards by the strong kick, tumbling until he struck a tree and landed on his head. Anko yelled. Lesson 1 is taijutsu. While striking a fighting pose that Naruto had never seen before, the first battle started as he leapt to his feet and made 2 backup shadow clones. Anko was a formidable foe. She did not hold back much, even against a genin whose taijutsu skills were admittedly lacking. In the first 5 minutes, Naruto sustained a fresh round of bruises on his ribs, demonstrating once and for all how absurd it was to charge in with your arms outstretched. Anko's lightning speed and probing strikes were enough to knock him flat on his ass whenever she felt he was losing ground, even when he was fighting defensively. Before long, his nose was heavily bleeding, and the sunlight had left his chin and upper lip a deep red at that moment. It was all that kept Naruto fighting and kept him from collapsing on his back and staring at the clouds. Even though he knew enough about injuries to know that they would hurt in roughly 3 hours, nothing was ever resolved by playing the part of Shikamaru. By alternating simple haymakers with twisted aerial attacks and fierce acrobatics that would make Meta Guy proud, Anko was gradually putting more and more pressure on her student, making him move more quickly and creatively to avoid both straight punches and hooks. Wondering if he would have time to create shadow clones, Naruto hissed and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was clear that either Anko was completely out of his league or Mizuki had misjudged him. She would increase the pressure and move closer each time he attempted to make hand seals, causing his arms to separate. She raised an eyebrow when she saw Naruto lowering his hands slowly. Had enough? Naruto scowled. He felt sluggish, but it was questionable what the exercise was for. He sat down heavily, his hands raised in defeat. Water. He let out a moan flatly. That was terrible, Anko said. It's like you didn't pay attention to your instructors in the academy. Taijutsu is an art form, tailored to the individual but uniform to some extent. Most Chuunin use an advanced form of karate augmented by superhuman stamina, but others use Goken like your friend with the horrible fashion sense, or substitute Genjutsu instead. You just fucking suck. Thanks, deadpanned Naruto. In the upcoming weeks, Naruto would learn to fear Anko's smile as she said, "You want to beat someone who can use sand as a weapon and a shield? You've got to be faster, you've got to hit harder and be harder to hit. Run laps until I get back." Naruto stumbled to his feet after muttering something nasty about her heritage as he forced himself to start running. He could feel his legs faltering beneath him. He had no idea where he was going, but Anko would track him down. That's how thorough Anko was. Anko made the decision to learn more about Naruto's first opponent in the final tournament, Gaara. He was the clear favorite from Suna, and his whole team ought to have been promoted to Chuunin long ago. Based on her knowledge from watching the second event, his older siblings, Temari and Konkuro, were both skilled and formidable shinobi. Gaara, who was much younger than both, was said to be the most vicious and powerful of the three. She was aware that their father was the Yondaime Kazekage, who was in charge of helping Suna get through a financial crisis. His son seemed to inherit his signature skill of using gold dust, albeit in a somewhat distorted form. Anko remembered that his predecessor had substituted iron fillings. Although Gaara was hard to find, she finally happened to see him and his siblings with a man who she could only assume was their Jonin sensei. The Suna veteran was engaged in what appeared to be a near-draw battle with Konkuro against Temari. Anko saw puppets creeping behind the blonde, but the kunoichi's nature transformation was so perfect that neither her brother nor mentor could approach like pawns on a chessboard. Temari would dart forward and backward, monitoring their positions. The youngest did not participate. Gaara stood stoically off to the side, her anorexic frame and diminutive stature concealing an extraordinary strength and cunning. He reportedly felt no need for training because he was so proficient with the sand in his gourd. Anko wouldn't have been as upset if his teammates hadn't appeared to share that opinion. Gaara, disguised against a distant wall, appeared exhausted now that she was aware of it. The dark circles surrounding his eyes were simply bags, not signs of a keke genkai or other jutsu. Gaara suffered from insomnia. One screwed up kid, Anko thought, shifting her cloak to the right a little. The part of the wall she had cleared was pounded by a shuriken. Actually, it's almost like a jinchuriki. A psychopath, a little depressed, and lonely. However, Orochimaru sensei is also all of that. Perhaps he's just another Itachi from Uchiha. In any case, I have a lot of work ahead of me. I doubt that even I could defeat this man if it's true. That was a little over the top. Anko would employ the tried and true backstab if she were really under pressure to kill Gaara, or perhaps tags that explode. The insane runt who threatened casual death and followed through on it deserved the best artillery she could find. After all, there's no kill like overkill. As it passed over her head, the irony of that idea whistled. Leaping across rooftops and thinking quietly, Anko headed straight for the Konoha hospital. Although his sensei had witnessed Rock Lee's altercation with Gaara, she had not. Cornering someone who witnessed the fight would help explain Gaara's abilities to Lee, who would most likely be in Guy's hospital room. Additionally, he might recommend a fighting style for Naruto. The hospital receptionist was a much maligned woman who had grown accustomed to ninja who ignored her. Rather, she readily offered the location of Lee. Sadly, Guy wasn't present. There was no one to tell where to find someone to start the right conversation, and Lee was dozing off, possibly under the influence of drugs. No one but. Hello, Anko-san. Anko pivoted, trying not to grin. She said, how'd ya know I was here? Kurenai Yuihi was superior to Guy, who was good she didn't speak in some obscure dialect of gibberish, at least. I was visiting Hinata-san while she recovers, and she told me you were looking for Lee's room, Kurenai replied. Guy isn't here, complained the younger woman, probably off with Neji doing something youthful or whatever. Kurenai shuddered. She suggested, don't say it like that, it sounds perverted. Says Kurenai-chan, said Anko, with all those missions you have with Asuma, I hear you two are thinking of settling down. Why? Kurenai pondered how to respond to the query without causing a tantrum. Serious things occasionally passed Anko by, but she was prone to overreact to trivial things like personal slights. When she finally said, I'm pregnant, no, Anko yelled, Kurenai-chan. You're the only active duty Jonin kunoichi. What's Suna gonna think when they see our only two female Jonin are on maternity leave? Just because Suna hasn't outlawed abortion doesn't mean they'll think any less of us, Kurenai grumbled. So the elite face of Konoha is currently all male, and of all the Jonin in the village 3% is now Guy, replied Anko. What do you have to say for yourself? I wish we hadn't run out of condoms. After a brief period of serious expression, they both started laughing. Kurenai wiped perspiration from her forehead as she leaned against the wall. Since their amicable competition over who could become the first to go from Tokubetsu Jonin to full Jonin, Anko has been one of her closest friends. She was a great ninja, witty, crude, and observant at the moment. Kurenai only had until Anko's promotion to milk as many drinks from her as she could, even though she secretly believed she deserved the higher rank between the two of them. Sobering up, Anko said, can we talk for a bit? Sure, what can I do for you? Tell me about Gaara. Kurenai shuddered once more. Where do I begin? I heard he's the jinchuriki of Shukaku. But Kakashi's senpai was sort of vague on that. He uses the giant tub to hold sand, and he fights with the stuff rather effectively. He's not training, complained Anko in Kurenai's words. Makes sense to me. He doesn't sound like he cares about anything, and that includes being a ninja sort of bloodthirsty, though he crippled Rock Lee because a voice in his head told him to. Anko thought, the voice of Shukaku, you think? It was most likely a lesser spirit of the desert rather than the sand demon that was sealed in Gaara. Their honesty wasn't exactly well known. He called it mother, but they say that spirit's insane. It could be lying to him, or they could both be nuttier than a ration bar. So how good is he? Good enough to beat Lee, and he was on Team Guy, Kurenai replied. I'd say between Chuunin and Jonin, but it's a bit difficult to say long range without a doubt, but he took some serious hits from Lee without flinching. That sand is fast enough to block almost anything. And when Lee wore him down a bit, it turned out he has this sand armor that shielded him completely if he's vulnerable to taijutsu. It's better than anything the rookies can offer. Well, maybe not the Uchiha, but the rest of them are toast. His opponent is Naruto, indicated Anko. I'm gonna train him for the next month, see if he has talent or if he's full of hot air. Surprised, Kurenai asked, Uzumaki Naruto? He's the one that painted the Hokage's faces pink, right? His victory against Kiba was startling, to say the least. Over it, she still sounded raw. In Kurenai's case, they were truly prepared, but Jonin rarely liked to acknowledge that the genin they submitted to the Chuunin exams weren't Naruto appeared to have won by a stroke of luck. Anko said, he farted? This kid is full of hidden depths or some shit, kind of reminds me of my own Chuunin promotion. Kurenai remarked wryly, flashing your boobs at show isn't quite the same thing. As Anko noted, you did it to Guy in the next round. Bet he still dreams about it. When Anko returned 2.5 hours later, Naruto was still running, feeling as though his insides were turning to warm mush. One arm was looped over a leather shopping bag. Naruto fell onto his back and shut his eyes as soon as he saw her. She yelled, "Oi!" and let the bag fall to her feet. The sound it made as it struck the ground was suspiciously loud, and when Naruto opened one eyelid, he discovered that the ground was shattered around the impact point. In a harsh whisper, he bemoaned his burning muscles and sore throat, asking, "What is that?" With a 2,000 extra ryo out of your wallet, Anko replied, "Any and all supplies I deem necessary for your training will be purchased by you. It's part of the contract." I hate you. They were heavy objects, although weights were only used to vary workouts and make simple exercises more challenging for more physically skilled ninja. Naruto was familiar with the idea of using them for training, particularly for running and calisthenics. They were worn more often by Shino and Ino, who were both taller and stronger than the majority of their classmates. By now you might have noticed that ninja like Rock Lee can punch and kick much harder than they logically should be able to, Anko continued, and with good reason. Their training regimes are tailored to include weights, as if they were suddenly hundreds of pounds heavier than they normally are. That way, when the weights are removed, their strength appears to skyrocket. Most ninja don't wear their weights all day every day, just for training. This is a hybrid option. We're training you up to the point that you can dodge Gaara's sand. But obviously we can't make you Lee's equal in just a month without some form of steroids, so medium weights during the day, and you'll take them off at night. How do you know? I got Hayate to show me the tape. Naruto reluctantly donned the leg weights. Long rectangular bars of an unidentifiable metal were used to make them, and they were belted into a cylinder that snugly fit around his shins. He was shocked to discover how much heavier he felt after Anko pulled him to his feet, making it evidently harder to move his feet. Anko said, "You'll get over it in a few minutes, but before we do that, let's talk about your chakra." "What about it?" Naruto inquired. Putting his newfound leg weight to the test. Moving was more difficult, but not to the point where you would move less than usual. "The pink-haired one with the book told me that you didn't know what it was when you graduated. Clearly you are some kind of idiot savant. Emphasis on idiot chakra is what we'll be focusing on now, because this is your one and only advantage over Gaara. I spent the time looking for Gaara to see what kind of training he does. He doesn't train." "What?" cried Naruto. "How did he get so good if he doesn't train harder than everyone else?" "Training harder than everyone else won't necessarily make you the best," Anko stated. "Lee trains harder than you ever will. But is he gonna be Hokage? No, and if he can't even use ninjutsu, he'll only ever make it to Tokubetsu Jonin on the opposite end of the spectrum. Gaara is already what he perceives as the best. Either that or he's insane and doesn't care, which is a possibility. Not that it makes a difference, because obviously he's better than Lee." Naruto questioned, "What does that have to do with chakra?" "Taijutsu is out," dejectedly Anko declared. "You need to train it up anyways or Gaara will crush you like he crushed Bushy Brows. But you need something else to win. What that something else is, and whether it will give you a chance in hell of beating that monster, will depend on how much chakra you have." Naruto concluded, "So you want to know how much chakra I have, for example? Good thing I didn't use any on that run." With genuine curiosity, Anko inquired, "How much do you have?" Naruto responded by closing his eyes and making his chakra system function more quickly. The mystical energy began to seep out of his skin and into the atmosphere, causing his skin to glow blue. Naruto expelled the last of his energy as Anko shuffled politely backwards. Coughing, Anko got to his feet. There wasn't much of training ground 16 left, regardless of what Naruto had just done. A resolute Naruto had created a simulated explosion that had destroyed the wooden beams. Although Naruto appeared determined to defy her perception of him, she was fairly certain that the one occasion her sensei had displayed pure chakra was both more intense and less explosive. Wasn't a jinchuriki characterized by a chakra that acted in a way that wasn't typical? Corrosive and red demonic. However, Naruto hadn't caused that explosion with any demonic chakra. It was all Naruto and all blue even without the Kyuubi's addition. Naruto seemed to possess more chakra than the Hokage. Either Anko hadn't believed it could be done, or it was impossible to be honest. It was less likely than discovering a diamond on the side of the road, and yet, despite the impossibility, here he was. Throughout the entire training field, Naruto was unconscious on the ground. Fortunately, he was unharmed, but their training session came to a complete stop because they had no chakra. He hefted his body on her shoulder as Anko pulled herself over as a sensei. It was her responsibility to take him to the hospital, from which she had just returned, and then to go out and begin spending some of her paycheck in anticipation. Kakashi saw Sasuke engaged in combat with his shadow clones. The challenge of fighting as 5 people at once was partly to blame. But Sasuke was already clearly superior. He would be more than capable of handling legions of shadow clones in a matter of days, after which he would be prepared to learn the chidori. Although giving up his masterwork technique was a difficult decision, Kakashi finally trusted his teammates. Kakashi would no longer have to deal with Uchiha Sasuke. If he were promoted to Chuunin in the tournament, he could then concentrate on raising Sakura and Naruto to the level they deserved. There was a remote possibility that Naruto would also be chosen, which would benefit Sakura but not him. He needed more direction. In a war zone or an ambush, using farts to win battles wouldn't work. Furthermore, Naruto was the jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Throughout history, there have been numerous instances of jinchuriki, and each one of them fell prey to the demon they were harboring. The nine-tailed fox would eat Naruto's soul if he didn't stand out swiftly moving. Sasuke was backhanded across the field after defeating one of his clones. He's impressive, for a genin. Kakashi's eyes sparkled and widened uncontrollably. He said, "Jiraiya-sama," with reverence. Jiraiya appeared unimpressed with the care. Kakashi-kun, right? I could never keep those kids of Minato straight. You aren't Rin, and I think Obito was a Hyuga or something. Kakashi kept his thoughts about the fictional Hyuga Obito to himself. I am Hitaki Kakashi. Jiraiya said, right, Kakashi, in a polite manner. Listen, much as I'd like to stay and chat, I need to know where Naruto-kun is. He's being trained by Ebisu-san for the next month, Kakashi answered. I called in some favors from Asuma's brother, and he agreed to hold off on training Konohamaru-kun until the tournament rolls around. Jiraiya questioned incredulously, Ebisu? Why aren't you training him yourself? Kakashi lost the glittering look from his face, because I can only train one of them effectively in time to stand a chance against the rest of the competitors. Sasuke is my best student by a wide margin, and with my training he should be promoted to Chuunin without too much trouble. Then I can focus on training Naruto and Sakura. But Ebisu, Kakashi stated unequivocally, as a Tokubetsu Jonin and certified instructor, Naruto will attend the Chuunin selections, and he will win or lose on his own merits. I am doing him a favor with this. He isn't ready. Jiraiya let out a sigh. Fine, I take it I can offer my own training? Of course, Jiraiya-sama, exclaimed Kakashi, his glittering eyes coming back. Just remember who he is and what his limits are. When Jiraiya was walking down the mountain from Training Ground 37, she thought, that's the problem with the Uzumaki. Until it was too late, no one could ever know what their limits were. Naruto woke up in the hospital the following day and left right away. Although it wasn't the most legal course of action, he was prepared to resume light training because his chakra healed so much more quickly than Kakashi's. Training Ground 16 had been mulched, causing the ground to crack in all directions as if a titanic hammer had fallen in the center. Naruto reasoned that he would be less likely to be discovered in such an unusable place by hospital officials. Since he couldn't find Anko, he started the speed drills she had mentioned. 10 push-ups, 20 crescent kicks, 60 straight punches, and so on. As his muscles began to relax, Naruto gradually accelerated the exercise. He eventually stopped doing push-ups and started practicing kata instead. Every ninja believes that their invisible training partners are always more powerful, quick, and intelligent than they are. But Naruto's made-up enemies today appeared a bit more sluggish and uninteresting than normal. Perhaps he was getting better. He had just begun the 7th form, which required rapidity and exacting attention to detail, when voices broke through the rustle of his clothes. His oldest and most trusted technique, the Kokoramino no Jutsu, was used as he hurried across the grounds to a nearby copse without thinking. A voice that was familiar said, "Whoa, what happened here?" Another, fascinated, remarked, "It looks like those pictures of Tsunade-sama's battlegrounds." Don't get your hopes up, she's not in Konoha. None of the Sannin. Well, I heard Jiraiya-sama is in town, but that was just gossip. Yeah, gossip spread by women. Trust me, if anyone knows for certain whether the pervert is in Konoha, it'll be the women. Sakura spoke first. Then the girl who was defeated by Temari in the first round Tenten appeared as trim as she had before the bout, which ended with her falling 2 meters and breaking 3 ribs on a metal pole. It's possible that she and Sakura were out and about in Konoha because she was accustomed to the pain. "Think we can use it?" Sakura asked. Taking cautious steps on the uneven ground, she scanned her surroundings cautiously, as though Tsunade or someone equally powerful might object to being interrupted. Tenten joined her in reprimanding her to relax. "It'll be good training, for when we have to fight in some place that's been blown up or destroyed somehow." A man with blonde hair sneezed, a horizontal scratch running through his Iwahite 8. "Sakura, good idea," she said. "This might be good practice for the next Chuunin exams." For a moment, they both appeared thoughtful. Although Tenten's opponent had been orders of magnitude more skilled, both of them might have been prepared for such a promotion. When Sakura threw that final shuriken, Ino had already lost. But her clan's jutsu gave her the advantage she needed to defeat her former friend. The majority viewed her as the low point of the upcoming competition, and some conjectured that she would give up right away when it came time to face Neji. Sakura said, "Got anything else to show me?" Tenten responded by drawing a sword with a clawed hilt and a blade that was 106 centimeters long. It was nearly as long as she was tall, but it lacked the detail of her favorite weapon, a katana with fullers plated in aluminum and a red tassel on the ivory pommel. "Wow," Tenten said. "Yeah, it's brand new, with pride, imported directly from the land of iron. Meant for a samurai at least 6 feet tall." The merchant guy didn't believe me when I said it was mine until I picked it up. Sakura responded by charging at her sparring partner while brandishing a ridiculously tiny metal rod. Sakura used the rod to block Tenten's diagonal sweep with the oversized sword. The sword was useless at this close range, so Tenten dropped it to the ground and kicked Sakura in the pelvis with her body weight. Tenten was able to swipe the odachi at Sakura once more. As she staggered back a few steps, Sakura pushed forward, attempted to throw Tenten's arms off, and then smashed it into her stomach. After the short piece of pipe she had on hand engaged both of her hands in deflecting, Tenten, who was sadly much stronger than she was, took the shove and kicked for Sakura's head. Instead, Tenten was buckled when the pink-haired girl fell to her knees and gave her a hard slap on the shins. It was impossible to overlook the other girl's talent. Of course, now irritated, Tenten's left hand disappeared into her blouse and came back holding a scroll. After rolling out behind Sakura, it glowed blue and vanished subtly. The ground changed. Sakura was taken by surprise when Tenten heaved forward. Naruto's teammate was bound to the ground after falling backwards into a tar puddle, where she was covered in gooey liquid. Tenten declared, "Tara Hitsugi no Jutsu," with a sneer directed at Sakura. "Fuinjutsu is useful for storing weapons and such, but what about making traps? I made this one a few days ago. What do you think, huh?" Still knee-deep in the viscous tar, Sakura rose to his feet. She grinned after spitting some of the gooey liquid back into the pit. "Megan. Kokoni Arizu no Jutsu." Tenten took on a peculiar look. She marched carelessly into the tar pit after dropping the sword. Covered in tar, Sakura yelled triumphantly, "Gotcha!" While attempting and failing to appear successful, Sakura was tackled into the tar by Tenten, who snarled and shook off the Genjutsu as they finished moves and put each other into half-formed joint locks. They rolled around in the black liquid for a while, destroying their clothes completely. Tenten and Sakura rolled over one last time, which Naruto could now see through the pitch-colored layer covering them both. Naruto was about to drop the cloak of invisibility in order to find a new training ground to increase his speed. They were sharing a kiss. It was awkward and lasted only a few seconds before Tenten casually tried to get up and dust herself off, but it was there. Naruto's thoughts went blank. He turned and walked away almost in a dream, leaving his disguise behind him. As he walked away in a daze as he left the area and headed down a dirt path, his walk swiftly changed to a jog and then a run. His mind was a jumble of feelings and concepts that were too numerous to convey with the words he knew. He finally decided to go home, eat some ramen, and spend the rest of the day gazing up at the ceiling. For the next few days, Naruto was absent. Much to Anko's dismay, he had been practicing, it turned out, when she asked around, but he wasn't there wherever people took her. When he arrived at her apartment one morning, Anko was just starting to believe that he had given up on her harsh training schedule. He appeared extremely exhausted, like a zombie. His hair was torn, and his ice-blue eyes seemed lifeless, scratched, and unfocused. Both wrists were wrapped in bandages, suggesting that they had recently sustained injuries from training. When he entered past her and began brewing coffee in her kitchenette, Anko wasn't entirely sure what to think of it. She threw herself into a slide over the kitchen counter and demanded, "Where were you?" She only reached halfway into Naruto's field of vision before friction stopped her. Despite the dramatic effect that was intended, the remainder she pulled herself, ignoring her. Naruto poured the coffee slowly into a mug and then drank it all at once, still black. "I needed that," he said in a whisper. "Ain't slept longer than, what, 4 hours?" Crossly, Anko said, "You can either tell me why you're here or you can get the hell out. Fuck your money, if you're not gonna show up." Naruto continued, putting the empty coffee cup in the sink and leaving Anko once more. "Meet me in training ground 3 in 30 minutes, he said. "Okay. Now what?" Naruto called over his shoulder. "I need to use your shower. Forgot to pay my water bill, they shut mine off." Anko was lying on her own counter, her bathroom door clicking shut behind her. Anko sighed, stood up, and cleaned herself up. She was accustomed to having strangers use her restroom, so she threw the coffee maker back into a cupboard carelessly before putting on her boots and heading outside to get the newspaper and meet him at the third ground. The third training ground appeared to be merely a stand-in for the 16th, which Naruto had destroyed and someone had later covered in tar. The third training ground, however, was a gift from Sarutobi Hiruzen himself. It was exclusively for his use and that of his students, their students, and so forth. As a former genin under Orochimaru, Anko had access, and Kakashi, whose sensei was Namikaze Minato, and Jiraiya were Naruto's senseis. Anko chose to give Naruto the benefit of the doubt. Despite her frustration with his unpredictable behavior and tardiness, she had a sneaking suspicion that he might have something unexpected planned for her. Naruto appeared rejuvenated as he eventually hobbled into training ground 3. He no longer resembled the Walking Dead, and the tattered patches of hair that had been lost had been combed over. He came forward, bowed ostentatiously, and struck. There was a remarkable difference between this performance and his previous one. He was precise and refined now, whereas before he had been awkward and uncoordinated. He had accelerated from sloth to lightning, pushing his ill-prepared sensei viciously to the edge of a river with his limbs flying with the intention of flipping Naruto onto his back. She stepped onto the water and let him thrust forward, but Naruto was surprisingly astute about the move. He dropped his weight and swept one foot out from under her as soon as Anko grabbed his wrist. Naruto blocked Anko's 1-2 to the face after she quickly regained her equilibrium. His endurance had also improved. He was exhausted and panting for the first minute or so, but after nearly 30 minutes, he had hardly perspired. Anko was still in the lead, but she could only gain the upper hand gradually. Oh no! Where did this originate? With her forearms trembling from the effort of preventing a roundhouse kick, she thought even though Naruto was later beaten to the ground, it was still true that he had improved his strength, speed, and agility. Lightly panting, Anko hunched over his downed body. "Mind telling me what the hell you've been doing for the last couple of days?" she murmured. Naruto gasped. "I said you weren't teaching fast enough." "Really? You look like Guy worked you over." "He did," said Naruto sourly. Anko's eyebrow went up. Guy was eager to give training to anyone he thought was young, but why would anyone actively seek him out? It was only effective to perform thousands of repetitions if you were already somewhat fit. Alternatively, if you were taking the kind of drugs that Konoha disapproved of. Anko took a deep breath. With thoughtfulness, Anko remarked, "You don't smell like steroids. What did you do?" Her piercing gaze made Naruto flinch as he cried, "How can you smell whatever?" "Tokubetsu Jonin," answered Anko with pride. "Elite Chuunin in all respects except for one. I'm a master tracker. My sense of smell is better than your eyesight, and the scent never lies. What drugs were you using?" Naruto gave in at last. The words, "Soldier pills," he whispered. "Soldier pills?" A bewildered Anko inquired. "Those don't increase your metabolism, do they? Never heard of someone using one outside of combat except for the guys who have those contests to see who can eat the most before passing out. The winner is usually Genma." Jokingly stating, "Genma's got secrets." Naruto got up and brushed himself off. "One of them is that soldier pills not only give you a chakra boost, they do increase your metabolism, and they also make you make chakra faster. I learned that the same way I learned about that disgusting bark stuff. And he knows 'cause he eats way too many of him." Anko said smolderingly, "Drugging yourself isn't the answer to everything." Naruto yelled, "It is if you're trying to win a competition. I got almost as good as Sasuke Teme in a week, and by the time we fight I'll be the best, believe it." "Senejashu!" shouted Anko unbelievably long. 6 snakes sprang from her sleeve and coiled themselves tightly around Naruto. She grinned, enjoying Naruto's powerlessness as he thrashed around in his snake-like restraints. She placed a fingertip on his forehead and asked languidly, "You ready to stop mouthing off to me?" Naruto grinned. He said, "Just a clone," and vanished in a cloud of smoke. The real Naruto used his second wind to launch another attack from behind. He used ninjutsu this time, spitting out shadow clones as distractions, making Anko fight with them while he hung back and saved energy. He was still being forced to perform at faster than safe rates by the soldier pills he had taken, but he would be okay as long as he ate immediately after the fight. Then Anko whispered in his ear, "What are trying to prove?" Naruto blinked. Only a few minutes before, she had been in front of him before vanishing. Was this the Shunshin? A method that genin learned, but that is essentially worthless to a novice. How carelessly Anko used it. She continued, bending at the waist to sidestep his initial blow. Serious question, she said. Are you trying to say, I'm Uzumaki Naruto and I don't need you? But you hired me to train you, so it can't be that. What about, look how awesome I am. I can make half-assed strategies and impress people. No, that can't be it either. You ain't that stupid probably. Anko was accelerating, effectively eliminating the shadow clones with swift kunai strokes, while Naruto was gradually growing weary and shedding them like snakeskin instead of firing them like shuriken. Naruto pushed past the flashing blade, punched Anko in the stomach, and was rewarded for his trouble with an elbow to the head. The explosion of starburst behind his eyelids knocked him out cold. Anko shrugged as he glanced down at Naruto. Or maybe it was an apology, she thought to herself, and I'm sorry, or a promise, whatever. Let's get you back to my apartment. Jiraiya was shocked to discover the apartment empty after obtaining Naruto's home address from a grumpy desk employee. Only an old cup of instant ramen, a pair of orange-tinted goggles, and a picture of Team 7 on an empty dresser were found during a quick search. It could only be bad news that even the water was turned off. With his head resting in his hands, the toad sage sat down on the bed and gave it careful thought. During the day, where would a hyperactive jinchuriki who missed half of his regular squad be? Worse, what caused his water to go out? Demon containers weren't paid that poorly either. Jiraiya was devastated by the guilt of leaving his godson behind for 10 years of his life, and his misery was exacerbated by the thought of the typical burden of a jinchuriki. He had little idea what kind of person Naruto had become as a result of that pain, and the only thing he could do to people without breaking the Yondaime's secret taboo was to play practical jokes. Was he a cunning con artist, reveling in his victim's misery? Was he an occasional miscreant? Did he do it to avoid the yawning emptiness of loneliness, or just for the attention? Or did he have pals, the kind of childhood Gaara could only dream about? He said out loud, I wish it could be different. Throughout his 50 years of life, Jiraiya had far too many regrets to list them all. His conscience was troubled by Nagato, Yahiko, Konan, Kushina, Minato, Dan, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Naruto, but none more so than Naruto. He wasn't totally sure he wanted to take on a new apprentice. To be fair, his decision would alter the course of the entire world, according to the great Toad Sage, and Jiraiya, to be honest, did not like the stakes with his only 2 apprentices dead and gone. Maybe it would be better to undo the change. Jiraiya would have been a happier man if he had never heard the wrinkled toad say those words. Who are you and what are you, Jiraiya-sama? He looked up with a playful, hello, Book-chan, he said. Why are you here? Sakura turned her head away in embarrassment. She whispered, I thought I'd bring it back. She held out a square of neatly folded cloth with a camouflage pattern printed on it. I found that stupid bed sheet Naruto uses to pretend to hide, she said. As she placed the shabby item on the tiny bed, Jiraiya remained silent and observed that nobody, including herself, had cleaned the apartment in a while. He gave the girl with the pink hair some parting remarks as she walked away. I know it doesn't seem like it, but Kakashi-san cares about you. He cares about all of you, because that's a teacher's job. If you have any problems, he'll be happy to listen to you, no matter what. Sakura slowly turned around. How did you know? She said in a low voice. He leapt into a one-legged stance and exclaimed, my dear, I am the great and gallant Jiraiya. I am an infamous purveyor of women. It is my duty and pleasure to be aware of it. With a grateful smile, she walked away as if a heavy weight had been removed from her shoulders. As Jiraiya watched her go, she thought about Tsunade for a moment. You are burdened by regrets, he concluded. I decided that I would live for the future. All I have to do is locate Naruto. Anko kicked him back into the kitchen after removing an irate Naruto from her bedsheet mess before she returned later with the salami. He yelled for a while about how unfair life is. A little curious, the jinchuriki asked, why do you have lunch meat in your bedroom? I keep a little of everything in my bedroom, Naruto-kun, Anko remarked casually before continuing. You still have much to learn in the ways of the legendary ninja, like how to fight with a hangover and how to survive being a prisoner of war for extended periods of time. Both involve keeping meat in your room. Feeling a little queasy, he asked, can those lessons wait? For now, said Anko kindly. Your next lesson is the most important jutsu anyone will ever teach you. All jonin know a variation of this technique, and it's important that you do too. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, and ram were among the hand seals until Naruto was completely bored. Anko forced him to repeat the sequence without chakra. He remained silent until she was sure he wouldn't accidentally turn the monkey seal into a Raiden technique, because she seemed unusually focused on him learning this ubiquitous technique. Okay, that's good enough, she said at last. Now, here's what it does. Kachiyose no jutsu. A viper as tall as Anko wounded itself around her arm and torso after she slapped her right hand against the table. Something hissed at her, and she uncomfortably hissed back. "This is my favorite summon," Anko said, affectionately massaging the enormous snake's head. "Most ninja have one. Kakashi-san uses Pakun the most. Gai-san relies on Ningen, and Sarutobi-sama occasionally summons Enma." Naruto asked, "Is he tame, Anko-sensei?" "Tame?" chuckled Anko. "Summons are only loyal to their contractors and their masters. Uedokuna here is my friend, but she'll bite you in the ass if she gets the chance." Hey. Anko found it almost too mild to describe the ninja counterpart of the crazy cat lady as crazy snake lady. Even with a poisonous snake wrapped around her, she appeared content. "There are two ways we can go about giving this technique to you. Any spirit domain you sign a contract with, you can summon from. If I were to give you my snake contract, you could sign it and that would be that, or you can make your own contract with a different type of summon." After giving the viper a suspicious look, Naruto concluded that calling forth snakes would only be another step toward insanity and torturing the helpless genin, soon to be Chuunin. With a quick, "I think I'll write my own, thanks," he said. Over lunch, they occupied themselves with the specifics of actually receiving a summons. The fact that any summon could summon its summoner was one of the many clauses and wordings that Anko clarified. Every spirit animal had its own territory. For instance, snakes had Ryuchi Cave. After he executed the jutsu, he would be taken to the animal's house where he could negotiate a deal with the summons. Anko said, "You have to watch out for a few things. While eating a sandwich, boss summons are about as powerful as true demons, and they don't always sign with less experienced summoners. When you get there, look for one of the second tier of command and write one with them. Any snake can sign on behalf of the snakes, and toad can sign on behalf of the toads, and so on." "What sort of stuff are they gonna ask for?" "Depends. I don't know a whole lot about this." Anko acknowledged the statement. "My sensei was in Ryuchi Cave when I tried summoning the first time, and he helped me out with all this." After he finished laughing his ass off, "You're gonna be on your own. I think most of them demand a test of some kind." Naruto pulled a face. "So I could literally be summoning anything? What if I get something lame, like slugs or toads?" "Hey, Yondaime-sama summoned toads. Don't diss their looks. They can hold really big swords and vomit oil and stuff." "But they're awful," exclaimed Naruto. "They're like green, and green is the worst color ever. And they have warts, and Iruka-sensei says the Yondaime got his contract from Jiraiya." Anko questioned, "Are you not a fan of the Sannin or their summons?" "Neither am I now. Are you gonna make those hand seals or what? Anything from a shark to a hawk could be waiting for you." "Fine," complained Naruto. "Kachiyose no jutsu." In the kitchen, Anko was by himself. She gave it some thought and then finished Naruto's sandwich. Naruto discovered himself in an oak forest with an unfamiliar white tree. The sun appeared to be traveling around the horizon rather than over the sky, and the sky had an intriguing mauve hue. Naruto wandered into a black charred copse a few minutes after coming to that shocking realization. As he ran his fingers over the ruined bark, he whispered, "What the hell is wrong with this place?" The trees had either been smashed and painted black, or they had been burned incompetently with so many other stands close by. Naruto couldn't think of any other way it could be the only one destroyed. He was soon shown to be mistaken. After several hours, he came upon 3 more destroyed copses, each tree charred from top to bottom. Even birds did not chirp, but Naruto listened for the sounds of life. He was starting to question whether he had wandered into a dead realm, as neither hunters nor prey fled. He knelt down and examined a patch closely, looking for earthworms or something. With a contract for earthworms, what could you do? How could a contract be signed by an earthworm? This was becoming absurd. Naruto yelled, "Does anything live here? Where are you?" "I'm right here." "Ah." The other speaker was a boulder-sized orange and white lump. It moved as slowly as a sloth, but somehow it was able to approach Naruto silently and then frighten him into a tree. The slug examined Naruto's head, which was already starting to develop a goose egg. "Oh my. I do hope that doesn't hurt too much," it responded. Already planning an escape from the highly mobile pile of slime, Naruto jerked to his feet in an attempt to calm Naruto's anxiety. It waved its feelers in the air. "Wait, please," the voice said. "Why do you come to Shikatsu Forest?" When Naruto realized there wouldn't be a fight, he relaxed and let his hands drop. What are you?" he panted. "I am a slug," the slug declared. "More to the point, I am the servant of Katsuyu-sama and I want to know why you intrude on our sacred grounds." "Slugs?" moaned Naruto. "I wish I just signed the snake contract." The slug said, sibilantly surprised. "You wish to summon slugs? Very few venture here for that purpose. Mainly it is the toads. For the toads eat us if you wish to sign. I suppose we can write a..." No, No, yelled Naruto. You're supposed to test me first. You know, make sure I'm worthy of your power or something? I am at a loss for words, the bewildered slug uttered. Katsuyu-sama served Tsunade-chan, and as far as I know they had no contest of strength to determine their pact. Naruto was so incredibly frustrated he was aware that there should have been a ritual of some sort. That was how it operated. If you don't think of something soon, I'm going to walk home, he grumbled. The orange slug would have scowled if they were capable of doing so, are you certain? His expression was Naruto's answer. A candle could have been lit by the resolve in his eyes. Very well, the slug grudgingly said, if you can avoid defeat for 3 minutes, I will allow you to contract me. So to win, I have to not lose. What if I just win? Restlessly, the slug rippled, do we have an accord? Yeah, deal now, fight me. The slug spit a glob of something sticky at Naruto after rearing back, although he avoided it with ease. Traces of the saliva got on his clothing, most of them crashed into one of the neighboring oaks, covering the majority of the trunk and completely consuming it while avoiding the falling tree. Naruto screamed something obscene, but the slug was already following him. You spit acid? Exclaimed Naruto with delight. That's fucking amazing. The slug remarked, 15 of 180 seconds have passed. You must conserve your energy if you wish to survive. The blonde cried out, conserve this. Before jumping back over the slug's enormous body and slamming a kunai into its back, the slug appeared unfazed as his arm sank up to the elbow into the soft body. The eye stalks were fixed on Naruto as it turned its head around. It said, that tickles, deadpan. Just before his head was almost severed by another ball of acid, Naruto's eyes widened with all his strength. He pulled on his arm, and with a startled yelp, he emerged from the orange flesh. Naruto fled from the cover and into a ruined clearing as the slug turned and moved relentlessly forward. 2/3 of your time remain. It stated the slug had more metaphysical tricks up its sleeve, but Naruto had the endurance to run for 2 more minutes to avoid being in the line of fire. Naruto ducked behind one of the few trees that remained, but the slug had already moved ahead of him as Naruto frantically backpedaled. A white blob with orange patches already clung to the tree's backside and fired its lethal payload at him. As the acid rained down on him, he dodged it and zigzagged wildly across the clearing. With 2 minutes remaining, the slug made the decision to make things more challenging by dividing into hundreds of copies and disappearing into the ground. Naruto yelled, what the hell? Now that the acid was coming from all sides, he had to perform some difficult acrobatics in order to stay alive. The biggest slug, acting more like a hunter with prey in sight than a garden annoyance, was humming an unnamed melody. Larger slugs were acting as artillery from behind, while scores of smaller ones were blotting out the ground as they crawled towards Naruto's feet. As the area Naruto needed to use gradually shrank, more and more appeared from the ground, moving forward with quiet assurance. All of them abruptly disappeared, leaving only the original slug. Perhaps a relatively short test, but you have demonstrated your competence. I would be proud to accompany you on your missions. Breathing, Naruto said, slugs are awesome. I'm happy you concur, the slug said. If you have a contract, we can. You spit freakin' acid, and you can clone yourself. Like me? Only Kakashi Sensei can clone himself like me. Slugs could write. It turned out the slug eventually wrote up a contract in perfect handwriting, but it took some very awkward maneuvering and strange liquids. The fact that a slug had better handwriting than Naruto irritated him a little, but this slug was an elite one. It was not so much a servant as another sensei. Sign, please? With what? Inquired Naruto. I don't have a pen or nothing. Naruto assumed the slug looked at him with disdain. Their facial features weren't particularly typical. Cut your thumb and use the blood. After giving his right thumb a worried look, Naruto bit it firmly and covered his index finger with blood. He wrote, Uzumaki Naruto, in red letters as neatly as he could. The acid resolved into a black burn in the shape of a kanji after the slug spat on the contract, Senshi. When you have need of the slug's aid, simply spread your blood and summon us, Senshi replied. Right, listen. How do I RRGH? Incredulously, Naruto grasped his elbow to see a black tattoo weave a web across his flawless skin. Senshi gave an apologetic nod, and as pain shot through his arm, the world darkened. In Anko's kitchen, Naruto reappeared holding a rolled scroll in his right hand and sporting a new tattoo. He noticed that his sensei appeared anxious, so he sat up and rubbed his forehead. With caution, she inquired, what happened? He said, I got a tattoo, quickly. Oh, want some more lunch? I ordered takeout, thanks. Where from? That place just down the road. They serve some mean water country shellfish. Don't mind if I do. Anko discovered that her methods of instruction tended to be trial by fire. She sat Naruto down in front of a barbecue and ordered trout for supper. After he asked how to cook fish, she took him to training ground 44's leech-infested waters when he wanted to get better at controlling his chakras. And she waited for him to grasp the concept for barely 2 minutes, but she was at a loss when he asked her how to defeat a jinchuriki. She questioned, "Why do you want that kind of training? It takes an A-class ninja to even think of going up against a demon container." She understood exactly why he was interested, but it was best to obtain consent before doing so to avoid feeling bad later on from Sarutobi-sama. No reason, said Naruto. That was hardly a satisfactory response, of course, and Anko returned from a brief visit to the Hokage's home the following day. This, she told her new tenant, is a written permission from Hokage-sama for, one Mitarashi Anko to discuss a classified military secret with one Uzumaki Naruto, specifically the matter of the 9-tailed kitsune's imprisonment, so, tell Anko-sensei what's up. Naruto let out a sigh. So you know, Anko gave a nod. It isn't a very well-kept secret. A few days ago, I went in to visit Rock Lee. Gaara roughed him up pretty badly in the preliminaries, and the doctors don't know if he'll ever wake up. Gaara was there too. And Shikamaru and I had to stop him from killing Lee. Long story short, he's a jinchuriki as well. I need to know more about Shukaku and how to beat it. Shukaku? Anko's voice was more surprised than disbelieving. She believed Kurenai had been wrong, but clearly not. Shukaku is the Tanuki demon hundreds of years ago. A priest from Sanagakure hunted it down and sealed it in himself. That's why jinchuriki exist. To seal away and banish demons. Something must have gone wrong. Cause their souls fused together and Shukaku gained control of the sand. The Shodai cage sealed it all up in a tea kettle, and that was that. Gaara mentioned that his father put Shukaku in him before he was born. Naruto blurted out, sand needed stronger ninja. That sounds about right. The Yondaime cage increased his standards a few years ago. Hidden sand has half the ninja most of the rest of the shinobi villages do, but all of them are relatively elite. Their genin are on par with our chuunin. Their chuunin are pretty damn powerful, and only a few jonin ever come from Suna, saying with hidden grass and hidden cloud anyways. Shukaku has complete control over sand, but more importantly Shukaku is a tanuki. It is at least as clever and powerful as a kitsune demon, if not more so. They've matched wits time and again throughout history. Do you see where I'm going with this? Naruto gave a solemn nod. That makes sense. Gaara must be in control of it, or you wouldn't be so strong. Anko reprimanded, or it could be controlling him. Jinchuriki who let their guard down around their demon end up like that priest from Suna. Mad. He said glumly, so how do I control the Kyuubi? Anko raised her hands in the air. No fucking clue. The only thing I know is that principle-derived abilities are programmed into the Fuinjutsu directly. Don't know exactly what that means. I just read the ceiling textbook, but the gist is that anything you can get from the 9 tails, you already have. What? You have tons of chakra and you heal pretty quickly. That's about it, said Anko. Naruto sheepishly acknowledged, actually, I can draw on the fox's chakra directly. I did that on my first C-rank mission to fight some samurai. The idea appeared to worry Anko. She exhaled. You can let it out? Naruto leapt to his defenses. I didn't, he exclaimed vigorously. I just told him to pay the rent on livin' in my belly. Never again, said Anko icily. You can't even allow the possibility of the Kyuubi escaping. Konoha doesn't have the means to seal it away again, and the next time we might really all be doomed. Not that you'll know. You'll be dead. A jinchuriki can't survive having its demon ripped out. Their conversation ended when Naruto turned distinctly white. Sakura debated the Kurama clan's advantages and disadvantages for a short time before accompanying Kurenai. After locating the Uehi household with the bounty from Zabuza's head, she skipped the day's training with Ebisu and Konohamaru. The door was answered by Kurenai's father. He was an elderly man with a heavy build who covered his war wounds with a bandana. At his hip hung a gaudy katana, reminding Sakura of the weapons her girlfriend used. She said courteously, "Is Kurenai sensei home?" "Uehi-san." Sakura entered after the man nodded and moved out of her way. Their modestly furnished house was adorned with the proper war trophies. Sakura saw some Suna and Iwa weapons, and his commander Namikaze Minato's 3-pronged kunai was lying in a place of honor. Sakura-chan. Despite her apparent weariness, Kurenai invited Sakura into her living room. Tea was already available, and Sakura accepted a cup with gratitude. So, what brings you here? Shouldn't you be with Kakashi-senpai right now? Sakura scowled. Kakashi-sensei is training with Sasuke-kun, and Naruto found his own teacher. Kurenai thought, that's right, Jiraiya-sama is in town. It's likely that Hiruzen-sama gave him the order to train the brat. The red-eyed woman guessed, you want me to teach you Genjutsu? I'm sorry, but I already have a Genin team. Hinata, Shino and Kiba all need my help. Especially Shino, he has to fight a wind user from Suna in the tournament, and I need to focus quite a bit on his training. Shino won't win this battle on the strength of Genjutsu alone. Sakura insisted he can handle his training alone, can't he? And he might even be better off with an actual wind user to train with. Kurenai remarked drearily, those are rare in Konoha. Sakura made a feeble offer. I can pay you. Kurenai chose to overlook Sakura's explanation for the time being, but she was more concerned with the money. The cost of raising a child was just too high. Learning Genjutsu is a steep road, she said in her tutorial. In the beginning it's easy, but the leaps to mastery are hard ones. If you have 3,000 ryo, I'll give you my books and notes, master every technique, and I'll take you on as an apprentice. Unfortunately, the textbooks described almost 100 distinct Genjutsu techniques that produced exactly the results you needed. While there were only a dozen generic techniques for different situations, the idea of reading so many books made Sakura's academic mind shudder, but she persisted and paid 300 ryo notes for the bulky hardcovers. Dizzily thankful for a diversion from her current relationship issue, she stumbled out the front door, looking forward to the challenge. You want me to learn what? There are 7 classes of offensive jutsu: yin, yang, fire, water, earth, air and lightning. Out of all of those, the last 5 are the easiest to teach, and only water can be used effectively against Gaara. On this point, Anko was adamant. Anko pointed out that even with his true chakra nature, earth wouldn't be sufficient and that fire, air, and lightning would take too long to fully develop. They debated the merits of the other elemental types. But if I can create enough heat, can't I hurt him without breaking through the sand? Replied Naruto. Anko retorted, you might, but how much heat could you create? Sand is versatile. Gaara probably has 1,001 uses for it. But the one thing nobody can stop is blunt force. Water will give you that and more, and the jutsu I'm teaching you should be enough on its own. She was also capable of teaching 2 elements, fire and water. Naruto questioned doubtfully, you're teaching me one Suiden jutsu and expecting me to fight Gaara. Why not a Kaiden jutsu? I can put enough heat into it to bake him. I'm telling you, he doesn't even move. With deadly composure, Anko said, yes, and do you know why he doesn't move? It's because he's the best. If you come up with an amazing strategy based on a clearly exploitable weakness, don't use it. Odds are that your opponent knows it and knows how to kill you the minute you try anything they've seen before. Gaara probably uses the Suna Shunshin no Jutsu anyways, and a good Suiden jutsu will be faster than a Kaiden jutsu of the same caliber. Suna Shunshin, I think Temari used that in the Forest of Death. I didn't know there were different versions of the Shunshin technique, Naruto thought. Oh, sure, replied Anko. Every good Chuunin has a clone technique and a Shunshin variant. Konoha uses the Kage Bunshin and the regular Shunshin, but Suna has sand-themed versions of both. Kirigakure uses Mizu Bunshin and the Kage Shunshin. You see, the picture problem is, both of those techniques aren't for Genin. Bunshin take too much chakra, and the Shunshin requires years of practice to travel more than a few meters. Gaara has the experience and the chakra for both. You can't teleport worth shit. Alright, fine, I'll learn your stinkin' Suiden jutsu. Then shut the hell up and start meditating. The nature of water was easier to align with than that of air or lightning. Anko hovered around his shoulder, making obnoxious farting noises, and maybe actually farting, he couldn't tell, which made the meditation more challenging. Generally, the water was silent, whether it was moving quickly or slowly, until it wasn't. However, change was another aspect of water's nature. Water was unpredictable, and it could not be stopped. Naruto visualized Sensei's clones moving slowly toward him in order to get into the right frame of mind. Anko questioned, are you imagining water? Good, I was hoping I wouldn't be able to distract you now. I've been told you got the crash course in ninjutsu, but you managed the Kage Bunshin without understanding chakra, so I'll keep the lesson short. You've seen fire jutsu, so you know that you need chakra best in the mouth. Create water using the hand seals dragon, tiger and rabbit, then blow. After taking a deep breath and holding it, Naruto swiftly moved chakra around his mouth. He made the hand seals just to be sure, even though it felt damp when he was done. The pressure reached unthinkable levels and the water felt real in his mouth. He parted his lips. There was now a new river at Training Ground 3. Anko watched in astonishment as the Suiden Mazurapa excavated a trench in the ground that led to the pond. As the jutsu died, the water returned to the trench. We could rent you out as a landscaper for the daimyo, she said. Excellent job, Naruto-kun. With a devilish smile, Naruto opened his eyes. Who says I'm done, Anko-sensei? Had she not been warned, his attempt to use a water blast to knock her head off her shoulders would have been successful. Consequently, Anko used Shunshin to get behind Naruto and clamp both hands around his mouth while he choked on the water. When he finally succeeded in turning off the chakra, the water backfired and filled his stomach to an uncomfortable level. Naruto immediately threw up a spectacular spray of water and gastric acid after Anko removed her hands. "That's what you get for trying to get me all wet," Anko said poutily. "There are other ways you go about doing that." Naruto found the subconscious energy to blush even though he was having trouble breathing and wasn't paying any attention to his sensei. Tenten wondered once more what Sakura had been up to. Her pink-haired comrade had a bull's temper and the attention span of a butterfly when not reading despite being smaller in stature. She was very similar to her idol. Tsunade Tenten preferred to believe that Sakura would need to wait a few more years to reach Tsunade's breast size. Sakura was only a year younger than Tsunade, who was approaching 60, so that too was acceptable. "You were distracted," Neji remarked during a sparring exercise. The Hyuga was upside down on a training post and both participants had to maintain one foot on the log at all times to avoid gravity's wrath. No, adamant Tenten, she was upside down too, and her chakra had been slipping, putting her in danger of falling off, so she refocused. A second later she countered with a flying halo of darts on ninja wire. After deftly deflecting Neji's open palm strike, Neji batted them all away, but she was able to jerk them back on course thanks to the wire. Neji violently disrupted her chakra with the Jukin, causing the darts to fall dead. Tenten returned to the inverted battle with a kama in one hand as the storage seals on her belt flashed as usual. Neji had the advantage, but Tenten was good enough at hand-to-hand combat to push his endurance and fast reflexes to the limit. The most satisfying workout she could think of was sparring with Neji. She almost fell when Neji gave her a shin kick. "You would never have allowed such a sloppy attack to penetrate your defenses," he grumbled. "What is taking your mind off of the match?" Tenten let out a sigh and took a step back while tending to her aching shin. "If you must know, I'm in a relationship. The rest of it is none of your damn business." After a pause, Neji remarked, "I was expecting something more mundane. Why is this bothering you? I was under the impression that relationships brought happiness to both members." "You sound like a machine," Tenten murmured, "and for your information, it's because I'm worried. Being a ninja is dangerous business, and it's my goddamn right to feel afraid now that we've settled that." Neji kicked Tenten once more, this time in the abdomen, and clapped the sickle's blade between his palms. "Whoever your boyfriend is, I am sure you've chosen him in part due to his competence. He will be fine," Neji continued. "You, however, are in danger of falling off the log and cracking your skull open, so I would suggest you pay attention." Tenten was rendered unconscious at the conclusion of the sparring session, and Neji's arm was slightly cut. He caught her falling and wondered who the lucky bastard was that he had to frighten away. "Anko sensei, you said something about there being 7 types of ninjutsu," Naruto was recalling after the most recent sparring match, in which Anko decided to increase his leg weights because the old ones were now too light. They were restocking their chakra stores. Anko said, "Well, 7 main ones," as she lay on her back and gazed up at the sky. "There's stuff like fuinjutsu and summoning ninjutsu as well, but those aren't classified the same way. Why do you ask?" Naruto cocked his head thoughtfully and said, "Well, I met a ninja in Wave Country who could use ice release. You didn't mention that on your list. Not that Hyeten would be especially useful. Gaara could just crack the ice, but why didn't you include it?" Anko let out a sigh. Although she disliked discussing Kekkei Genkai, there were some topics that required direct explanation. "Your buddy has what we call a bloodline limit," she clarified. "One of the 2 ways to have a Kekkei Genkai is to perfectly balance 2 chakra natures. It's pretty much impossible unless your parents can do it. So not many people actually have that anymore. Ice release is a perfect balance between wind and water chakra, for example." Naruto said, "You said almost impossible, with suspicion. Doesn't there have to be a first person to have a Kekkei Genkai?" "Right," said Anko. "The Shodai Hokage was the first to have the Mokuton, which is a perfect blend of earth and water, and recently a family in Iwagakure managed to combine earth and lightning. It only happens once in a blue moon, though." With eagerness, Naruto inquired, "What's the other way?" "Sasuke Tami's eyes are a Kekkei Genaki, right? And in Hinata-chan's eyes too. And Shino has bugs everywhere." "The Aburame don't have a bloodline limit, they're just strange," said Anko. "Hinata's eyes are a Kekkei Genkai called the Byakugan, and it came from a jinchuriki." "What?" cried Naruto. "The first Hyuga," Anko said with a professorial voice, "was a man by the name of Hitsuke. Long before Konoha was founded, a demon was sealed in him. An Oni, I believe, but Iruka-san would know for sure. Anyways, he was immediately blinded, and that was that his son was born with the Oni sealed in him, Hitsuke dying after its extraction, but he could see despite appearing blind. Hitsuke's 3 grandchildren were all girls, and each could see as well over time. The Ona's diluted chakra empowered their eyes into what we know as the Byakugan. Later, a man who married a Hyuga had children with Sharingan, and they broke off to form the Uchiha clan. Sasuke's got mutant eyes?" Anko gave her a forehead slap? Is that all you got out of that? Naruto thought about the revelation. And Hinata's a jinchuriki too? No, you dolt, sighed Anko. Maybe the first Uchiha was an Ona's jinchuriki too, and that's what caused the mutation, but the original Oni was split into fragments a long time ago. Especially powerful Byakugan like Neji's are because of higher concentrations of demonic chakra. Same with the Nohara clan's Kekkei Genkai, their ancestor was the jinchuriki of a Bakaneko. And all of her descendants have the occasional flight Kekkei Genkai and the instinctive ability to form fire without chakra. It's all to do with whether the demon is extracted before you die. For several minutes, Naruto remained silent when he finally said, "That's pretty heavy, Sensei. You're saying I could be the head of a new clan?" Anko gave a shrug. "It's up to you, Naruto-kun." Gaara was spied on by rivals besides Anko, supported by teammates Kin and Zaku. Dosu Kinuda watched the lone Suna shinobi by all accounts. He was still quite young, but he appeared much younger in addition. Gaara was rather short and unthreatening until you saw his haunted eyes, which were hard to see in the dark with a sandstorm surrounding him. He was much more formidable. Why didn't he kill the green idiot like he was supposed to? Kin grumbled. Change of plans. Nara Shikamaru interfered. Zaku snappily stated, "We have to neutralize Gaara with poison at least 30 seconds before Yakushi-san will step in, so we need to tag him at least once." Why isn't Kabuto-san doing this himself? He's the one who can regenerate both arms if Gaara crushes them off, Kin grumbled. Dosu checked off the items on his fingers, saying, "He's a short-range fighter, a coward, and he has minions spread out, minions." Zaku and Kin fled through the alleys around the Jinchuriki while cursing over the radio at midnight. Gaara sat in silence on a street corner, surrounded by the darkness and the mist of misery that Mother projected. This situational ignorance was what Kintsuchi wanted to exploit. In addition, their whole cell was long range. They might have a slim chance against an honest-to-God Jinchuriki, especially one that plays to their strengths. On my signal, commanding Dosu as their leader started to manipulate sound waves. The other Auto shinobi remained in their positions, consummate professionals despite his inner ear warping severely distorting his perception. Gaara most likely didn't notice before pointing both palms at the redhead. Zaku waited until he was compelled to get up and start walking down the street intoxicated. At first, Gaara was unaware of the twin air blasts, but the impact was absorbed by his shield of sand. His mind resisted the movement, and he nearly doubled over as he turned around. Dosu intensified his sound assault with the goal of both disorienting and disabling. Although lights were turning on in windows due to the sounds of the early battle, any significant assistance would not arrive for several minutes. The upper echelon was not informed of a battle in the middle of a street for about 10 minutes because Kabuto had mud clones that prevented the Anbu from patrolling the area. It is clear that whatever intelligence was in charge of Gaara's sand depended at least in part on her senses, although the amorphous defense ate up the majority of Kin's senbon. Some slipped and missed by chance after all. Gaara was a tiny, movable target. Zaku stretched Gaara and Shukaku to their limits as he prepared for another air blast and released them simultaneously. With a raging tendril of sand aimed at Kin, Gaara questioned savagely, "Why are you so eager to die?" "Orochimaru-sama needs greater control of you, bastard," Zaku said, quite largely to himself. "Speaking of bastards, where's Yakushi-san? He's not going to help us, Dosu." Gaara had already set a trap after realizing who was interfering with his coordination. A marble-sized sphere of sand drifted harmlessly away from the altercation before swerving back and sneaking into Dosu's sandals. Back, the tiny bit of sand broke both tendons with bone-crushing force, rendering Dosu immobile. He survived long enough to witness Gaara's icy grin before being killed by Shukaku. Any traces of the unfortunate ninja were totally erased by the brief sand burial. There was not even time for him to scream. "Shit!" snarled Zaku. "Kin, hurry up and give him a love tap already." Kin yelled, "I'm trying." In response, she had a tiny opening when Zaku launched his next attack, but Gaara covered it without even glancing. Gaara was still idly motionless, but the sand was now creeping in Zaku's direction. Kin estimated that they had almost no chance of success. Now, there was a lot of worry in the neighborhood every time Zaku's attack struck. It produced a satisfyingly loud th-wump, which Dosu had always grumbled was a bad quality for a ninja. Even though Gaara didn't give a damn about trivial matters like arrest or execution, Kin found herself nodding. The only time Zaku struggled was long enough to crush a nearby wall before he followed Dosu's lead. "Mother wants your blood," Gaara said icily. "This is screwy." Kin thought she gave Kabuto a quick glance before stepping back from Gaara and darting through the ANBU's advancing line. Although Gaara was aware of her absence, he was accustomed to seeing cowardice in his enemies and assured Shukaku that he would kill her if given the opportunity. Kabuto asked aloud, Should I kill you? You failed your mission, your teammates died and you ran scared from a little boy. He laughed. I used to be that way like Gaara-kun. That is, not you, but discretion is the better part of valor. And I must say that you fought well. Your senbon aim needs work, though even Naruto-kun is better than you. Kabuto gave a shrug. Or maybe not, he can only do parlor tricks, and furthermore you happen to be more useful than any jinchuriki. Very well, I'll let you live. Do not disappoint Orochimaru-sama in the future, Kin-san. A senior citizen emerged from a nearby door. She was the woman who had given Kabuto his last 60 or so D-rank missions, which he had finished using mud clones by the dozen. He had most likely broken some sort of record. The most devoted double agent or the most menial tasks completed by a genin. Her words were, "Hello there, young man. Could you help an old woman and tell me what's afoot? I keep hearing this terrible racket." Kabuto's menacing face vanished, and a charming smile took its place. "Certainly, ma'am, I heard a fight between some of those foreigners from Otogakure a few blocks away. I doubt there'll be a problem anymore." Unexpectedly, Kakashi completed Sasuke's training early enough for him to feel confident about his chances of defeating Shikamaru. Sasuke had made as much progress as was realistically possible with just 1 week until the tournament, but Kakashi wasn't particularly concerned given Shikamaru's small skill set. The chidori was overly strong, but Kakashi was well aware that Sasuke would require it for the upcoming battle with Gaara. He asked absently, "You're going to keep training?" Standing slightly behind him, Sasuke was looking into the distance. Kakashi had observed that it was a habit of his. Sasuke's response was rhetorical. "If I stop, what right have I to call myself Uchiha? My brother made Chuunin at age 10 on his first try. I'm 12 now. I need to do this." Kakashi remarked, "A word of advice, Sasuke-kun. Being a Chuunin isn't just about fighting ability. A Chuunin is a potential leader, and most of them are assigned on missions with other Chuunin or as a leader of genin. Think about what you want to show the judges, because in the end it's Hokage-sama and Kazekage-sama who'll decide whether you pass or fail." "Is that so?" wonders Sasuke. "Well, consideration is given to other factors as well. Don't worry, I have full confidence that you'll become a Chuunin. Who knows, maybe you'll even win the tournament." A smile crinkled Kakashi's visible eye. "Did Itachi?" The one-eyed Jonin let out a sigh. "You have a one-track mind. Sasuke-kun, no. Itachi-san did not win the tournament. Hiruzen-sama ordered him to lose his second round. Though he was promoted anyways, the kunoichi he lost to eventually went on to beat 3 genin from other villages and eventually won the tournament herself." Kakashi didn't ask Sasuke for an answer, and he didn't respond either. Anko evaluated Naruto's strategy. It mainly depended on Naruto's chakra reserves and Gaara's aversion to movement, although they were equal in the latter regard. Naruto intended to use the Mazurapa no Jutsu to blast the sand out of his path if needed in order to create space for kunai. "Why kunai?" had inquired Anko. As it happened, Naruto had a principled preference for them despite what Kakashi said and did. Sasuke was a long-range fighter who preferred shuriken and had never needed a blade in close combat. Contrarily, Naruto enjoyed getting close to his opponents. He had clarified, "I have a plan for diversions, too, Kage Bunshin with soldier pills." He pulled out a bottle of generic pills that contained the emergency chakra boosters. Although Anko was unaware of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu specifics, Naruto reassured her that they could replicate any equipment they carried since soldier pills only enhanced energy production rather than containing it. Their reproduction cost was minimal in terms of chakra. A line of long-range water cannons could then be formed by the clones feasting on them. With a, "I like your style," Anko replied. Shukaku was more difficult to deal with, but Naruto had a strategy for that as well. When Gaara became unconscious, the Tanuki demon would come out, and killing him was never considered in private. Anko acknowledged that Naruto wasn't prepared to murder, but she was prepared to explain that it was the only way to defeat him short of using Shukaku. "I don't need to kill Gaara and I don't need to knock him unconscious, either. I just need him to stop fighting." Naruto had bought a toxin that would partially paralyze Gaara. In order to achieve this, he had only received a local anesthetic by flashing a Konoha Hite 8, and it wasn't very strong, but it was just what he needed. "I was watching that tape of Gaara's fight with Lee," Naruto clarified. "His sand is controlled directly by Shukaku, which is probably why his seal is so weak. While I was watching, I noticed that it only ever defended him. Gaara had to make hand seals to go on the offensive. He has to move his arms to attack, and he can't do that if I tag him with this painkiller stuff." Anko questioned whether he had taken the medication from a medical professional because, as far as she was aware, Konoha had no shops that sold lidocaine. The fast-acting curare or the untraceable ricin coating were preferred by most ninja, but it was used to prevent heart attacks or something. Anko chose to give her student a break and let him get away with robbing a hospital because most ninjas didn't have to subdue their target without killing or rendering them unconscious. She had done it all before. She had questioned, "Are you sure you can get him?" I have a plan for that too, stated Naruto with assurance. I gotta say, that's the best thing you've taught me, have a plan for everything, and you'll never lose. With a sudden, let's celebrate, Anko said. Celebrate what? Inquired Naruto. Nothing's happened worth celebrating for all I know. Gaara could kill me in 6 days, that would suck. Then I'd never become Hokage and make everyone here respect me. Oh, and I guess I promised to get rid of the Hyuga curse seal. So I can't let Gaara kill me still. Why celebrate? Why not? Retorted Anko. When you get to be as old as I am, you realize that you have to party before the battle, just in case your friends don't come back alive. Anywhere you want to go in particular? Naruto exclaimed, Ichiraku ramen. As he rose from Anko's couch and searched for her phone, he was tackled to the ground by Anko, who leapt after him. No! Exclaimed Anko. There's no way in hell we're eating at a fast food restaurant, trust me. Last time that happened I swear I put on 5 pounds. If your best idea is some ramen place, I'll just order food. Call your friends, Pinky and the Uchiha and whoever. No friends were invited to the celebration, and Naruto complained about Anko's disdain for Tuchi's signature product's incredible deliciousness. Anko ordered takeout to Ayame's apartment over the phone. For a few minutes Anko changed the number of pork ramen that Naruto yelled to 10 while telling Ayame, and then she ordered 3 for herself. Naruto wandered around Anko's house during the wait. It was located in a corner of the building, and Anko, like all senior ninja, was extremely wealthy. A kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and antechamber circled the living room like satellites, while a huge skylight cast the red of the sunset across the space. Overall, it was orders of magnitude more opulent and roughly 3 times the size of Naruto's rundown apartment. After hanging up, Anko vanished into her kitchen, where she kept her torture devices beneath the counter and her food in the refrigerator. This time, she pulled out a bottle of clear liquid and uncorked it, but she didn't retrieve either. She groaned as she drank a tiny glass of the visibly alcoholic beverage. That's the stuff, she said. So, what do you want to do while we wait for dinner? I have board games, karaoke and a widescreen television. You have a television? Isn't that a little expensive? Anko felt her left eye twitch and struggled to control it. I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that, and then I'm going to ask what movie you want to watch. Either that or you get to listen to me sing. Trust me, after a few more drinks you'll be begging for me to stop. You pick, Naruto uttered sluggishly. I sound like Shikamaru, don't I? You've earned it, said Anko kindly. Let's see, I have a few kaiju flicks and the complete Fujikaze Yukie collection. Wow, I thought I had more. Frowning, Naruto walked over. You do see, that one on the end? Tsunade, the legendary sucker. Anko became enraged after verifying the title Naruto had mentioned. We're not going to watch that one. It has, stuff in it that's a bit mature for a 12-year-old. I'm 14, and why can't I watch a movie about Tsunade Hime? Although her summons was the main reason for his interest in the Slug Princess, Tsunade was a mysterious individual in her own right. With permission from the Sandaime, she and another medic left Konoha after the Third Shinobi World War ended. Now, Iwa's battlefield medic ninja was far better staffed and more organized than Konoha's. It was said that a similarly skilled medic from Kiri was reprimanding his own division. She's not actually in the film, Anko said with hesitation, particularly not over a film that made sexual fun of Tsunade's moniker. She truly did not want to be the one to give Naruto the talk. Iruka was in charge of that. Luckily, it only displayed the title and the case was in its favor. Everything was pretty much explained by the picture on the front. But hey, where did it go? Anko whistled, not hiding the pornography at all until she had an opportunity to burn it for having the audacity to show it to her pupil. Hold on a second, 14. She cried out, Christ, when did you start at the academy? You're pretty damn short, you know that? Naruto said, I failed the graduation exam twice, with a bitter tone. By the time I graduated, Sakura-chan and Sasuke both caught up and I haven't hit my growth spurt yet. Okay. Someday I'll be taller than both of them. Right, snorted Anko. We'll see. Oh, you're 14. Yeah, so? That makes you legal. Care for a drink? Jiraiya eventually made it back to Konoha feeling even more hopeless than before. His spies were pleased to tell him that Kumo had a crisis under control in the northeast. Orochimaru had to spend another week putting things right after it was discovered that one of them was on his payroll. As expected, as soon as he entered the village, Anbu called him to Sarutobi's office, which irritated him even though he had already intended to do so. It was obvious that Hiruzen no longer liked him. Explain, was the Hokage's first word. Jiraiya stated, there was an emergency, with equal gravity. Konoha's spies were compromised by Orochimaru. I spent a while cleaning house. Could it have waited? No, the room's temperature was rapidly dropping. Jiraiya, I told you to give Naruto the Toad summoning contract. Imagine my surprise when I am informed that he now has a different contract given his recent association with a private instructor. It may be that he has somehow done it on his own, but perhaps you've managed to pleasantly surprise me. I told you, Jiraiya grumbled, giving apprentices contracts as bad conduct. Sure, some groups like the Seven Swordsmen have traditions and such, but the only way to work effectively with a summon is to use the Kachiyose no Jutsu yourself. Sarutobi snarled, this is about village morale, not Naruto's effectiveness. It'll boost people's confidence with another Toad summoner in the village. Hey, giving Minato-kun the contract was stretching my standards already, and it was a minor miracle the Toads accepted him, Jiraiya sighed. Naruto needs to have his own summons. I'm just concerned that I can't find him anywhere. He never showed up in his apartment, and somehow none of the people he usually spends time with have seen him. Kakashi, Book-chan, Ebisu-san and Konohamaru. I even staked out that ramen place for 10 hours before they shooed me out. If Naruto doesn't want to be found, then clearly he won't. Sarutobi ejected. You call yourself a ninja? If you'd retained even the faintest spark of initiative I hammered into your silly head, you would have checked the mission boards. He's been training with Mitarashi Anko-san for the Chuunin selection exams. That's unfortunate, Kakashi said without a word, angry that the younger Jonin had somehow entered the room without warning either Sarutobi or Jiraiya. They both jumped. The Hokage quickly recovered from his shock and asked, Kakashi, how is Uchiha Sasuke progressing? Kakashi said, he'll do fine, without much emotion. We were quite fortunate that Orochimaru's curse seal failed to take hold in his chakra system. Assuming you want to know about my other students. Sakura-chan is currently 2 inches deep in a book on Genjutsu theory, and I have yet to see what Ebisu-san has trained Naruto in before he was dumped on Anko, obviously. About that, as they fluttered through the evening air, Kakashi and Jiraiya quickly came together on Anko's apartment without exchanging words. As soon as they got there, they realized that there was a party of some kind because they could both hear Anko's awful singing coming from the streets for her. The inebriated slur did not portend well. The boy in question yelled something incredibly repulsive and threw a vase at her just as the two men were ready to barge in and make sure she hadn't violated. Poor Naruto. Anko was moderately hammered, but he was able to prevent it from colliding with the ground. Jiraiya shrugged as Kakashi glanced at him. He mouthed, wait, the fuck kid? Shouted Anko. I get it. You suck at karaoke. Let's just watch Princess Foon kick ass with the magical rainbow chakra, or whatever the hell it was. The best movie ever. Anko retorted. I fucking cried when Mao got his face melted off. And you can saw it off, cuz we're not watching porn. Hiruzen Sama would chew me up like a toothpick. I knew it, snapped Naruto. There's no way Tsunadeheim would she? Dunno. Actually, can I have more sake? Anko warned. You're not throwing up on my floor again, brat. You barely had any lightweight. Silent laughter was trembling Jiraiya after giving him a chilling glance. Kakashi opened the door while Anko complained about his weight and managed to keep his hands off her throat. Naruto was throttling him for all he was worth inside. May I assume that you've been more productive than this in the past? He said blandly as Naruto and Anko slowly turned to face him. There was a halting silence. Weakly, Anko said, I didn't actually show it to him, honest. When I told the two of you to train with Ebisu-san, that was an order from your sensei, Kakashi yelled. Do you think orders are optional? Naruto and Sakura both shuddered. Their sensei had never been so angry before. He had always been a little irritated, particularly after Haku got away, but never quite as angry as he appeared now. The three genin shivered as his murderous intent began to seep through the protective shell he had placed over his feelings. Kakashi-sensei. Don't call me that, interrupted Kakashi. Obviously you don't value my input and my advice as your sensei, so for now we're just colleagues. Kakashi-senpai, Sakura said with care. Why are you here so early? You said it would be a month before Sasuke-kun finished preparing for his fight with Neji-san and Shikamaru-san. It seems the lessons I've taught haven't been learned, Kakashi stated icily. You haven't shown any of the qualities that teamwork requires to succeed. I returned because Sasuke has advanced to the point where sparring with opponents of his own skill level will benefit him. You don't seem to remember that I get paid to train you to be a shinobi. When you don't respect or trust me, it shows badly on me, he growled. To be honest, I'm disappointed in both of you now. There is only one way for you to be saved. Unprepared, Kakashi threw 2 bells to Sasuke, who caught them and stuffed them in his belt. You have 30 minutes to get the bells, Kakashi warned. If you haven't learned teamwork from me yet, then you never will. As his 2 teammates rounded on him, Sasuke backed nervously into the forest. Naruto grinned evilly and quickly took off his leg weights. Feeling as though gravity had suddenly stopped holding him down, he bounded after Sasuke, leaving Sakura in their dust. and was immediately beaten to the ground by Sasuke. Naruto spent his time honing his form by sparring Guy, while the Uchiha received a month of speed training from Kakashi. The two were incredibly different from one another. Sasuke flipped and twisted like an acrobat, twice as fast as Naruto and with far more vicious punches, while Naruto moved like a tank, shrugging off painful blows and staying low and grounded. The Haruno reluctantly joined the battle as Naruto's backup after Kakashi gave Sakura a menacing look. She whispered, "Megan. Jubaku Satsu," and Sakura's form disappeared into the mist. Maybe Sasuke would have been more aware if he had noticed, but Naruto had just landed a glance shot against his chest, which was considered blocked by the flak jacket for sparring purposes, but Naruto had actually nearly wounded him. Sasuke staggered back and was immediately engulfed by tree roots. Their sensei was curious about Sakura's B-rank Genjutsu training, but Sasuke had already dealt with it. The fact that the roots were phony was sufficient to counteract their immobilizing effect, and before Naruto could react, he had activated his Sharingan. Sasuke turned and kicked, forcing Sakura to duck, but then he was hit on both sides, Sakura low and Naruto high. Sasuke didn't bother moving out from between them because of his superior vision and lightning-fast reflexes. Instead, he feinted towards Naruto and doubled back behind Sakura, whose eyes widened as he reappeared at her back and put her in a headlock. Sakura flailed wildly as Sasuke tried to choke her into unconsciousness, but his grip kept her relatively short arms away from the crucial parts. Naruto circled warily, not afraid to hit Sakura but concerned that action would give Sasuke an opening. Sasuke felt as though he had suddenly accelerated to hundreds of miles per hour when Sakura finally brought her hands together and slapped together a Genjutsu, dropping her in shock and sending her running away like a scared rabbit. Sakura abandoned Genjutsu completely and moved just behind Naruto with a brace of shuriken as Sasuke was forced to creatively dodge Naruto's crushing blows. Sakura threw the first volley of steel ninja stars, one of which lodged itself in the leather of Sasuke's sandals as he tried to kick the weapon out of the air, and he winced as he landed on that foot. Sensing his distraction, Naruto's roundhouse kick sent Sasuke bodily into the air. Sasuke set his stance, made 3 hand seals, and puffed up his cheeks before landing on one foot and removing the shuriken from the other shoe with amazing agility. Kaiten. Jutsu no Gokakyu. He gave a grunt. Sweden. Jutsu no Mizurapa. For a while, Uchiha and Uzumaki stared down at each other over their respective jutsu. Naruto growled halfway between them. An equally large stream of water met the raging flame and both stopped dead. The water evaporated much too quickly further into the fireball, but it also created a barrier that the fire couldn't pass through. When the fireball flickered and faded out, Naruto's powerful blast of water caught him full force and pushed him back until he managed to swerve to the side. Naruto ended the stream of water and approached Sasuke slowly. Rubbing his hands, Sasuke stumbled first because producing heat from chakra was less demanding than creating matter from energy, but maintaining the temperature and size stretched his control. He exclaimed, "I finally beat you," with a sense of accomplishment. To be honest, I thought it would take longer than this. The legendary Sasuke Uchiha. Although Naruto wasn't particularly afraid, he began to shake when Sasuke met his gaze, and the Sharingan yawned and swallowed him whole. Sasuke got up, looking worn out but still having a lot of strength left, and as long as he looked Naruto in the eyes, the other Sharingan couldn't even flinch. Both Sharingans had 2 tomo. The Kunoichi was slower than both of them, but Sasuke was too busy using his Genjutsu to react in time, so she sprinted up to him, put one arm around his neck, and put the tip of a kunai to his throat. Of course, neglecting Sakura had its consequences. "Look away," she said, and Sasuke, conscious of the streams of blood streaming down his collar, reluctantly stopped the Genjutsu. Naruto, grinning mischievously, reached out and pulled out the bells. "Isn't teamwork fantastic?" With joy, he said. Not a single muscle moved. Sasuke held at knife point. Sakura waited for Naruto to stop the exercise, and Naruto held both bells. When Sakura held out her hand for one, Naruto's smile disappeared. "All right. Give her one, and we'll continue your training," Kakashi said. "Before your Goken can be useful, you need to work out some kinks in your taijutsu." After giving Sakura a long look, Naruto turned to Kakashi and said, "No." Kakashi tilted his head sideways and said, "Will you please forgive me? You were correct. As my sensei, I don't respect your advice. You hardly qualify as my sensei. It's your responsibility to train us, but you desert us for 3 weeks as soon as Sasuke requests private instruction," yelled Naruto. "That is not merely partiality. It is recklessness. You said, you can't do it, and I have to battle Gaara of the Sand." Sasuke hadn't actually requested private training, but it didn't matter because of how thin the ice was Naruto was on. "My decisions are not for you to question," Kakashi said coldly. "Had you bothered to find Ebisu, he would have started your ninjutsu training. You spent a small fortune on Anko, but I can tell you that he is well versed in all disciplines except nintaijutsu since Sasuke has the best chance of becoming Chuunin out of all of you. I decided to train him even though I don't have the power to say no. To be honest, at the start of the test, he was the only one prepared for the responsibility return after a few more years of experience. So it's acceptable to simply leave us. Flippantly, Naruto retorted, we don't simply vanish when you turn your back. As he screamed at Kakashi, Sakura let go of Sasuke and grabbed a bell from Naruto, who looked at her in unjustified shock, as if he couldn't believe she had the audacity to take something from him. That's it, he said plainly, and Naruto turned to leave. Naruto, where do you think you're heading? Kakashi dialed. Gazing over his shoulder, Naruto declared, I'm going to beat Gaara after training until I'm completely immobile after winning the entire tournament. I'm going to leave this team and all of you behind. Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi watched him go with sadness. Sakura wondered why Naruto had been so antagonistic toward her. Sasuke wondered how he had changed so fast, and Kakashi wondered if Naruto would make it through the battle with Gaara. He had grown to like the boy, and maybe it was too much to hope that he would just see sense and give up. Call him a pervert, but Jiraiya's lack of basic deductive skills was not the reason he was named one of the legendary Sannin. Now that he had a hazy idea of how and why Naruto spent his time, it was safe to assume that he had returned to Anko following the incident involving the other members of Team 7. Jiraiya used Shunshin to settle into a comfortable position at Anko's dinner table, and when Naruto barged in, he started drawing his unwitting hostess without her shirt on. You? What on earth do you desire? The Toad Sage tried desperately not to laugh as he yelled, backed out the front door abruptly, and Jiraiya snapped his fingers, causing an unseen force to kick Naruto onto his face and slam the door behind him. How did you accomplish that? Naruto complained, got to his feet, and pretended nothing had happened. You'll find out when you're a Jonin. Jiraiya shrugged. In any case, I'm here to speak with you. I assume you're Jiraiya. Why did you choose this moment to simply appear and present me with an offer? Inquired Naruto. His original plan to offer Naruto the opportunity to apprentice under him was blown to pieces, but Jiraiya's official reason for being interested in Naruto was still training and controlling the Kyuubi. He said as much, and watched as Naruto turned an intriguing shade of purple. Jiraiya wondered what he was supposed to say to the child. When people see me, they turn around and leave, and I've always wondered why they despise me. They had a good reason, at least, for the past 14 years, when everyone in the village was afraid I would lose my temper and murder them. Where have you been? I could have benefited from your assistance. You had the option to inform them. Instead of using a human, you could have used a fucking cooking tool like shukaku to seal the Kyuubi, but you did, anyway. Why me? Did the Yondaime have anything more practical than a fucking human baby to seal the 9 tails into? How about the day I was born? I must have the world's worst karma. Who was I to deserve this in my previous life? The Mizukage of Sandaime? For confining a demon in an orphan? The Yondaime Hokage? That would be ironic, wouldn't it? Jiraiya took a deep breath, figuring that now would be a bad time to bring up the fact that he was actually his godfather, who had been away for the last 10 years due to his role as head of Konoha's spy network, and that he hadn't expected Naruto to be this jaded, and now he had to deal with the consequences. What else can I say? He asked frantically, why am I even considering this? Naruto-kun ought to be snatching up the opportunity to learn from me? Before he died, Jiraiya said nervously, the Yondaime began working on a jutsu sufficient to kill or incapacitate without the use of hand seals. I think it's based on a natural phenomenon, but it used some principles that I didn't fully understand in any case. The Kyuubi's attack interrupted the late Hokage-sama's attempt to infuse this jutsu with elemental chakra. I learned this particular jutsu from him in the hopes that I could finish it, that is, as it's quite powerful already, it needs elemental chakra before it'll hit with anything more than kinetic momentum. If you want, I could teach. Piss off! Yelled Naruto. Seriously, have you no shame? I told you, I already have a teacher. But what's worse is that you're just offering it to me. Nobody just offers me things. Kakashi-senpai had the bell test, my summons tested me, and Anko-sensei is taking my money. What do you want? In his lifeless manner, he disregarded the traitorous voice in his mind that maintained Senshi had been ecstatic to have another summoner. Jiraiya slumped. Sarutobi-sama has also expressed concerns about your choice of tutor. Mitarashi Anko-san has a history of. Slam. Naruto's chakra signature bristled angrily as it moved down the hallway, and the Toad Sage watched with sadness as the door closed. One of the more regrettable betrayals was Hiruzen's order to go behind Anko's back, but Jiraiya was only now beginning to understand the full scope of his actions. The village hidden in leaves might have to deal with the fury of a young man who lacks control over his demon if this led to an excessive rift between Naruto and the Hokage. Jiraiya shuddered. It would be impossible for Konoha to survive another October like that. Anko somehow knew Naruto's location, the path across Konoha past the northernmost face of the village, and she returned from having her hair cut back to a uniform length before spat out copious amounts of gel at her hairdresser. This area, which was dominated by the towering Hokage monument, was mostly used by shinobi and housed almost all of their facilities, including stores, gyms, obstacle courses, training grounds, and the academy. The enormous homestead of the Hyuga clan was located to the west, while the decaying remnants of Uchiha Itachi's insane creation were located to the east. There were a number of secrets in the area, including a ferret that lived there and spent hours entertaining kids and torturing Tora, a pond concealed in a tree grove, and a pavilion employee who was a Kumobakure spy. The playground was the least impressive and least secret. The simple playground, which is small and composed of Iwa metal, was initially constructed so that shinobi could divert their kids by interacting with civilians. After years of exposure to the Kaiten Gokakyu no Jutsu, it had shrunk to half its former height. Senju Tobarama thought it was too risky for kids, but Uchiha Obito painted it again as part of one of his many childhood misadventures. Most people ignored it because it was still too risky for anyone other than the most naive. That meant, of course, that it was second only to the numerous hiding places in the Hokage monument itself. In front of Naruto, who was swinging bleakly beneath a twisted metal arm, Anko came to a crashing stop. Anko remembered the moment Sho's parents threw him out of the house. As he gazed up at her, his face oddly expressionless. Sho was permitted to remain in his own house by Orochimaru, but for weeks afterward, the man responded in a clipped manner and remained uncommunicative. Naruto said, "Anko-sensei, quietly, does Hokage-sama not like you?" Oh, that was the purpose of this. Ignoring how her knees were pushed up to her chest, Anko sank into the swing beside Naruto. "My Jonin-sensei was Orochimaru," she stated without emotion. She gave him a moment to absorb what she had said before Naruto suddenly stopped swinging. All of the Sannin, bastards that they are, only took one genin team. Orochimaru marched into the academy on graduation day one year and picked the 3 most promising shinobi for his team: Uchiha Shisui, Namikaze Sho, and myself. We were each considered talented. Shisui had an instinctive mastery of the Shunshin no Jutsu and his family's Dojutsu. Sho knew a rare form of Fuinjutsu, and I'm just fabulous. Naruto gave a snort. In any case, we trained on the southern peninsula for 2 years, and after we finished, Orochimaru brought us home and put us in the Chuunin exams just like you. Just a year and a half later, I actually won that tournament, beat 4 other ninja, and earned Chuunin, but Shisui didn't. I believe Orochimaru was more disappointed in him than anything else because we didn't really see each other again after that. A year later, Sho moved in with Orochimaru. Sho kind of left our team a month later and never came back, but I never really liked the guy because he was too focused on being his cousin's best. After that, it was just Orochimaru sensei and I, and we had a great time. It sounds like it was a blast, said Naruto in a lighthearted manner. Oh, it was, Anko reassured him sourly. I got the best training, the best assignments, and the best pay from Orochimaru. He made sure everyone in the village knew that I was his personal protege. I didn't see Sho again until a few years later, when he made Jonin. Shisui was a hero for a while, but he is now dead. He was the world's fastest man following the death of the Yondaime Hokage. However, as I mentioned, I was by myself. I had no parents at all. Are you an orphan? Curious, Naruto asked. Yes, I even got to choose my own name. Anko remarked. My favorite flavor is Midarashi. Naruto shook his head as his brief sense of humor overcame his negative attitude. Orochimaru was my world for a while, isn't it? Thus, a few weeks after Minato-sama's passing, he shows me his home's back room. Would I be interested in trying this jutsu he's trying out that allows him to share his power with others? The next thing I know, my beloved old sensei is evading the law and I'm in the cells at torture and interrogation. How about Sho? Naruto inquired, gazing thoughtfully at the tree branches above them. Anko said, I believe he was innocent, but many others didn't share that opinion. He was spared execution due to the influence of his family. The problem is that Orochimaru created a large number of these curse seals. He only ever used the cursed seal of heaven once, but some of them functioned like the 8 gates and others tapped into natural energy on me. Naruto leaned in and watched Orochimaru's accomplishment with awe or disgust as she pulled down the collar of her coat and brushed the edge of her metal shirt away from the triple tomo tattooed on her skin. He muttered vilely, so this is what he tried to hit Sasuke Teme with. Anko concurred, saying, it probably didn't take on your teammate, but yeah, and Konoha pretty much lost its shit after that. Jiraiya had disappeared. Tsunadeheim was a nervous mess, and Sarutobi was searching for a new Hokage. Orochimaru was the final straw, and the majority of them still blamed me even after my psychological evaluation was negative. You know what? How did you? Naruto asked clumsily. Anko explained wearily, this seal has power, but only if I give in to it. You see, when people despise you because of your power, that's the wrong thing to do. Konoha hates you just as much as it hates me. They are afraid of us. You are the only thing standing between them and a fiery death beneath the Nine-Tails' paws, and I am the mad scientist's experiment. The problem is that I was a member of the team that killed one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist a few years ago. Along with Aburame Shibi, I saved several dozen civilians from a hostage situation. Prior to that, they will also come around for you if you simply leave the Kyuubi alone one day. That monument will feature you and your adorable puffy hair. You truly believe that? For a few minutes, Naruto's disappointment in Sakura, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Sarutobi was pointless because Anko had faith in him. Tears were streaming down his face. Therefore, you wouldn't blame him if he spent the next few minutes giving her a strong hug, and you wouldn't blame Anko if she also started crying. The Suna army was growing restless. Gaara was getting harder to control every day, and now 2 Otochikure genin were dead. Orochimaru was a busy man, and planning an incursion took time, and too many of the factors involved were now slipping out of his control. Orochimaru had seen enough of those to know the signs, but this last one was a little more unsettling than the others, mainly because they should have beaten Gaara soundly. Kabuto, on the other hand, reported a crushing defeat on all fronts, and his subordinate had chosen to stay out of the fray, supposedly for his own protection. As long as the casualties were restricted to one group, the entire incident could be attributed to Gaara's occasional outbursts of homicidal rage. Orochimaru doubted he would see her again, but if he did, there was a price for betraying his only surviving genin, Kintsuchi, who was missing. A tracking team made up of 2 civilian bounty hunters who had been recruited and a defected Inuzuka were pursuing her, but it was likely that Tsuchi had crossed the southern border into the land of water. Orochimaru stewed in private for a few days after losing control over Gaara. His white secret technique kept his body alive without food or water, which freed him from distractions to think about how he would deal with Konoha again. Plans would need to be cancelled, deals changed, and tactics adjusted. A favorite tactic of Sarutobi's from the 2nd and 3rd Ninja World Wars, however, was this one. When you lack strength, a suitable show of force will work as well. The idea grew in his mind, becoming more and more feasible until Orochimaru was giggling uncontrollably as a different invasion plan appeared in his head. The Sound 5 had one more obstacle to overcome in the final hours before the invasion, so the Snake Sage called them in as he assessed his remaining forces. Where are you heading? Hello? Tenten asked strategically, and Sakura, who wasn't quite sure where she was going either, shrugged and turned back to face her. I guess I'll find out when I get there, she wrote. Has Lee-san arrived yet? Tenten shook her head. Neji, Naruto, and Sasuke were all competitors. Sakura suspected that Naruto had been doing that earlier, but had left early for the tournament, and Lee hadn't finished his sensei's challenge to run 100 laps around the village with a civilian guy, and Kakashi were with the other Jonin sensei. Sakura left for her mysterious destination with a flush on her face after Tenten kissed her cheek. She was distracted by her girlfriend and wandered aimlessly down the arena's back corridors, observing that they had a set layout to accommodate the bleachers above, storage rooms, a medical facility close to the arena floor, and evenly spaced areas for competitors to get ready and get last-minute motivational speeches from their sensei. When Sakura saw Sarutobi Asuma emerge from one of the changing rooms, looking gaunt, the end of his cigarette chewed into an unidentifiable pulp, she knew she was headed in the right direction. They didn't look at one another as they went by, but Sakura turned down the path he had taken and found what she was looking for in no time. As Sakura arrived, Ino was shrugging off her leg weights and replacing them with purple leg warmers that matched the rest of her attire. Ino used light weights for her training, which was equivalent to 15 pounds in ninja terms. She also wore a heavy metal jacket, which was discarded in favor of a tan vest made of chakra-resistant material. In theory, the material could protect her from non-lethal Juken strikes, but in reality, all Neji had to do was apply more chakra and hope he didn't kill her. Hey, Ino pig, Sakura murmured, are you prepared for your challenge? About as ready as I can be, forehead girl, Ino said without turning around. There's no way I'm going to win, so Asuma-sensei says my best chance is to prove that I'm ready to be a Chuunin by not losing horribly to Neji-san. Will you attempt to use your Shintention? Sakura inquired. It was Ino's most potent jutsu, but it had 2 sides. If it missed its target, Ino would just collapse stupidly, and that would be that it concentrated chakra to the eyes, allowing them to forcefully eject the user's soul, which traveled straight until it reached another mammal, bird, or reptile, at which point Ino's Yamanaka training would enable her to overwhelm the other soul and take control. No, Ino sighed, that's bloody unlikely as it is, and I'd need Neji to remain motionless for that. All I have to do is make myself appear capable. Sakura suppressed a giggle, wondering when she had begun to think of Ino as a friend again, because laughing at her friend's impending doom wouldn't necessarily make her likable to Ino. "Be brave, it won't hurt," she said, sounding like the mantra of a man about to be executed. "Listen, I wanted to talk about this earlier, but now seems like a good a time as any," she said with a smile. "Oh." With 2 bracers of the same chakra-resistant metal belted over her forearms to better protect against Neji's palm strikes, Ino, who resembled an Olympian warrior with no pupils and a ragged ponytail, was strapping her belt to her waist, which had a shuriken pouch on the right and 3 kunai in holsters on the left. "The thing is, about Sasuke, I don't want him anymore." At last, Ino raised his head and said, "What? I no longer desire Sasuke, I no longer even like him." The truth would remain secret for the time being. "Perhaps that's what being on his team has done to me," Sakura thought. "I just wanted to say that he's all yours. And perhaps we can truly be friends again, and for the 100th time, I wanted to say I'm sorry for hitting you with that shuriken." Unaware of Sakura's slight uneasiness at the physical contact, Ino embraced her and said, "It's fine," adding, "And don't worry, I'll take good care of Sasuke-kun for you." Hyuga Neji of the Hyuga clan and Yamanaka Ino of the Yamanaka clan, 2 Konoha-based competitors, will square off in the opening match of the biannual Chuunin selection exam. Neji and Ino stood on either side of the ring, bowing as the proctor, Hayate Gecko, explained the rules and respectfully asked them not to kill each other in front of almost 1,000 spectators. As the 2 ninja faced off, Sakura chewed her fingernails anxiously. Ino waited for Hayate to announce the game's start before skipping back and covering her retreat with shuriken, but Neji dismissed them with disdain and zigzagged forward with feline grace for the first time. Sakura was genuinely relieved that Naruto wouldn't have to face Neji because he had absolutely no chance against him. When Neji said, "This will be easier if you simply surrender," Ino stopped suddenly and stabbed out with a kunai. Neji spun around the blow, drawing her in and tapping her bicep, causing Ino's left arm to go dead. She grunted and stumbled away from him, but Neji was surprisingly compliant, letting Ino limp to a safe distance and examine her injuries. The Hyuga said in a drab voice, "My Byakugan discerns all," adding that you were still recovering from the wound that Sakura-san had caused you in your last battle. Although the tissue has healed nicely, movement could cause damage. In addition, your abilities have declined since your hospitalization. Please give up and make this easier for us both." He was right, not about her taijutsu, which was as good as ever, but about the ragged scar on her stomach. Ino's Shintention gave her the ability to make Sakura surrender, but not before a shuriken that had already been thrown disappeared into her belly. Sakura didn't notice until she was marched off the field and Ino was returned to her original body. The last thing she remembered was the blinding pain that lasted only a few seconds before her flesh went cold. 2 medics had raggedly sutured the gash shut, and then a 3rd medic spent 10 minutes using the Shozen Jutsu to make the flesh heal. Neji was already certain of his victory, but he probably knew that Juken would royally screw that healing up. So Ino shifted sideways and focused her energy on freeing up her arm and restoring movement while stalling for time. "I will never give up," Ino said abruptly, and Neji blinked. That was more of Naruto's deal. "Then don't," he said plainly. Ino sagged, her hopes of starting a dramatic monologue that would allow her to set up a cunning ambush vanishing. "You will be fine if you just impress them." The wall was back there, but she could almost feel the sensation returning to her numb arm, and once it was hers again, what could she do? Neji wasn't even displaying any signs of intent to kill, and she was already feeling dread as visions of him dismembering her flashed through her mind. Neji walked toward her, as if he couldn't have finished her so quickly, and she resisted the urge to look over her shoulder. She felt the pressure of his presence next to her, even as his fingertips caused her entire body to become numb, until finally only one limb remained that she could move at all. Her right leg. Neji swung out and struck her in the upper chest, head, thigh, hands, elbows, cheeks, neck, and ribs each time. A cry of pain was wrenched from her lips, and Neji's face remained the same as he methodically disabled her entire upper body. "You will be fine if you just impress them." The disadvantage of coolly disabling the Yamanaka was that he had not yet prepared himself for a real fight, so there was little to no adrenaline flowing through his veins, and there was little difference between what had just happened and being kicked in the groin by a passing stranger on the street. Fortunately for him, there was no permanent damage, but his entire being came to a screeching halt. Neji staggered away from his stumbling opponent, his hand clasped protectively over his family jewels as hundreds of people tittered at his misfortune. Unfortunately, Ino's final attempt to show her strength had backfired spectacularly. The pain caused Neji to reevaluate the threat she posed. The entire crowd gasped, and Ino grinned triumphantly despite her current lack of balance. When the Hyuga suddenly lunged forward and poked a stiffened finger into Ino's scar, 2 things happened at once. First, Her scar reopened spectacularly beneath her metal armor, so much so that her attending medic would later compare it to a maw. And second, her front was quickly plastered with a dark red stream, Neji's final act of retaliation rupturing something crucial in her gut. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and Ino hit the ground. The match was called by Hayate. Anko had managed to sneak in with the other Jonin Sensei to watch the game, and her reaction was the most harsh of all. The yelling laughter stunned Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma into silence, and Guy only gave Neji a critical look as the pale-eyed boy regained the dignity to leave the field without limping. Although Neji had won, Ino had dealt a vital blow to Kunoichi around the world in the hearts of the crowd. Did you notice how his foolish white eyes widened, as if to say, "How can this be? I am a Hyuga?" Anko laughed. Kurenai said uneasily, "Anko-san, maybe your sensei would approve of your attitude," Guy said brusquely. This was the most venomous thing any of them had ever seen from the taijutsu master, and Anko was taken aback by the intensity of his words. Normally, she harbored a silent resentment toward those who used Orochimaru's name to poke her, but Guy was Guy. He wasn't facing her, but he still sounded quietly angry. Anko chose to leave it alone, and the other three exhaled a relieved sigh. Further up, Sarutobi Hiruzen made the decision to overlook Neji's conceit, which was motivated by a sincere wish to spare Ino's pain rather than boast about his superiority, and he wouldn't have reacted differently if she had done the same to him, despite the fact that he wouldn't have allowed it. Sarutobi was far too strong to let a genin hit him. It was still painful for both of them. The Kazekage said, "She's not bad, she's a little arrogant and doesn't know any combat-oriented jutsu, but that's normal for a genin in any case. Isn't Neji-kun the Hyuga clan's prodigy?" "She's ill-prepared, Kazekage dono," Sarutobi grumbled. Neji's overconfidence stemmed from the wish to spare her the pain of the Jukin. The Kazekage's bodyguard said loudly, "Good for her, I say," and neither of them gave her any attention. With the most anticipated fighter of the tournament in the wings, Hayate had the unpleasant task of shouting the dark horse's name over the din, and he cursed his pneumonia more than usual. He would have to scream louder than usual to be heard over the crowd's baying. The second match will also take place between two young shinobi of Konoha, Uchiha Sasuke. The wild applause lasted for a full minute, and Nara Shikamaru, Hayate concluded glumly, not even trying to be heard, and Nara and Uchiha walked toward one another in the ring. "You're not going to give up now, are you?" Sasuke was charged with intent, but he did not honor Shikamaru's request with an answer. They bowed. Sasuke formally and Shikamaru superficially, and Hayate grew more distant. Shikamaru muttered, and everything about him screamed tired, from his vacant stare to his slouch. "Start!" he yelled with his Sharingan blazing with demonic rage. Sasuke glared at Shikamaru, who turned away, afraid of being caught in a genjutsu he wouldn't recognize, and without moving his eyes. Sasuke took in the length of Shikamaru's shadow, the shadows in the arena, and the speed of the rising sun, lacking sufficient knowledge to devise a strategy. Shikamaru launched a penetrating attack. The shadow spread to the west, snapped to a spear shape, and rocketed towards Sasuke. The other boy retreated so quickly that he left a cloud of dust behind him, and when it settled, the tip of the shadow was only a few feet away. Sasuke committed the width and length of the shadow to memory, figuring out how thin Shikamaru could spread his shadow and the total surface area. "Kagemain no jutsu," he said. "I wonder if you wouldn't mind moving forward a little?" A few apprehensive giggles came from the audience as Shikamaru drew lead. "Will you stop making fun of me? Tiger monkey boar horse tiger," Sasuke snarled. "Kaden. Jutsu no Gokakyu," Shikamaru thought. Crap. The light from Sasuke's fireball blew out all the shadows, but it also made him get out of his cozy, defendable position. It felt like he was standing next to a warm bonfire already, and he would soon be cooking in his skin. Shikamaru found it difficult to keep a safe distance from the ethereal flames, but he succeeded. After the fire went out, Sasuke recklessly charged through the smoke and heat, and they practiced taijutsu for a minute, with Sasuke being careful to keep Shikamaru's hands apart. Despite Shikamaru's best efforts, he was unable to regain control of the fight. A low knee was parried sideways, and a high strike was stopped dead with ninja reflexes. Shikamaru was outmatched, but he was able to throw Sasuke off balance for a few seconds. "Kagemain complete," he gasped, perspiration streaming down his brow. Sasuke appeared calm and collected, albeit a little more worn out, as he leaned over and imitated Shikamaru's defeated motion. "How long can you even continue this? You can't win," the Uchiha said. "A few minutes," he said sloppily. "I'm just waiting for an idea to come to me." Shikamaru and Sasuke both shrugged. When he failed to think of anything, Shikamaru just fell onto his back, and Sasuke followed suit, although he appeared much less amused. Shikamaru said gravely, I wish I were a cloud. Clouds don't have to put up with all the crap my parents expect of me. Not only are ninjas supposed to kill people, but we are also supposed to die, as if that weren't bad enough. Isn't that the cost of living in Konoha? Since there aren't any wars going on at the moment, there are actually a lot of older ninja here. Kid, wrap it up or your buddy here wins by default, Hayate sighed, coughing. You know, I just want to stop. Shikamaru went on. I want to float through the world. If my clan didn't have such high expectations of me, I would, too. Feeling his father and older brother above him, Sasuke thought, you're preaching to the choir, but he chose to ignore it. However, I am unable to. I'm going to take a stand and fight for everything this village has done for me, but I'm not going to fight you. Sasuke-chan Uchiha, I give up. Uchiha Sasuke is the victor. Hayate gave a raspy roar. I mean, Sasuke was supposed to beat Shikamaru to a bloody pulp, Kiba remarked. That was lame. What took place? Shikamaru-san must have thought that his chakra would have run out, Hinata stated. Although her Byakugan were not focused on Shikamaru's chakra network at the time, it was clear to her that he had run out of options. Whatever Shikamaru had in mind when he surrendered, the battle had not materialized. Sasuke had not pulled his punches, and the Nara appeared raw all over, and Shikamaru staggered into the stands with his arms wrapped around his chest. He bumped knuckles with Shino on his way out, but Kiba confronted him before Choji could pull him away from the world of the others. Hey, what was that about? The Inuzuka made a command. Shortly after saying, I didn't want to embarrass myself any further, Shikamaru was literally bowled over by Choji, and Shikamaru's time was spent calming him down from threatening to kill Neji and assuring him that Ino was okay. What the hell kind of fight was that? The bodyguard for the cage snorted in disgust. They call themselves ninja, she cried. The cage said mildly, you were like that once, young, cocky, and just waiting to be stabbed to death on some battlefield. The woman clenched her teeth and said, you're right, Cage-sama. Still, Nara-kun is unfit for the burden of Chuunin, Sarutobi opened up. Aburame Shino vs Temari was the third match. Few people could honestly claim that Shino didn't make them uneasy, but Temari was one of those people, having witnessed countless gory deaths throughout your life. Being powerless to stop them and knowing that you might very well be the next one did a lot to make you feel strange. Temari reminded herself that some people choose to be strange when a cloud of insects burst from Shino's body. The Aburame were home to numerous insect species, including the Kakaichu, which were notorious for their capacity to drain chakra and distribute it among their fellow beetles. Temari used her fan to swat the dark cloud away, creating a strong windstorm that cleared the area between them. This is a dilemma, Shino thought. If they are constantly pushed away from you, I cannot fully utilize my colony. It appears that I have to use unusual strategies. Unconventional by whose standards? Temari asked as Shino rearranged his swarm between them like a wall and pushed forward. Temari used her fan to blast through the insects, but Shino himself came charging through and landed a solid punch to her face. She wasn't a kunoichi for nothing, though, because she swung her fan out of the way and hammered Shino in the gut. The Aburame flowed with the blow like a strand of seaweed in a current, then shot back towards her head once more. This time, Temari easily guided the blow past her head, twisted Shino around by the arm, and slammed him to the ground in a hammerlock. The real Shino entered from behind with a long-handled knife, but Temari easily knocked him aside with the butt of her war fan. Shino dropped the henge and showed himself as a mass of Kakaichu posing as a man. It was his odd flexibility that caused her to realize her error. Jutsu no Kamaitachi. With hundreds of slicing blades slicing into him and his Kakaichu, she declared as she spun around, disrupting the entire hive. Temari smiled savagely at Shino's distress, panic visible even behind his dark sunglasses, and a dozen of them fell dead, too closely packed to avoid the invisible death. We'll see how many of your tiny parasites make it through this Jutsu no Daikamaitachi. The majority of Shino's Kakaichu were blown out of the arena and into the crowd, beyond his control with biochemical signals, and wandered around the area, generally annoying whoever they happened to land on. The ring floor was darkening with insect corpses, most of them neatly cut by the wind blades, but for a few unfortunates, they were still alive. Shino twitched, furious as hell, but helpless against a wind wielder, since only the largest Aburame insects could withstand strong winds, and he had none that fit the bill without his ninjutsu. Shino folded like a house of cards. I forfeit. Why are you guys getting crushed? Damn it. Kiba groaned. Shikamaru first, then Shino. Naruto will lose before you know it. Choji wisely noted, that other guy chewed up Lee-san and spat out his bones, so, he's probably going to lose anyway. Hinata stammered, and Naruto-kun might have a chance. Who knows? In an ambiguous statement, Shikamaru stated, either could win. Temari stood between Neji and Sasuke, both boys using her as a barrier to protect themselves from having to tolerate one another, while Sasuke leaned lazily over the railing, a small smirk on his lips as he watched the final preliminary. The three fighters in the next round lined up on a small balcony nearby. Temari and Neji were both motionless, like predators waiting for their prey to relax. Uzumaki, Naruto and Gaara of Suna will square off in the final event prior to the final rounds. One jinchuriki was bad news, but two of them trying to kill each other was like armies clashing. A few of the more gloomy Suna attendees simply left the building, but a good number of them stayed to watch the titans clash. Many of the ninja shifted uneasily. So, you are the Kitsune's jinchuriki, Gaara remarked. Mother told me, and I didn't believe her, so I was punished, but it appears Mother was correct. Have you ever grown weary of a psychotic demon haunting you? Big old tanuki, too big for your skull but small enough to fit, asked Naruto in an irreverent manner. I wonder why you still refer to him as your mother. Have you ever benefited from Shukaku? The words, "Mother has given me purpose," were spoken solemnly by Gaara. Naruto shot back savagely. Mother is driving you into an early grave, saying, you deranged bastard, you give jinchuriki a bad name everywhere. Be wise or your father will tear your demon out and put it back in its proper place in a tea kettle. Gaara's eyes never left Naruto's as he laughed, low at first but rising until his whole body trembled with laughter. You think he hasn't tried? You believe Kazekage-sama hasn't attempted to murder me? He hissed icily. He set my uncle on me in retaliation for me killing my own mother. I kept killing Chuunin, Jonin, and Anbu, and they kept trying to kill me. After a while, I understood that was my goal until the sand is red with blood. I will kill and kill. That's my fate, Naruto Uzumaki. Gaara's smile turned feral, the red tattoo above his left eye gleaming with otherworldly light. If this is the only way you'll listen to reason, Naruto said. Cracking his knuckles, the Reaper death seal briefly glowed blue under his clothing, but Naruto swiftly locked the Kyuubi's chakra away. He could do it, even without the demonic influence. Begin, said Hayate reaching over his shoulder. Gaara snatched up the gourd of sand and smashed it to the ground, causing Shukaku to roar with delight as a tsunami of sand rose up quickly enough to create wind and slammed down on Naruto. Or would have, had Naruto not taken off like a bullet around the arena's perimeter, the sand particles hitting the ground and filtering through, shaking the building's foundations as it vanished in the dirt. Gaara himself was encircled by orbiting halos of sand, spinning like the rings of Jupiter and shielding him from both visible and invisible dangers. Taijutsu Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto muttered as he pulled away from the small drama, and about 20 clones of Naruto appeared at even points around the arena. They all uncapped the plastic case they were carrying and swiftly consumed the 2 soldier pills inside. Genma had cautioned against using more than one at a time, but Naruto assumed that since they were essentially shadow-given bodies, the damage wouldn't be transferred to him. As one, the Naruto clones formed long back stances, gathered chakra in their lungs, and fired at Gaara, who stood resolutely in the middle of a galaxy of dust and debris. Sweden. Jutsu no Mizurappa. The younger jinchuriki threw out both hands, calling Shukaku to his aid as the platoon yelled, each of them launching an impressive stream of water towards Gaara. The sand blocked all of the incoming streams, but the water's torrent pushed the grains out of alignment, forcing Gaara to move against the water's sheer volume. Just seconds after leaving the center of the storm, Naruto's shadow clones obliterated the area, pumping in enough water to flood the pit. Suna Shunshin no Jutsu, he whispered, letting the sand theatrically envelop him before he left. Gaara looked down, seeing that the water had reached his ankles and was rising steadily. When the sand gave way, Naruto rushed to the spot, not to finish Gaara, but to avoid being close to him. Wherever he had moved to, a true master of water ninjutsu wouldn't have wasted so much chakra, and anyone even slightly more experienced than him would have some control over the blasts. Naruto's preferred weapons were volume and kinetic energy, not snapping fangs or acid rain. It was somewhat unexpected to most people that Gaara's cute exterior and unassuming frame concealed an unrefined strength, but it really shouldn't, given that his cute exterior and unassuming frame also concealed an omnicidal demon sealed only by the tenuous thread of a mother's love. Gaara struck a somewhat scrawny figure. Words like muscular, agile, and athletic didn't quite describe him. However, Gaara enjoyed the opportunity to surprise enemies who believed they could somehow defeat him in lightning-fast taijutsu. The redhead turned and kicked at the sky in a wide arc, and the blonde jinchuriki narrowed his eyes as Gaara moved a little, making eerie wet splashes. The force of the crescent kick caused a torrential amount of water to flow, effectively blinding the Naruto clones between him and Gaara. The sand moved in, crushing the unaware clones as they carried out their duty to the last, and some of the remaining ones were beginning to look emaciated, so Naruto made a fresh batch to continue flooding the area. Is this the only way to combat a tanuki? Gaara threw a shuriken at Naruto, who doubled over in jest and said, "You're weak, Gaara. You have no power, no purpose, and no friends, and you'll have nothing if you lose." Gaara grunted, "Then I won't lose," and vanished in a helix of sand. 10 of the new clones burst, their arms vanishing beneath the water as he looked for the telltale ripples that Gaara's shunshin would make. Naruto was just starting to do some hand seals when a dozen of Gaara's clones took to the air and started throwing shuriken at him. Their lower bodies trailed off into sand, which allowed them to stay aloft as Gaara remotely controlled them. However, Gaara's aim was rather shabby, and Naruto had to twitch just to avoid most of the shuriken. The real Gaara appeared positively demonic, with sand welling up from the ground itself, churning more sand out of the wet earth and joining the planetoid under Shukaku's control that orbited above Gaara's head, and the kanji tattooed on his forehead spreading to cover his entire body like a red spiderweb beneath the writhing cloud of clones and sand. Ignoring the monster gathering its resources in front of him, Naruto simply grinned absently. "Uzumaki, any final remarks?" Gaara roared. "Well, no." With a hand gesture, the thin band of sand snapped up around Naruto and closed tightly to his chest. Naruto's arms remained motionless, but his smile never left his face as Gaara squeezed his hand into a fist, causing the sand to tighten. The shuriken that Gaara had thrown returned to their base sand, with nearby sources of the material easily falling under Gaara's sway. Then it didn't. "The main issue with fighting you, Yano, was the knockout," Naruto remarked gently, adding that if you lose, Shukaku will emerge from the seal and take control for a while. Since your seal is based on willpower, all you need to do is disable Shukaku in front of you. I thought it would be easiest to simply drain your chakra, but I had a few options for that. "Shut up," hissed Gaara, who was pale and had a lot of perspiration running down his brow. The sand that surrounded Naruto immediately fell into the water. Naruto continued, "The demonic chakra is right there, waiting to be taken. While you use the sand, I bet it's almost gone now. You'll need to use your own chakra. I wager then it won't be so simple to use all this sand, will it?" The sand itself gave a piercing scream before falling to the ground, turning the knee-deep water into a muddy slurry, but Naruto beat him to the punch. A literal punch, that is, with his fist, which struck Gaara's nose squarely, causing the younger Jinchuriki to suffer a concussion and lose consciousness instantly. The boy's heart rate slowed beneath Gaara's clothing as the dozen or so senshi divisions that had been depleting Shukaku's chakra swiftly transformed back into the original in Shikatsu Forest. Hayate, who had moved to the second row of seats, shook his head in shock as stunned silence descended upon the arena. The sand and the water jutsu and the chakra. He was still the referee, regardless of the circumstances. The winner of this, he paused, historic match is Uzumaki Naruto. "Huh," Kiba uttered, Neji uttered, and Shikamaru agreed. Squeaking. "WLDD done," Hinata said. "HN," noted Sasuke. Although other audience members voiced similar opinions, none were as outspoken or as ecstatic as Anko. "Sure, youngster." To the astonishment of those present, the Chuunin exams went on while some of the Tokubetsu Jonin assured the audience that nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. A small group of Chuunin were dispatched to clear the mud slurry that Gaara and Naruto had left behind. Everyone would like to see Neji and Sasuke fight, wouldn't they? Throughout the entire battle, Sarutobi's bodyguard, an Anbu, had stayed motionless. If Naruto or Gaara lost control, she was to leave him and summon the emergency sealing team, but Naruto had handled his opponent expertly. Some of the onlookers had been confused by the Kachiyose no Jutsu being performed underwater, but Yugo knew when she saw the summoning signs Shukaku must have been bled dry by the slugs, which put Gaara under stress from holding up the sand and allowed Naruto to punch him out. She shared this with her Hokage, who made a grimace but said nothing else. Yugo turned to see Neji and Sasuke squaring off on the ground floor. Neji could easily destroy Sasuke in close combat, so he was cautiously retreating. Additionally, the Hyuga controlled his approach, scanning his field of vision for potential traps and changes in Sasuke's chakra that might point to a jutsu. They had reached the impasse that frequently happened between ninja of comparable skill levels. Neither could afford to attack first, nor could they let their guard down. "This might take a while," Sarutobi said. "Tell me, how do you feel about Gaara's defeat?" "It was inevitable," expressed the Kazekage. "Much of his prowess came from the ignorance of his enemies. No enemy of Sanagakure is unaware of our famous sand manipulation, but none have mastered it to the level Gaara has. In truth, Gaara has relied at times on Shukaku being released, so he was unprepared for the demon's absence. I will ensure he is better prepared in the future." "Does Suna have any other Jinchuriki to rely on, then?" Kazekage gave a snort. "Certainly we have a handful of Kaiju and Tengu in reserve, but Gaara was our only Tanuki. Naturally, I had it sealed in my son." Naturally, concurred the Hokage, do you ever wonder? Kageme no jutsu. Declared Sasuke. Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to those 3 words. In fact, his shadow was now buried in Neji's shadow, elongated like a spear. The Hyuga had some misgivings about the technique, but when he attempted to back away, his body trembled like a structure during an earthquake. Sasuke scowled as his chakra started to rapidly deplete. Sasuke had moved his shuriken pouch a few centimeters higher, anticipating his use of Shikamaru's signature move. Neji's fingers scrabbled futilely at his own thigh as he drew one. After saying, "The Sharingan is superior to the Byakugan after all," he threw it with an air of severity. Even when a surge of blue energy surged up at the point of impact and deflected the shuriken, Neji's expression remained unwavering as the spinning metal star smashed towards his chest. With typical backhand humility, Neji remarked, "The Byakugan isn't my only Kekkei Genkai, but the Sharingan may be superior. Juken is as useful for defense as for offense." With a snarl, Sasuke unleashed a black hailstorm of shuriken, kunai, and senbon on Neji. Tenten would have been in awe if they weren't aimed at her teammate while straining his muscles. Neji methodically knocked the projectiles off course by manipulating his chakra system without moving his body. Sasuke's chakra was dwindling, and his control was not as polished as that of a true Nara. The answer was simple. He retreated, making Neji follow suit until their shadows were taut and they were almost at opposite ends of the ring. Sasuke then lowered his right hand to the side, letting the roar of 1,000 birds and the smell of ozone fill the air. Neji raised a hand to point at Sasuke as he leveled the chidori at his chest, and the 2 of them charged. As the 2 prodigies charged at each other, neither displaying any emotion as Sasuke got ready to murder Neji in cold blood, the audience held its breath. The Hokage was unable to decide. There was a minor riot in the stands, and Guy and Kakashi were stonily observing one another. Sarutobi Hiruzen stayed out of the fray until the very end. The unfortunate biological fact that Neji's arms were longer than Sasuke's undid him long before the chidori hit its target. The Hyuga's fingertips touched his chest. Neji's forearm was struck by lightning, which melted the hairs and turned the skin black. Too late, a chakra shield appeared, but Neji had already carried out his plan. 16 millimeters to the right of his superior vein Akava, his index finger was positioned directly on a tenketsu. Even as the lightning sputtered and the Uchiha stumbled backwards, his eyes remained unforgivingly vacant. Neji swiftly retreated from the severely injured Sasuke after effortlessly escaping the Kageme no Jutsu. He called over his shoulder, medics, and a group of medical professionals hurried onto the field to tend to Sasuke. Sarutobi let out a groan. His dizziness returned as Sasuke's glistening body was hoisted onto a stretcher, and his heart had felt like it was about to stop when the Uchiha started the absurd incident. He was aware of the tenketsu that Neji had undoubtedly targeted, which, in the absence of help, could kill a target. Although Sasuke would survive, his future was uncertain. He moaned as the Hokage's head fell into his hands. He confided in Yugo, "I'm getting too old to be running a village." She said casually, "You ought to nominate a successor, sir," although she was well aware that she was going too far. There are a dozen jonin fit for the position, and any would be happy to become Godem Inoichi-san, perhaps, or Choza-sama. "Yes, but I feel..." "No," roared Naruto with its oppressive weight. The jinchuriki's skin radiated a blast of crimson chakra that melted the stands surrounding him and vaporized the majority of the other genin. With arms of chakra reaching forward and digging into the gullible Neji's back, he dashed onto the field. Both the Hyuga and the first Anbu squad sent to defeat him perished silently. The ceiling crew had a slightly better run, but by this point, Kirigakure agents were everywhere in the arena. Sarutobi recognized the 100 Division's renowned masks and the trapezoid-shaped end of a sword of the 7. Sarutobi was more worried by the smoke plumes rising in the distance than he was by the Uzumaki, who were being ruthlessly trampled by Naruto bypassing their scout teams with an army. Kiri Ninja were somehow burning Konoha additionally, with all of their key players either out of town or securing the selection exams. Goddamn, it was a nightmare. Leaping to his feet, Sarutobi called forth Enma by extending both hands in the ram seal. The enormous quantities of chakra required to call forth such a strong spirit surged from his navel, hurried to his arms via his chakra pathways, and passed through his heart. Slumping to his knees, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha grasped his left shoulder hazily before passing away. Other than his sudden increase in activity near the end, the heart attack was unexpected. Yugo Uzuki leapt to her feet and yelled commands into the communication device that was attached to her ear. Though it was too late for anything but prayer, a group of medical professionals were called in from the lower floors to assist him. Tayuya finished her Genjutsu quietly. Orochimaru swiftly assessed the situation and nodded over the rim of his collar. The medics would arrive in a minute. In 5, Sarutobi's brain would be scanned to find remnants of Tayuya's chakra. They would be suspected within 5 minutes. Everything was ready for Orochimaru. Tayuya drifted toward Yugo, pretending to be worried about Sarutobi's death, she drove her tanto through the woman's lungs and into her chest, slamming the anbu in the ribs in one quick motion. She hissed, "Never turn your back, bitch," while slicing Yugo's throat with one hand while keeping her katana well out of reach with the other. Izuki Yugo's desperate struggle came to a slow halt. Orochimaru just replaced himself with a log and drifted away when the anbu assigned to the Hokage's protection detail arrived and their blades collided with Tayuya's bunshin. It was sometime after Sasuke did the roaringly foolish thing and impaled himself on Neji's Juken. Though Kakashi wasn't sure when the world had gone insane, Neji must have decided to rush Sasuke because he knew he would win, because the chidori must have made the shadows whiter. Soon after, the cat-masked Yugo and the bodies of the Sandaime Hokage and Yondaime Kazekage were flung from the balcony. Kakashi started a complete evacuation after it became clear that the Kazecage's guard was a ninja assassin. The public is being warned that this is not a drill, by sirens blaring in the streets and loudspeakers per the emergency evacuation protocols. Please leave the village. Someone with extraordinary Genjutsu abilities launched a Nihon Shoda no Jutsu from the shadows, followed by one after another until genin and civilians were falling asleep everywhere around Kakashi. The remaining 80 jonin and Tokubetsu jonin gathered, many of them running while wearing anbu masks. With deadly composure, the Hitaki asked, "What's going on?" "Sir, snakes are escaping from training ground 44. We don't have the manpower to drive them off." "Sir, Hokage-sama died of a stress-induced heart attack. The Kazekage has evidence of cranial trauma. The assassin is gone." "Sir, 150 Suna Chuunin and Jonin are attacking Konoha. They appear to be targeting defensive positions and vital targets. We've lost R&D, the western warehouses and the hospital." After inhaling deeply, Kakashi removed the cloth band from his Sharingan and started yelling commands at breakneck speed. Some Chuunin went to gather up the genin and civilians, while others targeted the sleeping people with strategically placed kicks to wake them up. Tokubetsu jonin flew off in a practiced formation towards the invading force. Kakashi, Asuma, and Anko were soon the only ones left. He snarled, "You two are with me," and turned to face the commotion. "Sume-san is getting Jiraiya-sama, but we're going ahead." Anko said, "Where to?" "Kakashi Taiko." The answer was already churning in her stomach, for some reason. Kakashi said, "He's here, slowly, move." Meanwhile, Yamanaka Inoichi was in a difficult situation. Shuza and Shikaku were being fought by a pair of ninja he had never seen before, one of whom was grotesquely fat and the other extremely thin, while the thin one was effortlessly overcoming Shikaku's Kagemain no Jutsu. The fat one was matching the Akamichi blow for blow without giving an inch. He could only assist one of them before they were both overpowered in a matter of seconds. Chaozu's arms expanded to the size of watermelons, but the Auto Ninja used his own strength to block the impending collision and returned the blow with a viciously low kick that Shuza barely avoided. Shikaku was in trouble, but they appeared to be evenly matched like other clan ninja. Nara were typically caught off guard when their private ninjutsu failed miserably. Shikaku was pushed into a corner by the gray-haired man who was exerting pressure. Shunshin moved closer to Inoichi after the dark-haired strategist threw a smoke pellet to the ground, but his ill opponent was right behind him. The blonde man made his decision, aiming his soul and squared his stance. "Shintenshin no Jutsu," he growled, his body collapsing as his thoughts surpassed those of the other shinobi. Inoichi, being the skilled mindbreaker that he was, took over the man's body and avoided his mind despite feeling off. He opened his mouth to reassure Shikaku and asserted his dominance. Then a third arm grappled with his face, reaching out from his chest. As a professional interrogator, Inoichi had witnessed many things, but this was one of the most bizarre. His host memories quickly provided an explanation, but it instantly reminded him of Orochimaru's perverse experiments. Sakon's voice wheezed, "Keke Genkai." With an internal smile, Yukon exploded out of his back and ran for Inoichi's lifeless body. Shuza slammed in from behind, managing to hold off his opponent long enough to knock the other man down while the fat man shifted his target to Shikaku. Yukon used Kawarimi to avoid the subsequent fatal blow and proceeded to attack the body. Inoichi was hurrying after Yukon with Shuza while Shikaku was getting ready to murder the foolish ninja. The ninja readied himself to hold off Shuza and his possessed brother for as long as possible, sensing that he might be out of his depth. It was short, for in front of Inoichi a glob of yellow liquid solidified into a spike that slammed hard into the ground. A dark-skinned man yelled, "Aren't you guys going to level up yet? This is just the checkpoint battle." After interrupting Inoichi and Shuza with a single spike each, he extended two arms, while the other two formed hand seals and the fifth scratched his nose. A burst of speed caused the gray-haired man to crash bodily into Inoichi's prone form, causing his body to turn red and creak agonizingly before warping away. Inoichi let out a groan. "I don't feel well, fuck." With pain radiating from a distance through the mental link from his own body, he collapsed to his knees in Saken's body in the shadows. He saw Yamashiro Aoba and several Anbu join the fray, but he was losing the struggle for dominance. His fingers shook as he let go of the jutsu. Anko and Asuma felt a chill go up their spines when they heard Kakashi growl. Hostages had been taken by Orochimaru. 2 men and a woman make up the 3 of them according to the restraining seals painted on their skin. There also Ninja Asuma's stomach turned when she realized that the girl was Inuzuka Hana. Orochimaru said sadly, "Only the 3 of you? With regret, pity, I was expecting more. I do so adore a challenge, you know." Anko appeared to be holding back from doing something foolish, which Kakashi decided to reward her for afterwards. It became more and more clear that Orochimaru was responsible for the deaths of Yugo, the Yondaime Kazekage, and Sarutobi Hiruzen. Not to mention the losses from this most recent invasion. Using one finger to open the emergency channel on his headset, he listened to the defenders' desperate chatter with some attention. The stationary points were being overridden by quicker and more nimble spider summons, but it appeared that Genma and Rado had set up some sort of blockade against the snakes. It was unfortunate that none of the secret communities had won the spider domain's allegiance. Orochimaru's influence over them was most likely weak. Grandly, Orochimaru declared, "You all know how depraved and monstrous I am, but fear not, I can sink to lower depths still." Whispering, Anko said, "Bastard, behold, the crowning creation of the Nidaime Hokage, the Edo Tensei." Asuma blew a whistle. Senju Tobirama's signature move, the impure world reincarnation, was one of the most dreaded techniques ever developed. He had used it to bring the dead back to life on the battlefield, allowing them to serve Konoha by overcoming superior forces and completing impossible missions. The ability had supposedly died with Tobirama, so Asuma had never seen it in person. Clearly not, he thought, his bones trembling with fear. He started to question whether he would ever see the light of day again because they were so mired in shit. "For you, Asuma-kun, I think you'd enjoy meeting your dearly departed sensei again," Orochimaru replied. One of the 2 men was on the ground, struggling to breathe, after a quick flick of the hand before a white mist spread across his body. Only Kakashi gave Hagane Katetsu a passing thought. A coffin with the name of a long-dead man on it rose. "Dan Kato. You son of a bitch," exclaimed Asuma. Orochimaru continued, slapping Kamizuki Izumo on the back of the head and quickly sacrificing him. "For you, Kakashi-kun, I took the liberty of bringing back your father," he said. The first coffin was joined by another Sakumo Hitaki. By the time Orochimaru looked into Anko's eyes, she was shaking with anger. She detested him because there was nothing in their depths that resembled the man she had once loved. Hated him for his generosity, his treachery, and the way he acted as though it had never happened. "I thought I'd give us both a treat," the snake Sanin remarked nonchalantly. "Who do we both know who's dead, Anko-chan? Anyone in particular you'd like to see again?" What about Uchiha Shi?" Anko bellowed, "No." As she energized her chakra, the purple-haired woman bounded into the air. Smoke rising from her body. Asuma and Kakashi looked on helplessly as purple energy and flames erupted in the shadows, slashing at one another like vipers. Relieved that Shisui would remain where he belonged, Anko pulled herself out of the rather one-sided fight with her prize, Hana. No matter," Orochimaru said without really thinking. The smoke was blown away by a gust of wind and a wave of his hand. The caskets parted. Rado was enjoying himself immensely. Tokubetsu Jonins were rarely sent on potentially violent missions. Instead, they were usually assigned to tracking, reconnaissance, and other necessary but boring tasks that needed reliable people. Anko enjoyed complaining that the issue was specific to her, but occasionally Inoichi, the master interrogator, Hayate, the Chuunin examiner, and Rado, the professional bodyguard, also experienced boredom. It brought back memories of the good old days when Minato was Hokage. Rado was somewhat relieved Minato wasn't present. The invasion could have been stopped much sooner by a Hiroshin user than he intended. "How many more of these slimy bastards are there?" he yelled. According to Shibi, I would estimate 30 to 35, a rare breed of insects that could absorb twice their own chakra capacity in a matter of seconds populated the insect hive of the patriarch of the Aburame clan. Shibi took great pride in the fact that he could kill a man with just a few beetles, and it was his insects that sufficiently diminished the Kyuubi's power that Minato was able to seal it all, albeit at the expense of both his life and numerous insects. Iruka called out, "The spiders are coming from behind." Asuna Ninja with a huge metal fan interrupted the teacher. The battlefield was darkened by a cloud of black ash. After just one swing, Rado heard the sound of Iruka battling the man from a distance. Genma cursed, "Shit, it's the Kurotesan, huh? That's Hiraga?" Upon reflection, the metal shoes and white veil appeared somewhat familiar, having been on the front lines with Suna for the better part of 4 years. Genma would know better throughout the shinobi nations. Hiraga, one of Sanagakure's greatest ninja, was renowned for his casual demeanor and lack of tact for the same reason that the Hokage put up with Kakashi, the Kazekage put up with him. Outcomes. As the name suggested, the Kurotesan was capable of producing ash, dust, and other grit to be carried by the winds it generated. Hiraga blinded his opponents and cut off their line of sight in order to gain control of the battlefield. In theory, fighting in a cloud would be just as challenging for him as it would be for his adversaries if he had soot in his eyes. Hiraga was actually blind even with Rado rapidly approaching and Genma at his side. Iruka was finding it challenging to fight the man. Hiraga fought aggressively with shuriken and moved like a dervish, kicking up black barriers with his war fan. Iruka's shoulder already had one, splitting the bone in two and causing blood to flow from the wound. Rado yelled, "Does he have any weaknesses?" and pulled a shuriken out of the air before it fell gracefully beneath the trajectory of another one. "I'm blind, not deaf." Hiraga shot back glumly. His voice seemed to be from somewhere close to Iruka, and it was unusually high. Ventriloquism was another of the man's skills, so that did not guarantee his real position. Rado wondered if Shibi's beetles could smell humans as he used his short sword to block a kunai's slash. It appeared that the answer was yes, but not in a practical sense. Knowing that Shibi was the most dangerous of their quartet, Hiraga was focusing solely on him. Hiraga was their current issue, but outside another Chuunin radioed Anbu about a wave of spiders fleeing the forest of death as he considered his target with a killer's eye. Rado automatically muffled the sound of his footsteps, trying to blend in as much as possible. He figured having another Jonin by their side and making loud noises would help. Ninjas hated people who were trained to fight blind. Guy yelled, "Dynamic entry," and struck the smokescreen with all the delicacy of a sledgehammer. Even though Hiraga almost missed the first kick, Guy's blow was powerful enough to turn him around. Guy quickly recovered from the Sand Jonin's counterattack, which involved a burst of air that knocked him off balance. From there, Guy and Hiraga started a tortuously slow game of cat and mouse while Iruka, Genma, and Rado slowly retreated from the cloud. For a few seconds, the three of them stood there aimlessly, listening to Hiraga's deadpan retorts and Guy's witty banter while scanning the area for Shibi. The spiders then launched an attack. When Anko saw Tsukumo and Dan's graves open, he wasted no time. As he gradually left Kakashi and Assume behind, she shot off like a bullet, running for Orochimaru. The pale man flew through the streets of Konoha, avoiding detection amid the chaos and fear he had brought about as Konoha gradually won a Pyrrhic victory. Anko witnessed street fighting and deaths while cannon fodder faced the Inuzuka and Hyuga clans. Aburame Shibi was engaged in combat with a nearby trio of Suna Anbu. Despite his indirect approach, Orochimaru appeared to have a specific destination in mind. He occasionally threw an explosive tag into a battle to aid or impede his own forces, cutting under bridges and over buildings. Anko recalled a statement he had made when they were still together. Regardless of the direction, he enjoyed being the wind that turned the windmill. Although some genin had taken refuge in the western wing, the Hokage's home was all but empty. Without pausing, Orochimaru killed the four of them by smashing through the window. Anko didn't either, but she slowed down enough to spot an academy girl's face. She thought sardonically that none of this was making her like him. It was challenging to follow her former sensei through the winding maze of hallways, but it was made easier by the peculiar opening in the wall where he had decided to change his mind and burst through. Anko was starting to question whether he had slowed down to match her fastest sprint when he suddenly stopped. Anko was smart enough to attach her feet to the ground, but the sudden change in speed almost broke her ankles. With the token Anbu guard dead and the warding Fuinjutsu ripped to pieces, Orochimaru stood just inside a huge oaken door. Orochimaru said into the silence, "Come now, you really thought that I planned a full-scale attack Konoha on a petty whim? If I wished you all dead, I would have hired Deidara, or one of those Iwa ninja who love their explosions. No, the only reason I'm here, and the only reason I wished to become Hokage, is in his room." Anko realized she knew this room with a growing sense of horror. A few weeks prior, Naruto had glanced at an article in her file that contained it. Hokage passed the treasure down to his successor. The seal's scroll. Orochimaru used the kusanagi to cut the chest that held the scroll in half. Its vessel was destroyed, but a thick roll of parchment paper flopped out unfazed. He carefully lifted it and slung it over his shoulder, fastening it with a thin cord that served as a sash. Senju Hashirama went to great lengths to seal away the greatest techniques of the world. He continued idly. As part of the Treaty of Kizo Summit, a great many things that were commonplace during the era of warring states were labeled forbidden. The shadow clone technique, for instance, and the Shirokajima no Jutsu. As time went on, different jutsu were added, like the Nidame Mizukage's famous unnamed Sweden jutsu. Your point being that dangerous things need to be kept away from people? Yeah, for once I might have to agree with you, Anko replied. Now drop the scroll. My point? Goodness, if the Kage Bunshin is a Genjutsu, Why is it used so commonly within Konoha? Orochimaru replied. This scroll isn't so difficult to steal, or so I've heard. Didn't the ninja with the worst grades at the academy get his hands on it? He didn't learn any Genjutsu, just the Kage Bunshin, said Anko. And therein lies the hypocrisy, Orochimaru shot back. First it was forbidden, now it's a B-ranked ninjutsu. What's worse is that Sensei Dearest apparently didn't place any value on its security. Do you see Genin breaking into the Raikage's villa and taking his scroll of seals? No, because he has competent guards and a police force. He also doesn't have any crazy, murderous, psychotic, evil bastard missing ninja fucking with his village. Anko screamed. Kaiten. Hano Sume no Jutsu. On the second and third knuckles of her hands, 2 points of fire emerged. They rippled with blue and lengthened downward to form flaming spikes. Her skin would turn black in a few minutes, but that was enough time to murder Orochimaru and seize the scroll, potentially turning into a hero in the process. Indeed, Naruto was slated to serve as the Godem Hokage. Anko slashed at Orochimaru's throat with a battle cry that sounded as hollow as despair. She had run out of the smoke pellets that typically went with the head on assaults she liked, but it didn't really matter in this case. Anko's fire went through the smaller half of the chest, and Orochimaru's Kawarimi pushed him back 2 meters on impact. It broke apart, dividing the half in two. The Kusanagi was raised to her throat by Orochimaru. Flatly, come now, I trained you better than that, he expressed. Back straight, bend your front knee slightly more than your back knee, toes parallel, and it's all in the hips. Anko stepped out, blocked the sword with her arm bracers, and kicked Orochimaru in the face while yelling incredibly offensive names at him. With a terrifying crunch, his head snapped back, 2 vertebrae cracking from the kick's force. Unexpectedly, his free hand sprang up and caught her ankle. Orochimaru's head slid back to its mooring, and his blood vessels and nerve endings reconnected with a slimy sound. He smiled as his chin returned to its natural position. He muttered, if only you knew. The things they hide from you in these villages, the lies they tell you, who knows, maybe your next Hokage won't be completely inept, however much of a long shot that is. Orochimaru grabbed her wrist with the crossguard of his sword and tossed it aside as Anko stabbed him in the chest with a summoned claw. She jerked her leg away from Orochimaru and staggered back, almost collapsing. She trembled with anger and patted herself down, looking for weapons. Nothing. Orochimaru asked naively, looking for those, and gestured to a short distance away where a tangled heap of metal, plastic, and extra clothing was lying. Her radio unit was also inside, which made Anko's heart sink. Without any support, facing the scourge of her life one-on-one was the worst thing she could think of. She started formulating a plan to hopefully destroy the scroll, herself, and possibly Orochimaru in the process, bracing herself for the worst. Take this, you lunatic bastard. A voice that was familiar to the speaker cried. Orochimaru and Anko both turned inquisitively. A bright orange blur rushed into the room, followed by the more subdued Sakura and Tenten, and used a sword to decapitate the startled Orochimaru. Just a few minutes prior, Tenten had woken up to the sound of a terrified Sakura shaking her shoulders as Kabuto unleashed his formidable Genjutsu. Bleeding, the girl with the pink hair said, holy crap, what do we do? The Jonin are all and Hokage-sama is dead. What on earth? Tenten gave her a slap that, in her opinion, was the most effective method of sobering up someone who was afflicted by excessive input. Sakura sat motionless for a few seconds, as she had predicted, then shook her head and fell back into her chair. Sorry, she said in apology, I guess we should start waking up everyone else. Tenten said politely, think nothing of it, and they all went ahead to wake up Choji, Shikamaru, and Kiba in an unkind manner. Neji's arm was still sore that the Genjutsu had little effect on him, and Shino and Naruto remained stubbornly unconscious. The 6 of them looked puzzledly at Shino and Naruto together. I don't think we can wake Shino up, Kiba abruptly responded. That Genjutsu made all of us fall asleep, but Kakaichu are supposed to be immune to Genjutsu. I see, Shikamaru thought, adopting Kiba's reasoning. It must have triggered some kind of chemical in Shino that made them think it was time to sleep. They have to spend winters inside their hosts. Kakaichu can't tolerate the cold. Sakura questioned in surprise, Kakaichu hibernate? Why do you think Aburame never go on missions during December or January? Replied Kiba. It's pretty short, sure, but snow turns Shino into dead weight. How do we know he's not just a deep sleeper like Naruto? Replied Choji. In response, Sakura said, Naruto is on a whole other level. We were in wave country, and it took 15 minutes of combat for him to wake up, and even then he was still really out of it. Kept asking for his toothbrush for a few minutes before Sasuke punched him in the face. If we can't wake Shino up, then either the Genjutsu affected his insects or they think it's time to stop coming out. If I interpreted that correctly, then there's only one way to wake Naruto up, Neji said with arrogance. He wound up and used a wide haymaker to slug Naruto's sleeping head before any of them could stop him. Arrgh. Naruto curled his nose and jerked away. Kiba tried to control his laughter as Shikamaru chuckled softly at his anguish. Sakura hurried to wipe his face with his shirt as Neji calmly wiped the blood from his fist. Choji remarked absently, "Geez, I think you broke his nose. Does anyone know how to set a broken nose?" Tenten and Kiba echoed, "I do." But Sakura had already caught on. She knelt on her teammate's chest, grabbed his nose with the spaces between her fingers, and pulled it back into alignment after wrestling him to the ground. Snap! After Naruto's hilariously girly shriek, Sakura continued to hold him motionless while bandaging his nose. The only thing preventing the others from laughing at his situation was how serious it was. Tenten interrupted, trying desperately to ignore Sakura's motherly reprimands as Naruto complained about his nose. "Seriously, do we have a plan?" Shikamaru moaned as Kiba and Choji automatically turned to face him. And he huffed, "Why me? There have to be some genin from Suna here, and they'll be working to coordinate the attack while the Chuunin and Jonin fight our shinobi. We should probably try and take them out." "Got it in one," a fresh voice said. Naruto and Sakura halted their argument just in time to see Temari arrive. Accompanied by Kintsuchi and Kankuro, Shikamaru had to improvise because he didn't have enough time to react. They pulled out 24 exploding tags and threw them at the foreigner's feet in a tight circle. "Hit the deck!" Kiba yelled with the invaders on the other side of a 10-foot wide gash. The ensuing bang was sufficient to shatter the stadium's floor. It was sufficient for the genin to get their asses in gear, but it wouldn't keep them going for very long. While Sakura, Tenten, and Choji took Kin, and Naruto teamed up with himself to take Temari. Shikamaru put Neji in charge of fighting Kankuro alone as the Nara completed outlining their strategy. The blonde Kunoichi waited languidly. Naruto yelled and leapt over the opening. The sudden gust knocked Temari back as his fan swished around, being the fastest of the group. Kiba and Akamaru ran off in search of any surviving Chuunin to provide backup. Neji continued to harass Kankuro after avoiding the hole on his side when faced with 3 genin who were far more violent than Shikamaru. Kin was out of her element and fled, with Choji following. Temari, who was more than capable of defeating Sakura, Tenten, and the chakra-depleted Shikamaru, was left. Alternatively, Naruto. "Kachiyose no jutsu," he moaned, calling forth senshi power. 3 tiny globs broke off and fell to the ground, making Tenten double take at the orange slug. Sakura yelled, "Hey Naya! It's crawling up my leg," and swatted ineffectively at Senshi as it moved up her thigh. Shikamaru didn't seem to care or even notice as Senshi did the same to them, and Tenten stared at it flatly for longer than was absolutely necessary. Temari exclaimed, "Come, so you inherited Tsunadeheim's summoning contract? I thought she was in the land of lightning right now, but it seems our intelligence was mistaken." Tenten's eyes became saucer-sized. She muttered in wonder, "You Tsunade-sama's summoning contract?" Sakura angrily suppressed a shiver but snapped, "Grow up," as Senshi anchored itself to her shoulder. Temari was examining Naruto again, focusing on the knife in his hand and his dead serious face. He said, rolling the kunai between his fingers with ease, "You know about Yondaime Hokage-sama, right? He created the Hiraishin technique, killed 200 Iwa ninja, and nobody dared attack Konoha until the day he died. What the books don't talk about is the Rasengan. It was basically this giant blue ball of chakra that cut through anything. Flak jackets, skin, reinforced steel. It could do it all. There's a reason they talk about the Hiraishin but not the Rasengan, and that's cause all you need to cut is one of these." He raised the knife, held it on the tip of one finger, and then dropped it once more. "Who needs fancy jutsu when you have a little common sense and a blade? I can transfer my chakra to my allies with my summon, and between the 4 of us we're more than a match for you. You're not wearing a flak jacket, and neither are we. Take your best shot, Temari of Suna." With a smile, Temari opened her fan to let in the second full moon. She laughed and said, "Brave words, you psychotic little shit. You're right, big flashy techniques don't work as well as subtle jabs and smokescreens. It's also true that you stand a decent chance of killing me. I should know. I've killed before and I know how easy it is. The difference between us is how good we are. I'm one of the greatest ninja to walk through the gates of Suna. You see this fan? This is the Sakura Tessin, wielded by my mother Kurora and her mother before her. Do you think you can match me?" "Let's find out," agreed Naruto. A tense silence fell as Temari backed away from the opening unconsciously. Tenten's hand moved to the scar on her back, where Temari's fan had ripped the skin away from her ribs in a rectangle. "The best ointment, according to her father, was the blood of your enemies." Even though it was still a little sore, Temari let out a whoop of joy as she leapt over the opening and started to chase them away with broad strokes of her war fan. Sakura muttered, "Megan. Jubaku Satsu," in an attempt to gain access to Temari's chakra network. Like a fish swimming through a net, the Genjutsu slid right over her. Sakura had trained long enough to see the telltale signs of someone who had learned to automatically disregard Genjutsu, but it appeared that her situational awareness was helping. Although it was a rather uncommon ability, it seriously harmed her. The only person who could force a Genjutsu on Temari was a Jonin. Kurenai's stealth would be her only option. Shikamaru wasn't quite sure what to do. He only had enough chakra to pin her for a moment or two, but it was returning quickly, injected straight from the slug attached to his shirt. Fortunately, that was all he needed before Naruto or Tenten inserted a sharp object into her with only the second stage accessible. Temari's fan was able to confuse them all at once with much greater ease than she did during her match with Tenten. She had more training in actual combat techniques than he did, and he only realized later that her strength was fighting several opponents. He yelled, "Surround her!" Tenten and Naruto positioned themselves on her far side. Sakura hung back behind him, while Shikamaru remained in front of her. Temari opened her fan to the third tier, her smile turning bestial. She exclaimed, "Kuchiyose no jutsu." Sakura wanted to cover her ears with her hands when Naruto said something, but it was too late because her demonic little rodent had already left. Because of its blinding speed, Shikamaru could not remember much about it, but he did remember that it was faster than any human could ever hope to be, that it served Temari without wavering, and that it carried a curved blade that was as tall as it was long. Taking these things into consideration, he evaluated the situation and changed the plan. He yelled, "Scatter!" and Tenten aimed her shuriken as Naruto blinked to higher ground. Kamatari was already racing toward Sakura when a gust of wind blew the unfortunate projectiles back to their source. Albeit innocuously, she launched a barrage of kunai that held it at bay until Shikamaru could close in, displaying a battle savvy not evident prior to her performance at the Chuunin exams. He grunted, "Kagemain no jutsu," and used his shadow to bring the sickle weasel to heel without any hesitation. Sakura went up to the weasel and cut its neck open. Its spine was pierced by her kunai, but the wound was deep enough to quickly end Temari's summon. Temari was preoccupied with Naruto and Tenten when she saw Sakura's hand descend, but it was already much too late. She screamed angrily, "Kamaitachi no jutsu," as a tornado of cutting force rushed in front of her. Sakura leapt out of the tornado's path as Kamaitachi's body vanished in a puff of smoke. Kiba briefly surprised Tenten by running back in with a big, cumbersome plastic radio clamped to his head. Tenten's heart fell as he ran, gesturing wildly at it. They had radios. Suna Ninja, the only thing they needed Genin for was. She muttered, "They're a distraction." They were well distracted, but she wasn't sure what the distraction was for. After shrugging, Temari leapt acrobatically over one of Naruto's punches and landed slightly behind him. As Temari started teaching Tenten and Sakura again, Shikamaru said, "Naruto-san, now would be an excellent time to use that red chakra," with a hint of worry in his voice. After giving him a disbelieving glance, Naruto shook his head and glanced around. Naruto paused behind the Kagemain no Jutsu's bulwark and whispered, "Can you take her?" There was still enough chakra to go around, even though he was getting a little low. Shikamaru thought about how the sun and shadows were angled. "I suppose," he uttered gradually. "I take it you want to do something more productive?" Naruto concurred, saying, "Orochimaru dies tonight. I'll leave you two lovebirds together, Shika-kun." Muttered, "So troublesome." Sakura and Tenten turned and ran toward Naruto at his signal. Temari looked on in confusion as three of her four opponents departed as if a demon were following them, leaving only the slothful one watching her like a hawk. He rolled on the balls of his feet with his hands buried deep in his pockets. To mark her best estimate of his maximum reach, she pressed her fan into the ground and drew a line. She then took a seat. Shikamaru was on the verge of asking her what she was doing, but he refrained from doing so due to the spark in her eyes. She said, "Don't ruin this," sounding so much like Yoshino that he chose to keep quiet and protect her for the moment. The arena's sick bay, which was only 40 meters away, was packed with medical personnel. Yakushi Kabuto was at his best, and there had already been 4 deaths, including the Sandaime Hokage. He pretended to be the unit's head medic by using henge to make him look like a man in his late 30s. Sarutobi's body was bare from the waist up, while Izuki Yugo's was covered by a white sheet over to the right in an attempt to lower spirits. Kabuto had set up the dead man's face to be visible. They took in Shinobi, who had mainly minor wounds, but by the time he was finished, the healing process had sped up by about 3 times. Those waiting for transfusions were left with nothing more than a saline solution, as IVs were secretly switched around. Weeks would pass before they reached their best health again, and Konoha was losing money in the process. A junior medic said, "Sir, shouldn't we autopsy Hokage-sama? He looks fine, but we haven't checked liver temp or done a blood test yet." As the younger woman stammered an apology and returned to applying triage, Kabuto snapped, grinning inwardly, "And take time away from treating men with breath in their lungs?" Before they were permitted to view the body, He needed some time to himself with it. Covering your tracks was the first rule of stealth. He started to prepare a variety of unconventional tools that would make any civilian physician scoff, but something stopped him. The vital signs of Uchiha Sasuke were rapidly declining. Hitaki Tsukumo was a person Jiraiya detested. The man was a Konoha legend, the kind who, unlike Tsunade, did not inherit greatness but rather attained it like Orochimaru. To his embarrassment, Jiraiya had never defeated the man in a sparring match because he had passed away before the Toad Sage had a chance to fully establish himself. Tsukumo, however, was a formidable foe due to his limitless chakra and regeneration abilities. The white light chakra saber was lost on a bloody field somewhere, but he even carried an imitation of it. He must have really gone all out for his former teammate. Asuma and Kakashi were engaged in combat with Kato Dan not far away. Dan was almost as unstoppable as Minato himself, so Jiraiya was kind of relieved he didn't have to battle him himself. His signature technique was akin to the Shintenshin no Jutsu, but it protected him behind an intangible veil while solidifying his soul just enough to allow him to kill. He typically fought behind Tsunade herself, of course, to protect his body, but this time he simply refused to die. Asuma and Kakashi alternated between protecting themselves from a spirit and frantically stabbing and burning the corpse in the hopes that it would return to its dead state. Actually, this was exactly the kind of thing that Orochimaru enjoyed. Gordian knots of steel, impossible to solve situations, and several sadistic decisions. Grateful that he had taken the time to maintain his taijutsu over the years, Jiraiya stifled a grunt as Tsukumo kicked him in the diaphragm. Kurenai Yuihi was arguing nearby with Anbu Agent Cat and his group, who were reportedly the best experts in Fuinjutsu. Besides him, Jiraiya would have told them to move quickly, but he was becoming exhausted by Tsukumo's lightning-style nintaijutsu. One lightning strike from Tsukumo's fingertips might kill his frogs before they could return, so Jiraiya dared not call them forth, but that didn't mean he was above fighting dirty in a matter of minutes. Seals with symptoms varying from paralysis to diarrhea to heart attack were scattered across the rooftop. Jiraiya was as eager as the next guy to watch Tsukumo lose control of his bowels during a fight, but the last one's worth was questionable. Even though Tsukumo was a glorified zombie, he was still effectively kicking Jiraiya in the ass. Tsukumo had been reduced to half his usual speed and had started throwing lightning bolts as if they were becoming obsolete, only closing if he had the opportunity to kill him. Jiraiya questioned whether Orochimaru had set up the Hitaki to specifically target him. Otherwise, it would have been commendable that the tall man tried to char him to a crisp with such unwavering determination. Naruto, of all people, interrupted his thoughts, and Sakura and Tenten followed closely behind. Naruto was talking animatedly over his shoulder as the other two nodded, and the three of them were running at speeds Jiraiya knew they couldn't achieve. He parted his lips to keep them from continuing the fight, but Naruto was heading straight for them. The events that followed were nearly unbelievable. Tsukumo, as expected, ignored Tenten's small, spherical explosive. When he threw it at him, he was unable to move because of the shrapnel that was thrown into his forearm. By the ensuing bang, Tsukumo removed the biggest shard without showing any emotion, only for it to transform into a smoke puff. The imitation white light chakra saber was thrown into the air above Tsukumo, where the laughing Naruto caught it mid-leap and continued running, and it reappeared in Tsukumo's other hand after Tenten gave a grateful whistle. They took off running once more. Henge was used by Naruto's Kage Bunshin to make Henge appear as shrapnel. This trick would not fool a living shinobi, but it could easily dazzle a dead man, as Jiraiya would later discover. This came after Dan was trapped inside Agent Cat's Anbu mask and Tsukumo was sealed inside a nearby tea kettle, but all he saw at the moment was Naruto's ridiculously arrogant smile. Naruto concluded that Orochimaru had gone north after the Anbu searched the area. Naruto suspected that the man had targeted one of the few buildings of interest in the far north, but the black-clad men were being meticulous, looking everywhere. There would be nothing in the academy that would be especially useful to a man like the Snake Sanin, leaving only the Hokage's home. Naruto, his friends barely behind him, followed the sounds of Orochimaru's malevolent gloating, flipped the strange sword he had taken from the Kakashi-looking man into a backwards grip, and followed up his Anko-style entrance with a ferocious throat slash. There had never been any chance for Orochimaru. People generally avoided discussing Sasuke's family with him. He didn't really care, but he was aware that they were being held back by tact or fear of his response. To be fair, his parents were a little sensitive about the topic, and he had always harbored feelings for his cousin Shisui, but their main concern was Itachi. People who were familiar with the story were aware that Sasuke and Itachi had a close relationship and were practically inseparable until Itachi murdered his entire extended family, leaving Sasuke as the only survivor who was psychologically damaged. Sasuke was more knowledgeable than them. They had never been close, and Itachi had never been a very caring older brother. Your personal life was often disrupted by Anbu assignments, which kept you away from home for weeks at a time on risky and sinister business apart from him. Itachi had no interest in any of the Uchiha. Itachi had always been a little enthralled with his younger brother, and Sasuke would readily confess this to himself. If nothing else, he had not killed him and his parents together. Nevertheless, Itachi frightened everyone to no end. Though equally terrifying, it was the exact opposite of the fear Orochimaru evoked in Leaf Ninja. A highly skilled and exemplary ninja suddenly turning against his will without any prior notice or explanation, not a good reason. Anyway, in his darkest moments, Sasuke was tempted to think that Itachi had actually killed off the Uchiha because of the justification he provided that evening, and he occasionally questioned whether or not a hidden agenda would improve or worsen the situation. When Konoha had come across Uchiha Itachi, he had always been able to kill or avoid everyone involved. He had already been given the uncommon and somewhat disgusting title of Flea on Sight in some countries' bingo books. The general consensus was that only Hitaki Kakashi had a snowball's chance of killing him in a Kaiden jutsu, and that Might Guy was the only one who had even managed to hit him thus far, although Kakashi never addressed this. Sasuke had a sneaking suspicion that any altercation between the two would be extremely close. Sasuke had been consumed by gloomy feelings all of his waking hours. Fear, not anger, as the typical acquaintance would have thought. Even though he was no slouch himself, Sasuke was well aware that Itachi was a prodigy and that he would never have fought Hyuga Neji in such a poor manner. The lone survivor of Uchiha trained until his limbs felt like jelly and focused only on killing his brother because, if he didn't, he would be a walking corpse. His days were numbered, regardless of how long he was able to keep Itachi at bay or how long he could hide behind Sarutobi or Kakashi. Itachi was forced to accept that unachievable challenge if he wanted to fight. Sasuke typically assumed that Naruto would die, but occasionally he wondered what would happen if Itachi had vowed to kill him instead. Though perhaps unflattering, the evaluation of his teammates' skill was equally accurate despite Naruto's immense chakra reserves and limitless physical endurance. The blonde's greatest triumph to date was surviving Haku's attack. Sasuke was not doing any better. Neji had put him down with pathetic ease, and unless something happened, it would take a lesser prodigy to remove him. It was a nearly humorous idea. From a distance, he could sense the effort his heart was making to sustain him. Every third or fourth beat seemed to falter a lot, slowing his blood to molasses speed and making his thoughts sluggish. But even as he died slowly, his mind was as sharp as ever, and he had to think about what was keeping him aware. The number of people in Konoha who might be using that kind of technique would be limited because it would require accuracy and a lot of power. Sasuke, you were always the dumb one, a voice growled. Sasuke heard it behind him, but when he turned, all that was visible was darkness. You consider the how, but not the why of the world, it continued. You seek to survive, but you've yet to live. You lack purpose, skulking in your brother's shadow like some cockroach, fearful of the day he steps on you. Are you a Uchiha? Or are you a mouse with Sharingan? Even though the voice was making fun of him, Sasuke was more intrigued by the sound. It echoed from all around him, as if it were coming from a cave. Therefore, it wasn't a Genjutsu unless the sending's artistic intervention was absent, but the voice's pervasiveness indicated that it wasn't coming from any vocal cords. He noted, "You're not here," he spoke slowly, and his voice sounded as echoey as the enigmatic intruders. Sasuke-kun, have they taught you nothing? Has Kakashi-san been filling your head with tripe? How could I be anywhere but here? You cannot see me, therefore I must not be real. How absurd. The voice took on a physical form as it concluded its speech. The man had black hair that hung down his sides and back like the quills of a porcupine. He was dressed in the black garb of a taijutsu master, although his feet were exposed and the garment was torn in multiple places. One eye had been stabbed out, and the other was the Sharingan with 3 tomo. The empty eye socket, which leaked blood and remained open despite being empty, almost had more gravity than the world's most deadly Dojutsu. He appeared to be a one-eyed clone of his father overall. Sasuke mumbled, "So Itachi didn't kill all of us?" The man let out a frustrated sigh. "You are an idiot, Sasuke, and that is why Itachi succeeded where you fail. Not only do you never look underneath the underneath, you frequently base your decisions on surface appearances. No matter, sooner or later someone will correct you. I only hope you do not die in the process. You think I'm a Uchiha simply because I have eyes like yours?" Kakashi was living, breathing evidence that the Sharingan could be taken. Sasuke realized that the process required more than an hour of intricate nerve reattachment and as much chakra as an experienced medic could generate. A challenging task enough without an eyeball in the way. Even if a village had the eyes in the first place, implanting them was too risky for a Chuunin of Kakashi's level and not worth it for anyone else due to the likelihood of the chakra pathways being destroyed or the Sharingan being punctured. He was therefore most likely Uchiha. The moment he reached that conclusion, the man smiled. Compared to Uchiha Fugaku, he had a far warmer expression, but that only served to express predatory interest rather than icy disappointment. He said, "You learn," as if he could read Sasuke's mind. "Good, tell me, Uchiha Sasuke, what do you know about the Sharingan?" Sasuke thought about the query from the ease of use of Genjutsu to the notorious capacity to replicate any technique. The legend surrounding his eyes was widespread throughout the continent. The extent of Sasuke's knowledge was probably the only thing this stranger wished to test, and it just wouldn't work. "The village owns the secrets of the Sharingan," he said, although the words were difficult for him to say. The satisfaction of excluding the other Uchiha made the effort worthwhile. "True, unfortunately very well. I will tell you with one tomo. A Sharingan can visualize chakra and view the world with more detail than even a Byakugan with 2. Direct eye contact can set up a complicated Genjutsu with little effort with 3. The Sharingan commits everything it sees to memory with perfect accuracy, which is the basis of the Uchiha ability to copy jutsu or combat styles. However, the Sharingan is a Kekkei Genkei, and like all Kekkei Genkei, it is subject to evolution. Do you have anything worthwhile to share? Or are you just going to speak empty words until I die? I have better things to think about during my last moments than what might be, as according to what may be a figment of my imagination." The tall man gave a nod, straight to the point. "This is what I expect from you. As for being imaginary, I can only say otherwise, but I suspect you will soon believe. As to your first question, there is a way you might yet survive the Hyuga's Juken strike." "Oh, as a Kekkei Genkei, the Sharingan's influence is not confined to your eyes. Parts of your brain and chakra system are affected as well, producing the optimal conditions under which the Dojutsu can work. Men like Hitaki-san are unsuitable for the Sharingan, which makes his use of it all the more remarkable. In terms of Uchiha, you might think of them as made for the Sharingan, rather than the other way around." This was definitely logical. The Hyuga were genetically distinct from the majority of humans, and the Uchiha were descended from them. Sasuke battled a wave of nausea and darkness that threatened to knock him out as his heart lurched once more. "You remember, I hope, what Itachi last said to you. The Mangekyo Sharingan is the final stage of the Sharingan's maturation, one which most Uchiha never reach." Sasuke thought back to that evening. It wasn't difficult. The incidents had burned like a fire into his memory. "When you have eyes like mine, then come and stand before me," he murmured. Quite like the first form, the last also requires a certain condition to activate. Itachi's happened only a few days before the massacre. "You mean Itachi really did kill Shisui-san? I thought it was suicide?" The man laughed. Sasuke, just when my opinion of your intelligence was starting to change, did you really think a ninja could drown? Itachi merely waited until they were alone and ensnared your cousin's mind with a Genjutsu before holding him under in the Naka River. The ultimate act of bloodlust and hatred awoke the last stage of the Sharingan, and with it he slew the greatest challenge to his supremacy. Sasuke thought, he killed his best friend. He would only want me to follow suit if he wanted me to acquire that kind of power, whatever it is. However, why? Itachi was clever, but he failed to understand the true source of our greatest power. The man replied, "If you wish to one day surpass your brother and take revenge for your clan, you have a few minutes in which to determine how he attained the Mangekyo Sharingan and do so for yourself. Otherwise, you will probably die. Consider this a test of your worth." Sasuke was already deep in thought when the man waited for a moment. Then Sasuke was alone. The body of Orochimaru struck the roof with a false sense of finality. Then it burst into motion. White snakes tearing through the stomach, piercing the wrists and ankles, and racing out of the neck. Anko yelled, "Get them!" And she, Naruto, Sakura, and Tenten started hurling shuriken and kunai as quickly as they could. Even without aiming, any projectile was certain to skewer at least one of the numerous snakes. When Anko called forth Uedokuna, the enormous viper quickly ate as many of the escaping reptiles as she could while hissing with cannibalistic delight. But there were too many, and soon they were escaping their grasp and into the Konoha area. Anko attempted to barbecue the remaining snakes using a few fire jutsu, but dozens of them managed to get away without endangering the village. Anko dropped to one knee, trying to ignore the throbbing in her curse seal while acutely aware of her low chakra level. It wasn't normal for Orochimaru's death to release so much natural chakra. Chakra sensors consistently reported that anyone who wasn't a jinchuriki died like a candle going out. There were several reasons why Anko was almost positive Orochimaru wasn't a jinchuriki, but none of them were positive. Tenten said, "I don't understand," with hesitation. "Who was that Kunoichi? Was she using a Habi Bunshin?" "I think it was Orochimaru," Sakura replied, and, I'm not really sure what just happened." Anko moaned, "Believe me, we did not just kill my sensei." Trying not to trip, she forced herself to stand. "I think he was just controlling that body, like a puppet or something." "That death released loads of chakra," was Naruto's observation. "I dunno, if he really experimented with immortality like you said, maybe it would make sense that he wasn't totally human anymore. If he was experimenting with immortality, then logic suggests that he's probably not actually dead, Sakura said, remember when those two missing ninja from Kiri tried to kill Kakashi with razor wire? Sensei wasn't actually dead, but it sure looked like it. Would Orochimaru be any easier? If Kakashi hadn't interrupted, they most likely would have continued in that manner. Kakashi was right behind the purple-haired man whose body crashed into the ground nearby. After a moment's hesitation, a ghostly image of the unconscious man appeared without any hand seals. Kakashi's right hand blazed into the chidori, and he used the assassination technique to charge at the ghost like a blade. The ghost nearly missed the dodge, but his eyes widened just in time, and he shot back in a shower of glitter impossibly fast. Kakashi followed, and the two of them vanished across the rooftops. Shortly after, Asuma came up with a smoldering cigarette between his teeth and a body slung over his shoulder. Stunned by the display of power, the four of them watched the epic battle in silence. Asuma-sensei, why is Kakashi-sensei fighting Kato Dan? Replied Tenten. Sakura and Naruto chanted, who? According to Asuma, Dan-sama was Tsunade-sama's fiancé. He was the odds-on favorite for the position of Yondaime Hokage until he died. That was the last straw for Tsunade, and she left the village a few weeks later. His signature ability is the Reika no Jutsu, which allowed him to project his soul as a sort of living ghost. He has the most recorded kills of any shinobi in Konoha's history, but that's probably because nobody ever bothered to count Minato-sama's corpses. The real advantage to the technique was that it allowed him to avoid harm while sowing chaos in the enemy's ranks. His voice carried a certain deference that Naruto only heard when the Yondaime or the legendary Sannin were mentioned. Asuma certainly respected this Dan. Whoever he was, Anko's as well, but she was more adept at hiding it. Sakura jerked her thumb over at the lifeless body and asked, if he's dead, why is he here? And why aren't we killing his body? When Asuma said, Orochimaru is using the Edo Tensei. It was Senju Tobirama's ultimate technique, Anko blusterily said. With it, he can bring anyone back to life, but it requires a human sacrifice. Orochimaru is using it to keep our most powerful ninja at bay. The vessels are immortal, and it looks like they have unlimited chakra. Even a genin would be dangerous, but right now I would have said that Dan-san was unstoppable. What gives, Asuma-kun? Asuma dropped the body to the roof after flipping it onto his shoulder. Naruto was shocked to see Kakashi's face. He was perspiring profusely, and both of his eyes were closed but uncovered. Sakura guessed, he must have copied the jutsu that Dan is using. He doesn't look like a ghost because he's using a genjutsu? Yeah, he must have gotten the drop on Dan if the guy didn't realize he'd been copied, Naruto replied. As the two fighters went by, Kakashi repeatedly pressed his ghostly lightning technique into Dan, severely impairing his movement, and despite the fact that he was under control, everyone could see the expression of undisguised pain on his face. Naruto noticed Neji and Kankuro on another rooftop as they passed. Both of Kankuro's puppets, one human-shaped, the other resembling a flying worm, were spitting senbon so quickly that the steel glints were a constant stream of death and sunlight. The Hyuga was advancing relentlessly despite the confusion caused by the spinning, and Neji was using his Kaden, a blue dome of chakra that was whipping the attacks aside innocuously. On the streets beneath them, a black hurricane had nearly flooded Konoha's stores and residences with dirt. Anbu and other ninja on the roofs with shortbows and thrown weapons were guided by the loud screams and the occasional flash of green from Guy as he battled Asuna Junin. Occasionally, a masked shinobi would shoot an arrow, killing a snake or spider that was hiding in the shadows. A Konoha ninja was suddenly flung out of the shadows and pinned high up on a rooftop through his gut when someone began firing back. A huge yellow arrow had been thrown at him with such force that it propelled him almost 10 feet into the air. To Asuma, Naruto whispered, "How do we stop this guy?" "We wait," said Asuma. "A sealing team will be here any minute." Jiraiya was having some trouble getting Tsukumo to fall into the trap he had set up. After some time, the tea kettle was ready with enough holding Fuinjutsu to hold a small demon in check. It was sufficient to hold one man, including Hitaki Tsukumo, but Tsukumo was more independent than he appeared to be and was able to dodge every melee attack Jiraiya aimed at him with the intention of sealing. Jiraiya's anger was growing as a result of the lightning and the impending danger to the rest of Konoha. A detached voice said, 8 trigrams, 168 strikes, and Kankuro of the Sand fell to the ground along the line of their battle. His 2 puppets landed too far away for him to use, even if he had summoned the chakra to grab them, and he fell flat on his back so violently that something cracked menacingly. His opponent was knocked unconscious when Hyuga Neji leapt down beside him, leaned over, and slammed his head against the cobblestone. He switched with a chair from an outdoor cafe using Kawarimi, which absorbed the lightning from Tsukumo's attack, and positioned himself behind the zombie in a gentle fist-fighting stance without shifting his gaze. "Jiraiya-sama," he said in recognition, "do you require assistance?" Jiraiya commanded, Piss off, this guy's out of your league. Neji drew back to the rooftops to fight somewhere else, but his eyes narrowed. A red-headed Oto Kunoichi was surrounded by the entire Inuzuka clan not far from Konkuro's defeat at 10 paces, the clan matriarch, Inuzuka Sume, her children, Hana and Kiba, and their ninkin surrounded her in a circle. A lesser opponent would have been brought to her knees by the aura of killing intent that the other 14 Chuunin of the clan were projecting, along with their beasts, as they moved just outside that range. "Is that the best you got?" Tayuya asked with a dismissive sneer. "Kuchoyose no jutsu?" 3 building-sized doki materialized all around her, one between her and Sume and the other 2 outside, where they instantly crushed 2 poor Inuzuka. The inner one swung its club at Sume in response to a harsh whistle from Tayuya's flute. The skulls of the 2 deceased ninja were casually crushed as their ninkin clung to their legs. Sume commanded, "Gatsuga," and she and Kuromaru hurried the closer ogre. The 2 of them turned around and charged back, but the beast easily repelled the attack. The other monsters devoured the Inuzuka, and Tayuya's flute gave them another order that caused them to ingest enormous, translucent worms with several maws that joined the attack. After recovering swiftly from her previous experience with Orochimaru, Hana fell to her knees and leapt, followed by her 3 ninkin. Kiba remained and observed Tayuya moved across the battlefield with the elegance of a dragonfly, while his older sister fought rashly, which was entirely inconsistent with her composed demeanor. She effortlessly dodged into the throng of their cousins with a skillful shunshin whenever one of the Haimaru dogs approached. Somehow, the ogre battling his mother was also winning. It was simply nonsensical. Genjutsu. He inhaled deeply. Their clan was losing coordination due to the auditory genjutsu of the music. Tayuya must have thought Hana's attacks were awkward, and the other members of his clan were too preoccupied with their own conflicts to realize that their senses were being messed with. Kiba was reluctantly impressed because Inuzuka typically had strong senses that could pick up on even the smallest deviations from reality, making them fairly resistant to genjutsu. Unfortunately, Tayuya was just as skilled as Kurenai and could not use the standard disruption technique to break the genjutsu. "Well, shit, this is gonna suck." Akamaru, as his master pulled out a kunai and drove it into the flesh of his forearm, the dog let out a whine. The genjutsu was broken, but blood spattered his shirt and cold pain shot through his skin. Kiba was able to see every mistake his clan made during battles. Because of the slight shift in perspective, he couldn't interrupt any of them without endangering their lives, and there was too much noise for him to yell a warning. He thus took the only action that came to mind and went straight after Tayuya. After cleaning his hands, Enbu Agent Cat got to his feet. His mask lay on the ground a few feet away, and the rest of his team stood far away. Kato Dan's soul had been imprisoned within, and his body was essentially worthless without a soul. Naruto examined the ANBU's face. Aside from the fact that he was an assassin, he appeared to be a teacher or an accountant, completely normal and somewhat civilian. Kakashi gave him a thumbs up and then stopped the technique. After Cat saluted him, he suddenly sat up and started coughing as the image of Naruto's sensei was drawn back into his body like a vacuum. After battling Zabuza, which had caused him to surpass his threshold for chakra exhaustion, he appeared paler than before. Get Jiraiya," he said with a raspy cough. Asuma calmly said, "Easy," while using one hand to hold Kakashi down. When Agent Cat told Kakashi, "The main fighting force from Suna is retreating, about half of the Oto ninja are dead, mostly taijutsu users with some elemental affinity. Casualties from Konoha are in the 200s, mainly clan members. There was inside information behind this attack." With a grunt, Anko approached the spot where Orochimaru's clothing was on the floor. The kusanagi lay across the scroll of seals, next to the motionless figure of Uedokuna, shredded and useless whether it was stuffed down his throat or belted to his hip. Anko had never seen Orochimaru without it. It was absurd to think that he had simply forgotten, but the fabled sword was on the ground, just waiting to be taken. She took it up. The edges gleamed with the sickly turquoise sheen of deadly poison, and it had a certain weight. "Mine now, bitch." The majority of the Oto ninja died, and the majority of the Suna ninja who were still alive fled 2 hours later, marking the end of the invasion. The logistics office received the last reports on the Konoha casualties. 6 hours later, 199 ninja who are not affiliated with any clan, and 65 clan members, a total of 270 genin, 130 chunin, 6 junin, and 6 tokubetsu junin were present. A single Hokage. With a dejected expression, Nara Shikaku gazed at the papers and wished the lamp above the Hokage's desk was brighter. The smoke from all the cigarettes in the room had left a black pall hanging close to the ceiling, blotting out the light and turning it to gray. An hour ago, Shikaku ran out of cancer sticks, and he found himself fervently hoping for more. "The funeral is in an hour." He raised his head, though it might be more accurate to say that Hinata was hiding behind Shikamaru. Both of them were in the doorway since he was only going to 2 funerals and Sarutobi Hiruzen's wasn't until tomorrow. He didn't inquire as to which one it was. He said, "Ah, Shikamaru-kun," with affection. "Come in, please you too. Hinata-chan, I need to make a decision, and I want as much input as I can get." Despite his obvious deflated state, Shikamaru entered, so did Hinata, grudgingly before the stench stuck to her clothing. She coughed gently and made a futile attempt to wave the smoke away. Muttered, "Let's see," Shikaku said. "There's Jiraiya-sama, Shuza-san, Shibi-san, and Asuma-san. Am I missing anyone?" Shikamaru glanced behind him. "You forgot Hyuga Hiyashi-san." Said Hinata. "What are you doing? And why is my father involved?" According to Shikaku, this village is in a predicament. The daimyo will learn about the invasion by November at the latest. When he does, he has the obligation to instate me as the Godem Hokage. I cannot afford the position at this time, as without me the position of Chuunin commander will sit empty, and I do not hold enough popularity to marshal this village effectively. We cannot afford to use me in that way as of yet, and so a proper godime must be chosen soon. It falls to me to make the official recommendation, but the final decision is between Shuza, Shibi, and Hiyashi. As I said, suggestions for the post are welcome. Hinata cleared her throat, this time more forcefully. She had planned to accompany Shikamaru to visit Kiba, Ino, and Sasuke in the hospital, but this was a crucial choice. Her opinion must have been more important than a visit. She paused to reflect. Slowly, she said, "I do have one idea." After knocking on Anko's apartment door and getting no response, Naruto entered. The apartment was almost deserted. Unlike the last time's mess, after a brief search, it was discovered that everything except traps had been removed from the refrigerator, filing cabinet, closet, and wardrobe. Naruto quickly threw the door shut and dove behind the kitchen table because he didn't have time to disarm the nasty explosive note that was hidden in the refrigerator. The refrigerator was overturned by the blast's force, but nothing else was harmed. Anko, of course, decided to smash through her own window at that precise moment. She sang as she brushed glass fragments from her overcoat. "Ta-da, hey, what gives? You know, ordinarily I would ask why you have an explosion trap in your fridge," Naruto said quietly. "You won't, though." "No, I'm just curious how you eat without destroying your food beforehand. I already know why you trapped your fridge, and it's not just to piss me off. You just came in through the window, so you're worried about intruders from Otogakure Plus. People come in here all the time, and it looks like you were just raided during the invasion. I bet you've got some Ryo stashed in there." "Oh," laughed Anko. "Am I so predictable that even a cute little genin can read my moves in advance? Oh, that's unfortunate. I guess I'll have to step up my game." "No, please. Feel free to remain at your current level of insanity. Don't go trying too hard on my account." "Too late. I feel as if I've been offered a personal challenge. I wonder if Kurenai-chan's handcuffs are still here." Anko had to concede that Naruto's face looked rather cute as it contorted. "Anko-sensei. Why would Kurenai-sensei have handcuffs? Rope was adequate for the typical civilian, while wire or seals were typically used by ninja to restrain shinobi targets. They're for Asuma-kun, silly." After giving that statement some thought, Naruto suddenly understood that Anko was not the most strange Chuunin he had ever met. Actually, the majority of the others, Kakashi, Guy, Zabuza, Jiraiya, and now Kurenai and Asuma, qualified as more strange in one way or another. He opened his mouth to inquire as to why Kurenai's handcuffs would be in Anko's apartment and what Anko might do with them, but he stopped. Answers were not required for certain questions. He went instead to a problem that had been bothering him since the day before. "What happens now?" Anko gave an eye roll, not to sound too dramatic, but this means War Sanagakure can't possibly expect us not to retaliate, not with the Yondaime Kazekage dead. Their jinchuriki are less powerful than the Kyuubi, but the Nine Tails is a special case. Only certain people can hope to effectively contain and use the Kitsune's chakra, and you're not one of them. Most other villages use their jinchuriki as a deterrent, but Konoha doesn't. Naruto said, "I've seen why," alluding to the village's Chuunin as well as his own history. "Yeah, the average demon isn't a match for Jiraiya or Kakashi with Sarutobi-sama in charge. We could afford the luxury of refusing jinchuriki. They lead harsh lives. Kid, the idea isn't popular enough that anybody will risk their skin suggesting it. But after the war all bets are off. The only time we ever had a couple jinchuriki roaming around was under Senju Hashirama, and they were automatically inducted into Anbu." Naruto thought about it. The cage of the village would naturally use jinchuriki on missions where failure was not an option if they possessed the same natural advantages as he and Gaara in terms of strength and chakra production. The benefit of Anbu was anonymity. A jinchuriki could supposedly make friends and lead a somewhat normal life without having an identity, even though he didn't personally know many of them. Anko was the model he looked up to as an adult shinobi who was functioning and had the fewest psychoses. Who's the next Hokage gonna be? Most of us are confused about that, expressed Anko. I think Sarutobi-sama's been in charge for, 50 years? Your lesbian friend would know for sure aside from Yandaime-sama being in charge for 2 years. That's 3 or 4 generations of shinobi under his belt. Add that we just lost so many of our number, and we might be seeing some policy changes around here. I always thought I could be the Godem, Naruto admitted. Sarutobi Gigi was so old. I guess I tricked myself into thinking he'd live forever. If I have to settle for being the Rokudame, that's fine. For a brief moment, Anko could see the shadows surrounding his whisker marks grow darker as he grimaced. But I'm going to take it out of Orochimaru. If that bastard is alive somewhere, I'm going to become the greatest ninja this village has ever seen, and then I'm gonna find him and make him pay. Anko chirped. Nothing like bloody vows of vengeance. Part of a balanced mind, that's what Ibiki-senpai always says when I say that now. There's a funeral wrapping up in a minute, and then Shikaku-sama wants to speak to the Chuunin. Wanna prank them? Hello. Sasuke-san? I need you to open your eyes now? Sasuke's eyes opened. He had nothing on but a paper-thin hospital gown over his pants and an IV taped to his left arm. The sensation that his eyes were melting in their sockets was short-lived. He took a seat. At the foot of his bed stood a physician. He appeared to be a civilian, but he had some noticeable scars. He was looking at Sasuke's chart, but he glanced up for a moment when Sasuke appeared. How are you feeling? Sasuke gave an eye roll. Fine. If you're going to be difficult, Sasuke-san, does anywhere hurt? No. The physician swiftly noted that Sasuke's breathing and pulse were both normal. As he produced a stethoscope, he asked Sasuke to take off the hospital gown so the doctor could see his bare chest. A light fist attack would have produced no results, but it paid to be safe. The doctor said, at this rate, you'll be good to leave in just a minute, with a hint of joy in his voice. We know ninja have a bit of an aversion to hospitals. There are 2 more tests. I want you to use a Genjutsu, just to test the flow of chakra. Ideally we'd have a Hyuga come in and look at you, but everyone with a Byakugan is busy right now. Sasuke created the seals and the smallest flame he could manage without speaking. It mushroomed and billowed out a few inches before vanishing. The physician gave a nod. Last test. I promise your Sharingan, please. When Sasuke's eyes finally responded, it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. All across Konoha, chakra signatures jumped into his line of sight, moving precisely as their owners went about their daily lives. Sasuke saw Naruto and Anko strolling a few kilometers away, a class of academy students in a room with Amino Iruka, and a group of ninja training on the village's south side. Some signatures, like Guy's, which was surprisingly close, and Kakashi's in a downtown restaurant, were almost frighteningly powerful. Sasuke thought he was in the hospital room with Lee. He sobbed because it was so incredible. What? Blood was dripping from beneath Sasuke's eyelids, trickling down his face and collecting at the corners of his mouth. Not exactly tears. Silently, the doctor's mouth moved, but Sasuke's improved vision allowed him to see the words being formed so clearly that he could practically hear them. What the hell? The doctor quickly turned his shocked expression into one of professional interest. He turned his clipboard over and started drawing on the back of the front page. He asked absently, his pen scratching frantically on the page, does the bleeding hurt? Sasuke didn't answer. At least not out loud. He merely waited for the physician to return his gaze, then it was done. Sasuke said softly, put the clipboard down, and the orderly's hands suddenly dropped the clipboard as a reward. Using his metaphysical strength in the Genjutsu, Sasuke forced the man to obey by saying, forget you saw this. Write me up as perfectly healthy. Sasuke got out of bed and picked up the dropped clipboard as the doctor started to fill out a new form. Although the drawing was crude, it was clear that the eyeball depicted was not a typical Sharingan. The doctor had sketched a solid inky dot surrounded by a series of interwoven ovals in red pen. After giving a gratified smile, Sasuke swiftly tore the paper into multiple pieces and turned off his Mangekyo Sharingan. His memory had been permanently marked by those seconds of its activation. Sasuke relived each moment in his mind as though it were happening all over again. The Kekkei Genkei's power was truly formidable, and it resembled the ninjutsu chakra more than a dojutsu or genjutsu. As the Sharingan typically did, Sasuke let a tiny smile spread across his face as he considered Itachi's strength and what he had purchased with Uchiha Shisui's passing. This was how he could bring his clan back together and possibly even murder his brother. Tenten and Neji were seated on stools at the foot of Rock Lee's bed. Somewhere else in the hospital, Lee's blood chemistry test results were being rapidly flipped through by a medic, and the expression on her face made them both want to murder someone. This is simply amazing, Oyone whispered. Your teammate has sustained and survived more compiled physical injuries than any other ninja I've seen. Fractured femur and tibia, numerous shards of bone lacerating the spine, massive blood loss in the initial stages, and there are some proteins in his blood that shouldn't be there by rights. He should have died within the hour. Quite bluntly, Neji asked, can he recover? At the rate he's spending chakra on cellular regeneration, Lee-san will be up by the end of the week. Oyone laughed. As for making a full recovery, that'll be damn near impossible. The main problem is that his spine is severely damaged, and any operation to try and fix it would require almost 10 hours under the knife. That's more than any human being can take without risking infection or complications. Tenten asked, could Tsunade-sama do it? Oyone gave her a disinterested look. Yes, if I may be so bold, what you are proposing is slightly less likely than Orochimaru becoming the Hokage. Tsunade has done no significant medical work in about a decade. Nothing beyond what a country herbalist could accomplish. She is almost certainly out of practice, and besides which she has sworn never to return to Konoha. Neji's forehead wrinkled. Who is the current head of the medical system in Konoha? Oyone gave a snort. The hospital director manages civilian affairs, but the medic nin corps doesn't have a leader right now. There's just nobody qualified for the job. Neji turned to Tenten, and Tenten turned to Neji. They exchanged serious glances. Tenten remarked, so, we need to bring Tsunade back. Gotcha. Lee-san's condition isn't deteriorating, so we do have some time, Neji stated. Her teammate proposed, I'll go get Jiraiya. You'll find guys Sensei? Neji gave a nod, and they vanished from the hospital in 2 puffs of smoke. Oyone gazed down at the unconscious Rock Lee with admiration and sympathy. Your teammates are certainly determined. Lee-san, perhaps you've rubbed off on them. Then Hyuga Hiyashi yelled, we need a new leader now. I am sorry, Jiraiya-sama, but Sanagakure will not wait on your mad quest to bring back Tsunade. Jiraiya yelled back, there is no one else, as his white mane unconsciously bristled with chakra. Nobody but Tsunade can unite this village. Nobody but Tsunade can present the front of strength that we need. Nobody but Tsunade can handle the stress of the job. Sarutobi Sensei should have brought in a Godem Hokage years ago, true, but now we have no choice. I am going to bring her back if it's the last thing I do. Akamichi Shuza firmly stated, surely there's no need to be so dramatic about it, Jiraiya-sama. You're so insistent on retrieving Tsunade, but whenever we offer you the job you seem strangely reluctant. Jiraiya scowled. I can't. It's my duty to appoint the leaders, not to be one. I'm afraid, Shinobi of the Leaf, that at this point Tsunade is our only hope. Aburame Shibi made the question, what about another Chuunin? There are plenty of Enbu agents and other respected shinobi who could potentially defeat another Kage. I'm unsure if that is a suitable metric for determining whether a ninja can be Hokage, but you have yet to suggest another. Jiraiya whispered, fame and impartiality are the 2 most important things. We need someone whose clan, but not extremely so, and we need someone famous. The Godem Hokage needs to already be known to the other elemental nations, and that leaves Tsunade. That leaves Senju Tsunade, Might Guy, and Hitaki Kakashi, Shibi said calmly. Upon correction, dead silence fell as the assembled Chuunin considered the implications of that. Clan leaders, Chuunin, and political figures were gathered as usual, and while there were differing opinions regarding Jiraiya's proposal, the term, guy, was absolutely appalling. Guy got up at that point and sat down in his chair. Jiraiya-sama, he cried out, while I am honored by Shibi-san, I believe in your belief in Tsunade-heim. He seemed to consider what he meant when he said, I will accompany you on your youthful mission and persuade Tsunade-heim to return. All of the ninjas sighed with relief. Unfortunately, it didn't make many decisions, but it did reduce the options to what even a civilian would consider acceptable. In order to break the silence, Shikaku said, I will suggest Hitaki Kakashi. He is not the leader his sensei was, but he holds international respect and may well be the most powerful ninja currently in the village. Kakashi-san also has the necessary command experience and skill in dealing with civilians required for the job. Furthermore, supposing that more suitable candidates come forward in the future, we will appoint him temporary Hokage and amend our choice when Jiraiya-sama and Gai-san return. Shuza said, that's a wonderful idea. Without pausing, we should definitely do that. I concur, Shibi remarked. Why? Of the 3 choices, he is the most logical. Everyone's eyes were on Kakashi, who was reading Icha Icha in the back corner without anyone noticing. After looking up, he resumed reading. He flipped the page and said, Ma, I suppose. Given the lack of alternatives, I agree with Shikaku-san, Hiyashi responded. When will the surprises stop? I too will side with Nara-san, Asuma replied. Kurenai nodded too, although the idea made her look a little queasy. All in favor? Jiraiya inquired wearily. Anko didn't always announce her own arrival by breaking through the window. She spent most of her time discussing a mission that needed the use of doors with the Hokage or another Chuunin. But at the moment, Konoha lacked a Hokage, and she had a list of surprises she hadn't yet revealed to the gullible Konoha shinobi. Unquestionably, there was a certain thrill to startle a group of seasoned murderers with loud noises and ostentatious prestidigitation. However, for this meeting, Anko had Naruto painting the Hokage monument once more while she diverted the other villagers with some explosions as they departed. She thought it was fortunate as well because she couldn't imagine how Naruto would have responded if he had learned that Kakashi was now the Hokage. She almost thought the man was blushing. But the mask made it difficult to tell before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. He said something ambiguous about putting the village's ideals and how he needed to buy more dog food as soon as the forest of hands went down. After apologizing with a few well-placed elbows and hurrying off to find Naruto, she thought, I can't tell if this is a stroke of genius or utter lunacy. Although the short-term arrangement was somewhat of a risky precedent, it was best for Kakashi. Anko could now nag Naruto to extend the contract without feeling bad because Team 7 was officially without a sensei. The blonde didn't exactly keep his nose to the ground when it came to village policy, but the third thing she had to tell Naruto was less well established. When Kakashi deployed them to Wind or Sound Country, he would have to tell him that they were marching to war, which Anko did not particularly enjoy.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.